A worn-out man sprawled on his bed, staring at the ceiling, asking himself why he was still stuck like this. Because 3 years ago, a company took him on as just an ordinary hard worker. Memories slammed into his head how he hawked instant weight loss products, then smugly told them it was safer not to go digging for answers. He finally realized he was fooling everyone and himself, and nothing sounded more terrifying than losing the one steady job he'd always had while some announcer's voice crackled through the news. A company had gone bankrupt. That same worn-out broken guy asked, "Can you pick me up?" And he didn't care where, just throw him into another world. And there in the ancient ruins of Artelphia, cracked stone buildings crouched under wild vines, while trees had already sprouted right inside some houses, so the elf girl practically lit up with joy. She stared at the spot in awe, thinking, no way, we actually dug up a real human relic and it was sitting there so perfectly placed. She whipped around to Dex and shot him a grateful look. Because he'd been right there the whole time, she was terrified, thinking only the two of them could still slip out. The cat then raked his cheek in pure embarrassment, and Dex still busted into laughter right after. Dex leaned in and asked the girl what she'd spotted, and when she glanced down at her palm, there it was, something caught in her hand. She smiled and swore it was a hair hike, a find with serious historical weight. Dex grinned and said they'd nailed it, then insisted on getting a closer look at this ancient relic. The girl didn't spot a single problem with that plan. She warned him to be extra careful, because this relic would end up as the crown jewel of the royal treasury, and the cat knew it for sure. It was the leftover from those ancient ones that vanished for good. Dex suddenly bared his teeth and erupted into loud laughter, yanking the girl's focus away from her studying, and she couldn't help but wonder what on earth had him laughing so hard. He spun toward his boss, convinced she should hold people at arm's length, then leaned in and brought the hair right up to his muzzle, staring at their prize like it was worth fighting for. Dex blurted out that he was sick to death of chasing her around everywhere, and the moment the words hit, the girl froze, then snapped into realization that he'd chosen to betray her, calling him a fool on the spot. Suddenly the girl's eyes went wide. Dex shoved the found treasure straight into his mouth, and at the exact same moment you could hear a huge, loud gulp. Rage made the girl shake because she couldn't wrap her head around him actually doing it. Right then, Dex flared with a blinding glow, power surging through his veins as he finally understood what those people were capable of, and he turned the focus on himself. The girl figured he didn't get what he was doing. This hair was priceless. Dex just grinned and said, "Yeah, I know." His cat-shaped hand flared brighter and brighter until his arm bulged into pure muscular power, and he leaned in to tell her, "This is exactly why I'm going to use it." The girl froze in shock, completely lost on what to do next, but Dex kept going. He vowed he'd use raw force to become the ruler of the world. The elf's calm snapped into cold seriousness, saying he'd left her no choice. Then a fiery orb ignited in her grip, and the girl lined up a flaming bullet straight at Dex. The second her bullet's dust blew away, the girl's jaw dropped because Dex, that tiny cat, had just erupted into a monstrous giant. Dex burst into frantic laughter and screamed that her attacks were totally useless. Then he lunged to strike the elf. And then she jumped back in time like it was nothing. The girl finally understood. This was the human relic's power, the kind you can pull off with just one single hair, and she couldn't help wondering how strong people must be in real life. The elf immediately slapped her hand over her face. Then bam, bright lightning tore open the sky, and right in the middle of it a body blasted straight toward them. The girl froze, eyes bulging as shock slammed into her. A brutal crash hit the ground as the man went down, and a blazing pillar blasted right after his shadow. The elf ducked, bracing against the wind and dust he kicked up, and when the haze finally thinned, 2 legs were jutting out of the hole. Dex and the girl stared, completely frozen, while his legs jutted from the hole, still, silent, until all at once they jerked and started moving again. Something lurched up from the pit, and then boom, someone surfaced, immediately scanning the ground where he landed, totally clueless about his surroundings, because he was dead set on proving he'd just been asleep at home. He convinced himself it was all a dream, even as the scene looked painfully real. Then, out of nowhere, a glowing cat caught his eye, and he didn't even realize it was standing right in front of him. Dex needed answers, so he rattled the guy with pure fear, until the stranger started stuttering and finally blurted that he was just an ordinary person, and that only made the elf's suspicion grow. He replayed everything he'd said, staring at the words like they didn't make sense, but he couldn't shake the fact that he didn't have cat ears or a tail like that guy, so yeah, in his mind, that was the perfect answer. Dex shoved his own words in the man's face, then started hurling insults right as the cat snapped into a furious scream, convinced Dex had come here to mess with him. The guy figured he must have hit a nerve somehow, then Dex exploded into motion, swinging hard, and he scrambled to block every fist that came flying at him. Dex slammed the guy right in the arms right as that brutal hit should have crushed him. It vanished into nothing, and it even stunned him. Dex couldn't believe it. Somehow he'd halted his own attack. The guy just stood there, shaking, and Dex was the one freaking out too because he had no clue what was happening. He figured he was filming some wild movie because he smashed it with insane speed, but he didn't even slow down, and there it was, that sweet little hairline right on the bad guy's face. He still couldn't believe it, dream, prank, or some movie setup, because part of him wanted it to be real in the best way, not heartbreak. He kept waiting for them to finally say he'd been played, and when it didn't happen, the guy finally caught on. This was the world he'd been asking for. Still, he refused to be some big-screen hero. Instead, the guy grinned and started playfully lunging at Dex, yelling for him to get it, and when Dex slapped his hand to his chest, the cat blasted straight into the ruins wall, smashing it and leaving a massive crater. Dex burst the air out of his lungs with a loud gasp, and the guy immediately started clapping, bragging that he was an awesome stuntman. The girl gasped like she couldn't believe her eyes, while the huge cat started whining in agony, tongue lolling out as he fought to drag air back into his lungs. Dex was doing the same, and the other guy snapped into a fighter's stance, convinced this wasn't over. The guy hurled a shout after Dex as he sprinted off, screaming that he'd pay for everything. Then the bad guy vanished and the guy crumpled to the ground, gasping for air. He tried to shove it out of his mind, because the more wild a dream gets, the faster it usually vanishes, but this one was so vivid it felt painfully real, like it wasn't just dreaming at all. The guy snapped back to the idea that they were filming, and if that was true, the scenery must have been unreal. Then, boom, someone finally spoke to him. It was the elf who grabbed him with gratitude for saving her, and he blurted that he had to know her name. Then she rushed out an apology for showing up so late. Turns out the girl was Ria, a real elf. The guy nervously introduced himself and said his name was Yoji Yamazaki. Yes, he's human. Ryo lit up at how he looked, thrilled that he was the real, revered legend. Yeji stayed completely silent, still totally lost about what was happening. He felt something was off, and Ria, still smiling, quizzed him like she already knew something was wrong. He couldn't shake the feeling Ria's ears didn't look like props at all, and there were 0 cameras lurking nearby. She kept blurting out these cryptic hints, and Rai told me to thank her again for his help, because I never in a million years would have guessed a human relic could hold that kind of power, and using it would unleash something so massive. Yeji begged for forgiveness because he needed to set the record straight. Was he really summoned to another world? For him, none of it felt any less shocking than the moment it all happened. In the end, it hit him our worlds didn't match at all. Where he sees cars every day, his world gets swallowed by giant dragons. He kept picturing it being dragged into a fantasy world of dreams and magic, then dove deeper by reading it like it was real. He finally said, "No, you don't get it. The people here are legendary creatures," and the girl lit up, instantly buzzing with the same idea. Ria had laid it out. Humans are an ancient, unstoppable force in their eyes, the kind of absolute beings countless religions bow to. Yeji said he got the feeling the elves were on a whole other level, sharp minds, top-tier magic, perfectly balanced, able to handle everything, just never perfectly. Then Rai suddenly snapped his gaze to the guy. She said that in Artelphia he's an untouchable force, and the people are so terrifyingly strong that even her own subordinate threw her under the bus just because of a single hair from his head. Yeji realized just how cruel it was, and in his own head he couldn't believe he'd ever have the nerve to do it, while Dex kept bolting off into the woods. He needed to figure out how he was supposed to live in this world, but he couldn't wrap his head around how anyone could stroll through the city when even a tiny part of his body was making all this chaos. Ria said that the second the world found out he existed, the guy cut her off and started thinking, because getting called to another world is so absurd that honestly nothing would shock him anymore. Rai went on, dead sure that once word spreads, a global war will erupt between nations desperate to seize his power, and Yeji couldn't believe they'd pushed this far. The young man froze in shock and blurted, "Why are we doing this?" Rai smirked and said, "Because whoever holds the power of man in their hands gets to command the whole world. In Art Mafia they don't call them body parts, they're relics, and they're turned into deadly tactical weapons," and she even used Dex as the example, watching him morph into a brutal monster. And if they ever confirmed that a living person really still exists, the whole world would probably ignite in full-blown war like it's the end of the world. Yet Yeji had no clue how any of that could be possible. He turned to Ria and begged, "Tell me how I should live in this world," because all he wanted was a peaceful life, no pointless fights, no unnecessary trouble. And it was all because he refused to crawl back into the grind of being a corporate servant again, so if he could forge a fresh life here, he'd grab this chance with both hands. Still, he refused to be stuck in the middle of a world war, so Yeji pictured himself sprinting away from everyone chasing him since the relics were for their country. Ria cut in, there was one escape route. Yeji was hoping she could help him, but he couldn't just storm into the others, so the only move left was to go to Ria and ask for help, and he needed to know one thing, where the exit was. She spun toward him and said, "Let's build our own home, somewhere we can finally live in peace." Sunlight washed over her as she grinned, like hope had a face. The guy shot into anger the moment he couldn't figure out what she meant. Ria snapped it all into focus as she explained that people in this world get treated like objects of worship, and right then, bandits were already circling, hunting for pieces of his power. Yeji has to build his base to fend off enemy strikes and recruit top-tier followers to launch an attack, because there's literally no other choice. He thought she was just messing around, but the girl snapped, "Nope, this isn't a joke." Yeji prayed they'd find some calmer, peaceful route, yet Ria shut that down hard. There's no such thing. She told him, "Don't worry," then dropped down on one knee and faced him again, her eyes begging him to let her do what she had in mind. The girl dropped her gaze and flashed a smile, and Ria promised she'd serve him and swore eternal loyalty. Then the vanished people, their powers, the whole reason he'd been dragged into this world, and yeah, he still had a ton of questions. But maybe carving out your own quiet haven isn't a bad idea, especially with sweet Ria, because he was done with his life, sick of lying to himself and everyone else, and Yeji had always secretly dreamed of a place just like this. He thrust his hand toward her, begged Ria to watch over him, and swore he just wanted to keep moving toward a world where someone finally needed him. The girl beamed at him, flashed a bright smile, and nodded fast. She was all in. Yeji was really starting fresh, and at least he finally mattered to somebody. Yeji whipped his head toward Ria while she helped him scramble across the stream, because he couldn't wait to ask where their journey would begin. She said they had to stash it first, and that she couldn't stop worrying about what Dex was doing this very moment, because they couldn't let anyone find out about Yeji until they locked in their base. He was desperate to learn how, so Ria snapped, "Come with me, follow my lead." A cave burst into view ahead of them, draped in thick vines, and Yeji couldn't even guess where they'd ended up until the girl snapped, "This is my grandfather's old shelter." Ria shot up her hand, cracked the lantern open, and the crystal flared so bright the whole cave lit up. That wowed him hard. Then the girl leaned in and said, "Places like this are scattered across the whole world," and when he looked around at the stuff piled on the shelves, he just kept repeating, "This is unreal." Ria swore her grandfather was humanoid, and then, out of nowhere, a handsome man with glasses flashed through her memories, and even in her own mouth, the words wouldn't come easy to call his work safe. Because of his job, he constantly got his hands dirty with relics, then sprinted across the world to smash bandits trying to seize human power, so Yeji couldn't help but realize those humanoids in this world were straight-up tough guys. The guy finally clocked just how many weapons were stacked in here, then someone called him Master, and Ria figured this place would be their temporary shelter, with Yeji nodding along too until he spotted the real problem. There was only one bed. Ria told him to crash on the bed while she kept watch at the entrance because she only needs 30 minutes of sleep a day. He froze, totally shocked, and blurted her words back like he couldn't believe it. Yeji told him that even if she finally made it home at night, sleep still wouldn't find her, and before she even realized it, dawn would be creeping in, because if she ever gets a chance to rest, she's taking it, no hesitation, and the guy was already breaking down in tears from how deeply her words hit him. The guy offered to crash on the floor but said Ria should take the bed, then the girl snapped that she couldn't possibly afford something that bold. Yeji's stomach twisted because to her, it felt like she was daring God to sleep on the floor. The guy grinned and beckoned her to lie on the bed with him, then Ria's eyes snapped shut with shock. Her face burned pink as she blurted out a scream she couldn't hold back, waving her hands like no, absolutely not. Yeji blurted out an apology, insisting they could find another way if she didn't want it, while the guy finally admitted he'd pushed too far. Still, he had no sneaky motives because the bed was big enough until he caught himself, realizing excuses were already spinning in his head. Ria told him she didn't mind at all, then declared that starting right now, she was taking up the role of his guardian. He swore it was mutual, but the moment things started feeling like a fresh couple thing, he realized the rules were weird. It was totally fine to sleep in the same bed, just don't leave him sprawled on the floor, and when she pushed, "Let's get down to business," the guy's face went betrayed. Rhea closed the distance in a blink way too fast and slammed her lips onto Yeji's, leaving him stunned as his brain scrambled, wondering if he was really about to do what he just started imagining, with the exact requests flashing through his head like a signal to begin. But then Rhea, gripping a mop, yanked him right out of his head so they could clean up here, and the guy nodded along without a fight. Evening had already settled in, and Yeji lounged on his bed, chewing dried meat. Then his eyes snapped to the entrance of their hideout. Rhea was sitting right by the exit, and he couldn't help but wonder if she wanted some food too. The girl said that this dried meat was all they had left, and promised she'd go catch something bright and early tomorrow morning, while the guy's embarrassment only cranked up even more. He dangled the meat in front of her, claiming he'd already taken a bite, then he paused like, "Go ahead if you want." But the girl shot her hands out, shaking her head because she couldn't. He brought the meat right up to her face and warned, "If you don't eat, you're going to get us attacked. There's danger in starving." And the girl started to drool, swallowing hard like she was suddenly terrified. Rai thanked him and swore she'd owe him forever, and the guy tried to wave it off like it was too much. Then she apologized anyway and went right on ahead and took a bite. Suddenly something surged through her. She clutched the pendant at her throat and drew one deep, shaking breath. Her skirt was yanked up and heat flooded her face as she gasped and scrambled to cover herself, still clutching the same piece of meat in her mouth, while Yeji stood there completely baffled, like she had no clue what just happened. And the girl started acting even more bizarre than before. Drool spilled from her mouth, then she suddenly let out a piercing scream. The guy rushed over to make sure she was okay after she dropped to her knees, and Rhea lit up, saying it was incredible, because she could feel the master's human power surging through her. And she told her that his spit was still clinging to the meat, and she could feel her magic roaring up, stronger than ever. Yeji mulled it over and suddenly realized that their indirect kiss had turbocharged her, and just one stray hair could hit that hard, so in his mind, fresh saliva had to be even more insane. Rhea spun toward the master, stunned that her hunger vanished, yet the guy was convinced everyone here was way too strong, and then, right at that moment, something rustled in the bushes, and something eerie appeared beside the shelter. On the very first morning in this new world, Yeji stretched on the bed, realizing he'd slept soundly for the first time in ages. Then his eyes snapped to something, and he froze when his hand was resting on Rhea's chest. He snapped his hands up and screamed, then it hit him. They'd already agreed to crash in Rhea's grandfather's shelter for now, and the two of them had fallen asleep together last night. The girl was still crashed out on the bed, snoring like nothing mattered. Then Yeji's heart started thundering, and the guy finally realized, yeah, she was insanely cute after all. He stared at the girl's body, baffled beyond belief, then Rhea rolled onto her side in the next instant, still fast asleep. Yeji's eyes snapped down to the girl's lower body, then shock hit him and he whipped around fast. The guy was already sliding out of bed, replaying how close he came to crossing the line, forcing himself to breathe and calm down. Yeji started plotting a quick trip for water while Ryo slept, then Ryo watched him hurry toward the exit, until he slammed right into something. The guy shot his eyes wide, totally clueless about what was happening. Then right away, I heard the master's scream and Rhea launched out of bed, snatching her clothes mid-run. Rhea still didn't know what set Yeji off, but before she could even blink, she was already sprinting toward him, just in time to see the guy reaching for the thing that scared him while his confused stare snapped to Rhea. Turns out that passage was jammed tight by one gigantic slug. The elf leaned over and told her master, "It's a slug," and the guy just stared, totally unable to believe it. It looked to him like the slugs in this world were absolutely enormous, but Rhea snapped back because those monsters were usually way too tough for even beginner adventurers. The girl figured Yeji snuck off to the nearest spring after dark, but the guy just said his throat was dry at night, and Rhea insisted that was the whole reason. Because that slug most likely sucked up the spring water Yeji was drinking, and the guy instantly clocked the pattern, same weird behavior Rhea pulled yesterday. But still, they were stuck with a real problem, and at this pace, there was no way they'd get out anytime soon. Rhea, practically glowing with excitement, insisted there was nothing to worry about. She told the master to back up, then he ducked behind the curve as the girl's glowing sphere sparked back to life on her hand. Rhea laughed, saying his power made this monster a joke, and she blasted another flame bullet straight at it. Blasted by the roar, Yeji dropped into a squat and clapped his hands over his head, while Ria stood her ground, slicing through the smoke with her attack until the men froze at the strength and watched the smoke vanish into nothing. They both shouted in shock when the slug was totally unharmed, and the girl's fury flared as she lunged for a second attack, swearing this time he'd be in real trouble, until Yeji stepped in and told her to wait just a moment. From the very start, that slug never once showed hostility toward them, so if it was planning to strike, it would have done it a long time ago. Yeji spun toward the slug and realized he'd come for a reason. He had business with it. Then the slug erupted into happy noises that instantly made the people ahead jump back in fear. Ria snapped back to the master in an instant, because that slug started twisting shapes right in front of them, and the girl thrust her hand over him, shielding him from harm. Right then, that giant slug shrank into a tiny, humming drop, sticking to Yeji's leg like it had been claimed, and Ria just couldn't wrap her head around how that monster was actually taking orders. He crouched low and told the slug, "Give me a paw," then pointed for a second one. When Yeji saw that little slug actually got it, her face lit up with pure joy. Yeji decided to name him Lyson because now he was one of them, too, so he pushed himself harder than ever and started chiming with approving little sounds right away. Ria finally saw the truth, nothing was wrong, and they pulled in a powerful subordinate, making it feel like the very first step toward a world where the master can finally rest in peace. Meanwhile, Ms. Card is up in the capital, while the girl sits in the bathroom, staring up, wondering if her sister is seeing the very same moon. A girl burst into the bathroom, spun toward Rosa, and blurted out that she'd been handed a fresh assignment. The first reconnaissance unit was gone, and Rosa instantly went wide-eyed, terrified. The girl stormed in and ordered me to grab the second squad right now, then go hunt them down near the ancient ruins, which she swore were tucked close to Ostrad Forest in the west. Rosa couldn't stand the mystery. She had to find out what happened to her sister, and the news left her pacing, restless, and burning with worry. Ria told the master she was heading out to hunt, and the instant he got distracted from the slug in his arms, he blurted that he wanted to go too. Then the girl shot back right away that he didn't have to worry. Yeji dropped Lizzie onto the floor and snapped that staying home all the time was boring, while Lyson's magic powers siphoned up a massive burst of magical energy. He knew he had to stay sharp and cautious, but he also craved answers about this strange world. As they burst from their hiding spot, Yeji told the lizard to watch the house, and it immediately started bouncing up and down, grinning like it couldn't wait. The guys were already deep in the forest when Ria lined up and nailed her shot, driving an arrow straight into the bird. Then she ripped down from the tree with a thunderous rustle, and Yeji blurted, starstruck, that she was doing great. Ria didn't see anything special, she just knew that with a pinch of magic the arrow would hit like a beast, and the girl could even guide it. She yanked the arrow straight out of the bird. And she basically told the guy, "This bird's bald and the meat is insanely delicious." He thought it through, nodded like, "Yeah, it's a blessing having someone like Ria, I can count on her." Then it hit him. Now they had to get this bird cleaned and processed so it could be cooked. The girl finally caught on, and then the bird's blood burst outward in wild droplets, slapping the guy with pure shock. Ria insisted the taste shifts depending on whether every last drop of blood is gone, and Yeji couldn't stop thinking how lucky he was to have Ria, because he lived alone and basically survived on convenience store meals. Suddenly, the guy snapped to it. This world had 2 moons, while the girl shot back that there was only one in hers. Yeji confirmed it, pointing out the moon was white with a faint yellow glow, and he swore he'd never seen reds or blues like the ones in their sky. Ria said she'd die to visit their world, and Yeji's sad look hit him so hard that she turned back to face him. He shot to his feet, clutching his head, and admitted his world just wasn't that good when the girl stared back, heartbreak in her eyes. And the guy kept pushing forward, convinced he'd find out more about her world, while secretly praying they'd have a blast together. Ria's face lit up with a joyful grin as she thanked Yeji right away. Then the guy remembered his burning question about using magic, and the girl happily nodded, lifted one finger, and popped a tiny flash of light. And when she said magic gets unleashed, it messes with the universe's rules until that magical power steps in, and with his power backing it up, even the toughest spells don't stand a chance. Yeji shook his head and said that since they were already here, he wanted to bag some kind of animal too. Then, out of nowhere, something grabbed his attention. A heavenly dragon, usually calm as can be, only once every 100 years plunges to earth and unleashes whatever it's there to do. The girl finished with shaking hands and stared at the dragon with the most fearful look she could manage, remembering that day from her childhood when a heavenly dragon touched down and rained fire on her village. Yeji snapped, asking if everything was okay when the girl went pale in seconds. Then Ria flashed a smile and brushed it off, saying she was just dizzy, so Yeji told her to stop pushing herself too hard. But now he wanted to unleash his magic on that dragon. Ria pushed him to picture the goal, lock in exactly what he wanted to do, and even reading a spell would make that vision hit harder. Yeji realized the spell wouldn't even be necessary, but because it was his first time, he still nodded and did exactly what Ria told him. He shot his hand up and hurled a flaming bullet spell, then everything went dead silent. Yeji's cheeks flared as she panicked, convinced he'd just failed. Ria demanded the master look up, and the instant he followed her pointing finger, his face went ghost pale. Cold sweat erupted because he finally understood what he'd done. A blazing circle tore open in the sky, and at its center a heavenly dragon got slammed so hard it couldn't hold its ground. Then it shot upward, shrinking fast as it vanished into the clouds. Ria started to worship the master in her heart. She couldn't believe he had wiped out the heavenly dragon from that far away, and Yeji just stood there, stunned to silence because the dragon had vanished. He started wondering what would happen if he cast a spell on a forest animal. Then Ria snapped that the whole area would scorch into a fiery wasteland, and Yeji realized in that exact moment he'd dodged a disaster. He told the girl to lay off the magic if he wanted to survive, and Ria said this time they could actually hunt for objects that would swamp her power. Right then, a blazing glow erupted above them. He couldn't even tell what he was seeing. Then Ria snapped, "Look up," and the moment he did, the blue moon was gone. The girl kept going, gushing that he was incredible because he could shatter even the moon. Then Yeji figured she was just making fun of him, and he rushed in to set the record straight, insisting it wasn't a bad thing since he was worried sick about the ecosystem. Ria mulled it over, then finally snapped that the moon was the real problem, too fragile to hold everything together. After that, she pushed hard to prove it to him. It was the moon causing her fragility, and he had nothing to fear. Yeji fired off that he totally agreed with her, then finally volunteered to get back to hunting, and the girl nodded right away. The guy chose to let it go and stop overthinking it. Right outside the cave, the guys sprawled around a table and devoured fresh, hot food. Yeji practically lit up and said it was amazing, as always. Ria clasped her hands and beamed as she told him how thrilled she was to hear it, because it had been 3 whole days since they hid there. Yeji tried every disaster she could think of after the blue moon got shattered, but nothing even flinched, and with Ria watching their backs, the food kept coming in so much that they never had to want for anything. He kept blurting out how amazing she was, how sweet, how thoughtful, while she fed Lizzie right then, and he tore into his food with pure joy. Suddenly, a dream flashed in his mind. He imagined coming home to a wife who'd beam at him with pure joy and nudge him to do his nightly exercises every single evening. Ria yanked him out of his thoughts after calling his name again and again, and he practically jumped. She thought something was seriously wrong. Yeji blurted out, cheeks burning, that he'd been lost in his own head, trying to figure out why he couldn't use magic in this world. Ria couldn't shake it. Something felt off because magic is supposed to live in every living thing from birth, so the idea that magic could vanish like it was its own separate thing, even when they're in a different world, just didn't add up. The girl threw out a bold theory. Maybe their earth is made of dark matter, and when the guy pressed her again, Ria leaned in and explained it like this. It eats up magic from close by, then smothers and destroys it. It's rare, but it also exists in her world. Yeji thought it was ore at first, but the description didn't match anything he'd seen before. Dark matter has mass, yet you can't detect it with the usual methods. Yeji finally figured it out. If something like this even existed on Earth, it would explain why he couldn't use magic. Then reality punched back because he had nothing to prove it. He flopped into the chair, felt the food settle, and figured he could probably walk already. Then he told the girl he'd take a quick stroll, but she cut him off and said she had to tell him something first. She leaned in and demanded he hand over a relic. Confused, he didn't get why, but she snapped back that as his student she was still too weak, and with her taking it, she'd grow stronger. Yeji got the whole picture and still couldn't stop herself from asking how much hair she'd need for this, until Ria snapped, "That's not what I mean," and pushed it straight to the point. She wanted him to pass that relic mouth to mouth. He blushed hard, scrambling to confirm he'd heard her right, while she stared, confused, then blurted that absorbing magic that way was way more effective. Sure, he could refuse, but no, she wasn't trying to kiss him. Yeji, in his head, he was yelling with pure joy, and he told her if she wanted it, he'd be totally on board. He never saw it coming and opening to kiss a girl that gorgeous. Two people sat on the bed, stiff as statues, barely daring to look at each other. Rhea clamped her hands on his shoulders and said, "I'll start." Once their hands reached for each other, Lizen shot between them, right on time. Rhea yanked her slug away so it wouldn't get in the way. Then she whipped her gaze to her master, and in the end, they shared a shy, timid kiss. Suddenly, the girl crashed into him, driving Geiji flat onto the bed. He could barely believe it because she'd gotten stronger. Rhea yanked back from his lips, purred that he tasted so damn good, and the power started to boil up inside her. The girl clutched her cheek like she couldn't get enough, and Yeji couldn't shake the thought. Maybe the human saliva acted like an aphrodisiac, because Rhea was acting downright weird. She lunged on top of him, demanding he satisfy her. He shrieked at first from the sudden assault, then just gave in and muttered that whatever came next, he'd deal with it. Meanwhile, in the Miscard Kingdom's capital, people buzzed with panic, hunting for answers. Who actually shattered the blue moon? Most were convinced it was the demons, some said it outright, and everyone was praying they'd stay safe inside these walls. The man stood by the window, staring at the vanished moon, and his mind screamed that demons had done it. Then they snapped to him at once and shouted, "Kazul," like they'd already cracked some terrifying truth. The knight snapped that Sivin had a mountain of complaints, and Kazul shot back at everyone to go to hell. No time to deal with that nonsense. That girl who'd overheard the two men slipped into the room, and the knight opened his mouth right as Kazul snapped in, cutting him off with a sharp stop. Kazul's eyes stayed fixed on one question. Did the second squad of scouts come back yet? Rose snapped her gaze to the knight captain, introduced herself again, and said she was from the second scout squad. She'd finally come back from a mission, and Kazul could barely hide how relieved he was that Rosetta had returned. He was fretting over whether anything had come of it. Then she shook her head, saying they'd found no regalia, only this. Rosetta lifted the hair from the box and held it out. Kazul grabbed the box, swore the hair inside was real, and insisted it was a relic, because the man felt the mystery in it, and unlike everything else, that hair was packed with magic. Rosa blurted that this couldn't possibly be one of humanity's thousand-year-old relics. Kazul spun toward her, shocked, and thought she was calling it proof of a survivor, but the girl refused to rush a single thing. But if a human survivor shows up, that alone could be the second reason the moon falls apart. The man stopped and recalled it. Somehow their family's insane strength had ended everyone, and for them, wrecking the moon is nothing. Rose spun back to the knight captain and demanded permission to keep probing the ruins. Kazul clocked it instantly. It was all because of Rhea, and the girl backed that up with a quiet, clear nod. And on the march to the forest, the demons mowed down nearly the whole first squad, but there was no trace of Rhea or Dex, so it has to be that they got hurt and slipped off to hide and heal. Kazul snapped that they had way bigger problems, but he also knew one thing for sure: if she latched onto an obsession, he'd never pry her out of it. And it all came down to those two, especially Rhea, because he couldn't bear to lose them, and the thought of their beloved faces lit up his mind like a warning. Kazul told her, "I'll give you a month, but keep your eyes locked on the ruins. If you spot anyone, you run back and report immediately." She swallowed the warning, nodded, and thanked him for the chance. Rose bolted to the door, calling in her head for her sister to hang on. She'd find her, no matter what. Meanwhile, Yeji and Rhea were still locked in a kiss back in the shelter, and that guy had absolutely no clue how long it was going to drag on. Rhea turned crimson with embarrassment and murmured an apology to Yeji, her voice shaking. Turns out she was so embarrassed she snapped on the spot, and boom, she landed her very first kiss. "The guy just told me, don't worry about it." Because they locked lips for a full 10 minutes and Rhea straight up passed out, it really looked like human fluids act like an aphrodisiac on the rest of the races. The guy realized if he kept pressing her like this, he might not be able to hold back in every way, so he told the girl he'd head out for a walk, and Rhea shied away and murmured that he should take care of himself. Yeji stormed out of the house, then turned back to Lee Sin and apologized, because now he was finally free. An unknown girl stood right at the exit, totally nude, and perched on her arm was a butterfly like it owned the moment. He couldn't pin down who she was or how she'd lost her clothes. Then, out of nowhere, a little girl sprinted over and tackled Yeji in a tight hug. The guy caught a familiar sound and snapped to attention. Lizen was there, nodding along like she approved, yet she was still trying to figure out how it all happened. Then Rhea whipped around and faced the guy. She had no clue what he was doing there with a girl with no clothes until her eyes went wild and a flaming bullet ripped from her hand. The guy suddenly realized how done he was, and then, after a while, she was walking barefoot across the ground. And Ria quickly laid out at least some clothes for Leeson, and she couldn't believe it because once a monster builds up enough power, it can sometimes shape itself into a humanoid form, though that's rare, but she'd heard about it. The girl figured it all came down to his insane strength, like that explained everything, while Yeji even assumed Lisa was a girl too, and Ria snapped back that wasn't quite right, leaving the guy totally stunned. Lizen lifted her skirt and flashed a shy smile, and the guy froze when he realized the truth. Lizen wasn't just someone, she was a ladder. Right then, Yeji started slamming into the wall like that face was totally his type, but that wasn't even what he was trying to do, and Ria snapped, "No, that's not what I meant." After everything clicked in her head, Yeji realized that slugs don't need male or female at all. They reproduce by splitting in half, so they're genderless. And yeah, she could instantly tell they'd like it way more with that look, so Yeji reached out, patted the girl's head, and went, "Come here, you fox." Suddenly, this dude decided to check on her, see how she felt and whether anything had changed, and since I'd already swallowed up so many of his relics, the girl straight up confirmed it. Her magic power had exploded 10 times stronger, and Yeji couldn't believe it was all because of him. She worried he shouldn't have brought up that he expected her other stats to jump too, but the only thing he actually said was, "Don't thank me." Ria felt her senses sharp as a blade, hearing and sight both stronger now, so she'd spot any intrusion even quicker than before. Yeji suddenly felt her magic and body leveling up, and the guy went, "Wait, I never felt anything like that." Then, out of nowhere, he started freaking out. Just how strong was he supposed to be? Ria whipped around to the master and warned him that those uninvited guests wouldn't stay away for long. Yeji heard the same footsteps crunching along the path, one lone intruder, definitely a man, and Ria could feel his presence the second he got close. The guy was sizing up her strength, and she shot back that he was weak and not even worth naming. Ria yanked out her weapon and snarled that even though he'd tracked down their hideout, they still weren't going to let him walk out of here alive. Rage burned in her eyes. She'd boldly stormed their sanctuary like a complete fool, and now she was going to make him taste the weight of every sin. Yeji lunged to stop her, but the moment she hesitated, the girl started spinning her weapon. Turns out the guy wanted to take him on himself to taste that power firsthand. Yeji knew she'd wipe the enemy out, but he was rushing in anyway. Ria let out a breath and told him she got it. But he had to promise her, no matter what, that he'd take care of himself. The girl grabbed Lizen by the shoulders, dragging him as she sprinted after their master, and that same determined man nodded like he fully understood her command. He kept replaying his opponent in his head, someone who, by all accounts, shouldn't be this dangerous, so he just prayed he'd somehow pull it off, and then a silhouette burst into view around the bend. Suddenly, a foot skidded across the floor, then a man with a sword stepped up and started talking, confirming the rumor that it was him living in the cave, while the mysterious stranger ordered him to drop every last thing of value and get out. At least he could keep breathing. Then the man thrust his sword straight at his face. Yeji couldn't figure out why this opponent felt so unbelievably strong. He finally got it. This was his home, and Ria and Leeson were right there, and he knew, deep down, he couldn't just give in to his demands. The man swore he wouldn't resort to violence or smash it to pieces, and then, at the end, he swung his sword anyway. A blade streaked past Yeji's body, and the man snapped his strike right back in the other direction. Then Yeji crumpled to the ground, terror smashing across his face. He locked eyes with the attacker and knew he had to backpedal. Swords were way too dangerous because he couldn't stand toe-to-toe with one using nothing but his bare hands. The man let out a laugh, wondering just how long he could keep sprinting, while Yeji, desperate to break free, suddenly realized he couldn't just run anymore. He had to counterattack, but he had no idea how, because any magic could turn the entire shelter into rubble, so he snapped his gaze around. Suddenly, a rift tore open between the young men and slammed straight into the attacker's face, leaving the blade-wielding man totally dumbfounded. A slime slug started to seethe on the ground, and Yeji's eyes went wide when she saw it was her, because the bubbling meant a lick was about to burst out, and right on cue it happened, making Yeji break into pure joy. Yeji dropped into the seat beside the girl, thanked her for saving her, and right then, right behind their backs, a guy's appeal rang out. Ria leaned in and demanded, "Are you okay?" The girl faced the guy, and Yeji flashed a grin, saying he was fine after the lick. Then the man's eyes caught a slug in a humanoid shape and an elf, two jaw-dropping beauties, and the two guys stood there in dead silence. The man kept asking what they'd fetch at the servants' market, but then I figured, no, bring them straight to some noble instead. Yeji flat-out declared that he was an egoist, and he intended to turn Ria and Lizzie into his servants. He bolted straight at the man to strike, yelling that he'd never let it happen. Then Yeji shoved the big-eared guy right in the chest, and the big man just stared, utterly lost, at the hand slipping away from his body. A man tore out of the shelter entrance like a bullet, slammed his back straight into the rock across from him, and howled in raw, unbearable pain. Blood exploded from his mouth like a fountain, and he crumpled to the ground, totally unable to move. Yeji bolted out of the cave, desperate to confirm he'd won, then a sharp call behind her yanked her around. Rhea rocketed into him, and he grabbed her in pure joy, thanking her for saving his life, while his thoughts twisted into something darker, picturing Rhea's body with no clothes. A lizard suddenly leapt onto his back and started clinging like a hug, snapping him out of his thoughts. So the sweet, smiling guy stood there and let his girls squeeze him like they meant it, while Rhea beamed and praised her master, calling him incredible. He snapped his head up and said the fight was totally worth it. Then, right on the spot, he decided to call Rhea to handle something for him. The girl shoved her treatment into the attacker, then told everyone he was okay now, he'd wake up soon, and that unconscious brute was still tied up behind her. But Rhea snapped that he was way too kind, and there was no reason to pressure him to heal some thief, while Yeji insisted she wasn't trying to lose him because he might hold useful information. Suddenly, the attacker jolted awake, and his first words were pure disbelief. He wasn't as cool as before. He couldn't fathom how some puny kid like Yeji could have actually defeated him. Right then, Rhea's fury erupted. How dare he talk to her master like that? Even the lick on the girl's head felt furious, and Yeji stepped in, urging everyone to calm down. Since their mission was to sniff out information, which is exactly what he'd been doing, he grilled the question in his head. What does this thief want, and why is he here? Then frustration hit, and he snapped his gaze down. He blurted out that his sister was sick, and right there, tears spilled into his eyes. He pleaded that they needed money for medicines, that their village was barely scraping by, and that his sister might not even make it to tomorrow. Yeji finally understood what he was trying to do, and he couldn't wait to ask Rhea if she could use magic to save his sister. She apologized and told him she could stitch up any wound like it was nothing, but illnesses, those were a whole different beast. He sank into a sad slump, convinced he was just plain unlucky, until Rhea cut in. There's only one way, and he practically blurted out, "What is it?" The girl snapped him back to reality. He's got relics, and with magic backing them up, they can cure any disease, yet the guy just couldn't wrap his head around how he'd forgotten, and Rhea admitted she still doesn't think it's a good idea to rely on them. They had to vanish fast, because if he handed over his relic that easily, she'd been terrified they'd get found out. Yeji finally saw that Ryo was right, they weren't ready, and that risk was pure danger, but when Ryo apologized to the girl, he made it clear, he'd save his sister no matter what. Back in his own world, he craved someone who would genuinely need him, and if there was a disappearing person he could save, he'd never sit around and do nothing. Rhea said, "I get it," but her calm tone screamed that she was just making sure the news didn't spread. Then Yeji thanked her, and Lizen sliced the rope right then and there. The guy yanked out a strand of hair and shoved it into the man's hand, whispering that it was meant for him. Then the man's whole body erupted with magic power, and he couldn't believe what he was feeling. Yeji told him to hand it to his sister, and he actually believed it could heal her, so he snapped at the bandit to stop the robbery, wiped the tears from his eyes, and begged for forgiveness like guilt was choking him. Finally, the thief stepped forward and introduced himself, Adai, a man from the Bears, a forest-dwelling people. He promised to repay their kindness, and that's how the first fight to guard the shelter snapped into victory for them. The very next day, a guy dropped by with a grin, waving his hand like we'd been friends forever, and he told me his sister was finally feeling better. With gratitude flooding his chest, the guy begged Yeji to take his gifts, because Yeji clearly helped them. Then he thanked him again and said, "Look inside," where a drawer held a bag of peas, a box of tomatoes, and jars stuffed with yet another bag. And just like that, Bear Village became their ally. Yeji handed over his hair, and they fed everyone in return. Turns out his hair wasn't just hair, it replaced magic stones, one of the world's most prized essentials, and even their shelter lamps ran on it too. Lately, stone prices skyrocketed, starving Adaya village and crushing everything in it, so he got pushed straight onto a criminal path. So turns out the answer was Yeji's hair, and it hit him like a blessing because he was literally helping people that way. Adai, grinning, felt a whole ocean of magic trapped in one single strand. But he also felt bad for Rhea. She just stared while he casually dealt out his hair, hadn't even tried it yet, and now she was seething with jealousy over Adai that kept getting a new hair every time. Yeji snapped her gaze to Rhea, thinking, "Did you really make sure that info didn't leak? because Ria was out here walking with that guy to Yeji's village yesterday, and the bear immediately went icy pale. He blurted that he was already running late and had to find his sister ASAP, then bolted like his life depended on it toward his village. Ria told him not to worry, she'd cursed every single resident so their promises would lock in tight, meaning no problems would ever dare show up. The girls stared at the tomatoes Adai brought and Yeji snapped to it. Ria wasn't allowed to be upset, not for a second, and that's his promise. Rose was still hunting for her sister and Ria marched right up to the master, begging for permission to set traps. Yeji pushed for an answer again and he told her that his hard work kept the current attacks from turning into real disasters, but nobody knew what monsters might show up next, so Yeji suggested they lay underwater traps. Ria lit up and said it was a brilliant idea, then jumped straight to cooking them. The girl unleashed Earth Strike magic and even an inner circle blazed where her spell landed. Yeji froze because the hole looked way too shallow for all that power. Ria rushed to apologize, admitting the ground was painfully hard. But he got it right away. If her magic failed, the ground was rock solid anyway, so he figured there wasn't much they could do. Ria then blurted out, "So we stuff it with poison," and Yeji snapped back, "That's way too cruel." But all he could say was, "This has gone way too far, drop it and let's just go for a walk." The girl nervously nodded along, but Lee Sin couldn't ignore the way Yeji looked like the entire world had just gone silent. Then he suddenly snatched her jacket. And the guy clocked it. She wasn't trying to fight them, she was trying to help, so he nodded and she agreed. The slime blew onto his hand and fresh drops spilled onto the ground, instantly wriggling into new little slimes. At the exact same moment, a bunch of slime balls shot up into the sky. Yeji's jaw dropped in shock because there were way more of them this time. Ria just stayed calm and said, "It's cell division." She'd heard that once slugs drank in enough magic, they could split into multiple pieces to reproduce, and with Yeji's magic fueling her, she finally reached that wild state. The guy snapped that the little slimes were getting licked by children, and that lit a fire under Ria. She dropped to her knees, furious, thinking they'd already had kids before her. Then she whipped around to face him. Tears spilled as Ria begged him to have kids with her, since she'd divide her cells and flood the world with children, so Yeji snapped at her to calm down. But the girl just kept going, saying she'd clap, and then blast an explosive shock straight from her own hands like a fired bullet. The guy tried to soothe her, but he caught the truth fast. He wasn't hearing a single word he said. He had no choice, so he shot Ria an early apology and dove in, clinging to her lips, and the moment it happened, she shot crimson with a blush. Ria's lips parted and she let out a shaky breath, then spun toward the master. She wasn't about to let him stop, so their kiss dragged on, and before long, both of them were blazing red with embarrassment. Tears welled up in her eyes, and then she let out a thrilled scream, collapsing straight into Yeji's arms, knocked out cold. That totally blindsided him because instead of calming her down, he just flipped her back into action. He scooped her up in his arms and told her to get the younger ones watching the entrance, and she snapped to it without hesitation. He told her that if intruders showed up, she should only take them down to stop the threat, not go destroy them like Ria. Yeji lifted the girl onto the bed and fear gnawed at him, because he couldn't stop thinking that Ria always pushed way past the line when it came to him. He stared at her and suddenly got it. She wasn't playing around, she was going all in for him, and it hit him right in the heart. The girl lay unconscious, and the guy watched her with a quiet, aching sadness. He couldn't stop wondering why she was so drawn to him, and then memories crashed in every moment he'd shared with her. Then came a thunderous shout from the street and Yeji froze, totally baffled. It wasn't the voice of any lick, and the meaning hit like a punch. Uninvited guests were here. Guy was leaning out around the bend, and right then, he spotted something. There was this girl with her legs sticking out of a hole as slime blasted straight at her, and she looked totally lost. Meanwhile, Yeji finally clocked it and realized the explanation was right. They told Rosa it was way too sticky, so sticky she couldn't move, and that stuff pinned her in place while she started cranking out all kinds of new noises again. So the kids tore into her in every way they could until disgust swallowed her whole. Yeji didn't even believe the underwater traps had failed, and just as the guy tried to add more, something down there snagged his attention. Rose's huge bust had the guy staring. He even guessed it might dwarf Ria's, and right then the girl finally broke free, relieved she'd managed to get herself out. Then Rosetta spotted Yeji crouched there, peeking out, and snapped that he was arrogant, no clue why he kept staring. Yeji caught her attention and blurted that he wasn't staring at anything. Aizen shot Yeji a confused, questioning look. At the exact same second, a tiny slime bolted off and ripped Rose's bra to shreds, leaving her standing there, stuck in just her tights. She shot up and screamed, slapping her hand over the spot where Rosetta had been, and Yeji rushed to praise the girl for pulling it off, until she went way too far. The guy looked crushed and swore he just wanted to make sure everything was all right. The girl was sobbing, pointing straight at him, furious that he still hadn't saved her, while Yeji, clutching a lost piece of clothing, blinked at her anger like it didn't make sense and figured it must be crucial, and then someone shouted his name. She was the one who spotted him clutching women's underwear, clueless about why he was even here. Then, out of nowhere, Ria was yanked into the moment as someone shouted for her sister. Rosetta sat there drenched in pure happiness, and when Ria finally saw her in person, Ria's surprise hit like a truck as they met at last. Rose finally got to see her sister again, and tears of pure joy flooded her eyes. Rosetta sat there, and the second she saw her sister, relief crashed into her. She knew Ria was alive, and she broke into tears of pure joy. Ria looked at her and told her to get dressed first, while at the same time the lizard started shutting Yeji's eyes. Ria then pointed out her sister and said, "We're nearly the same age, but Rose became a knight 2 years ago." The listeners lined up the younger ones first, and Yeji's eyes widened because she suddenly realized she was Ria's oldest. Rosetta blurted out that they had to go back to the capital together. "Because lately, everywhere I turn, people are screaming about some maniac destroying the moon." Yeji jolted with a shiver when he heard about the moon and how Rosetta needed Ria to crush the chaos. He'd stayed cool, thinking nothing big had come out of that incident, but it sparked absolute panic anyway. Ria snapped in out of nowhere and told Rose she'd already pledged herself to Yeji, the human, and she wasn't coming back to the capital, then pressed her point again, refusing to believe this Newman could be human when she couldn't sense a single trace of energy from him. Ria told her that Yeji isn't some monster at all, he's fully human, and his magical energy is so huge that even an ordinary person can't sense it. He leaned in and asked her in a hushed whisper because he had no clue who the Newmans were. She told him they were a whole race of people who'd inherited brutally concentrated human blood. They don't have any crazy magic, but they blend in so perfectly you'd swear they're real people, right down to those round ears that give them away. Yeji figured that if anyone caught him for the first time, they'd assume he was Newman, like it was the perfect disguise to keep his real identity buried. Rose just prayed they wouldn't expect her to swallow this story with zero proof, so she snapped a finger at the guy and demanded he show her, right now, that he was actually human. Yeji offered to hand over a lock of his hair, but Ria snapped, saying it felt like too much, especially since it was magic hair, not just hair. Out of nowhere, the girl leaned in and offered to let him put his finger in her mouth. No warning, pure chaos, and it totally stunned him, like he expected her to snap in anger, but Ria cut through it fast, saying everything was okay and she always listens. Since it was Ria's idea, she figured Rose wouldn't care, and Yeji just stared at his fingers, itching to get it over with. Rosetta said that even standing this close, he still looked totally unremarkable, and she couldn't wrap her head around why someone like him would even fall for her sister. Then he noticed her doubts like a flare, because once she caught on, she wasn't backing down. Yeji plopped down and told the lizard to get the younger ones, and when he nodded, he barked orders. Then slimes instantly crawled over the girl. Rosetta had no clue what any of this meant. Then the guy grinned and told her it was the proof she'd been begging for, holding his hand out to her. Then he rammed his fingers into her mouth. Bam! Her eyes went wide as a surge of magical power hit her, and she couldn't even make sense of what she was feeling. Yeji swore the sweat on his hands had done the trick. Then the girl started slobbering over his fingers. His lower back burst into a burning ache, and he still refused to yank his hand away. Ria spun toward the master and snapped that it was enough, and he went red with embarrassment and nodded, praying she hadn't caught the filthy thoughts he was having. Rose's heart sank the second she understood what was happening, and since there was no other path, she had to trust them. Ria added that she could feel a strange, endless power pouring out of his fingers, so Ria decided to ask her sister what she should do. Her sister snapped that she'd been told to report right away if she could find the man. But her loyalty doesn't belong to the country, it belongs to her sister, and there's no way she won't help them both. Yeji said it was definitely good, but he couldn't shake the feeling she didn't fully trust her own logic, because this move was straight-up betrayal of her country. Rosetta snapped that the whole world only let her sister use her first name, so yeah, she called him arrogant, and the guy blurted, "I'm sorry," mortified and embarrassed. Ria snapped her gaze to the master and told him they desperately needed supplies and answers right now, then urged him to send her straight to the capital. So this is how she'll become their spy, and she has to know Rosetta can pull it off, so she tells her, leave it to me. And she swore that her precious Rose lives only to give her body and soul, lock, stock, and everything to her, and for a moment Ria's tone went deadly serious. And she snapped that if she'd ever found out what happened to Dex, she should have warned him, because she couldn't even begin to imagine what he was getting himself into. Yeji's eyes narrowed. She thought this old man was the real threat right now, because he's not only aware of who he is, but he's also wielding the power of a relic. Ria added a few more warnings, telling Rose to watch her tone with her master. One wrong word and she could accidentally wipe her out. Yeji froze, terrified by what Ria just said. Rosetta practically shimmered with this killer aura, gushing that her sister was gorgeous, and the guy freaked out, thinking she was out of her mind, so he told her not to worry about him. Ria just shot back, if he says that then he won't. Ria had his own little quirks, so it didn't shock him at all when the nights turned out to be loaded with weirdos like that. Meanwhile, Dex sat on the floor by a stone wall, stunned at how everything had turned on him, while the cat ripped at his fur because it demanded more relics, and some unknown voice spat that it was disgusting. Since Divine Blade had sunk that far, Dex couldn't figure out who in the world was standing here. The unknown man stepped forward, smiled, and said, I'm Grice, just an ordinary demon, then added, so go on, you don't need to swing that sword. Dex wants to sit down and hammer out a peace deal, but the vial hits him like a punch. Its power feels just like Aurelix. Grace snaps back that they're demons and they've been hunting for people for ages. And they managed to crack the recipe for illegal drugs that hit just like the relics, because Dex was already itching to chase that rush again. The rabid cat snapped and begged no, demanded that he hand the cat over while it jabbed the demon with its dagger. The demon smirked and said sure, but only if he went and killed a man named Yeji. Real squirmed on Yeji's lap and made the poor guy feel mortified. Then he finally turned to her and snapped, that's enough. Now lean in, watch this with full attention. She never saw that coming. His reaction hit her like a shock, embarrassment flaring up, so she spun away from him and crossed to the other side of the room, and Yeji could only feel awkward as the tension hung there. He told her to stop pulling that face because he couldn't risk her blacking out again, and she had to drag herself into getting used to it, bit by bit. Riot was fuming, but she still agreed, and honestly, it's been ages since Yeji landed in this world. To crank up Ria's strength, every morning starts with a kiss-fueled session, yet Ria felt crushed because she wanted even more, and Yeji jumped in to try to cheer her up. Ria told Yeji that his bodily fluids were so addictive she couldn't stop wanting more, and that she wanted to lock lips with him forever. Then Yeji blurted out that there was no need to rephrase any of it. Yeji's jaw dropped at what Ria blurted out. He had zero clue what to do with any bodily fluids. In his twisted fantasies, he swore she loved every bit of him, and then, all at once, shame crashed over him for what he'd been thinking. Adai strode up to the cave and shouted for Yeji, but the younger Lizni blocked his way, so Adai demanded if the guy was inside. Yeji answered from within, confirming he was right there. Yeji asked the guy what he wanted and even joked about whether he still needed his hair, but Adai cut in. He didn't want hair at all. He just wanted advice, and Yeji's jaw dropped when he said it, because Adai then revealed his younger sister had been acting wildly strange. He told them his sister was rattled and all over the place, and it had never hit him this hard before. One guy even said he felt great that she was finally healed by them, but he couldn't shake the worry whenever she acted like this, and when Ria heard it, she went quiet and started thinking. Ria warned her it could be side effects, and Yeji's eyes narrowed as she stared at Ria, uneasy, terrified, because the girl had heard the relics might be hiding a forbidden substance. She warned, if someone swallows a relic and can't keep feeding it regularly, the stress starts swallowing them from the inside, and it can even end in death. Adai's heart slammed in fear when he heard it. He couldn't believe this was going to be so deadly for his sister. Yeji rushed in, trying to calm him down. Yeji figured if those relics are this dangerous, Ria's probably in bad shape too, and he pushed, come on, let's go check it out no matter what. The guys rolled into Bear Village and Yeji gasped, man, it's busy here. The whole place buzzed with cheerful, friendly faces, and Adai leaned in like, it's all because of you, Yeji, leaving the guy stunned. Adai bragged that Yeji's hair mixed into their fertilizers was the perfect fix. Boom, their apples and tomatoes got even tastier, and now orders are pouring in from a famous restaurant in the capital, while Yejin can't stop thinking about how wild his hair has got. Turns out Yeji's hair could power the whole village's growth. Seriously, nobody saw that coming. Then, out of nowhere, Adai popped up and declared, we've arrived. Before the guys stood a massive, gorgeous mansion, then a Dai of all things dropped the bombshell. Even with that wild look, he was still the head of the village, and the guys stared in shock as the bandit act turned out to be pure authority. A girl burst out of the house, spun to a Dai and snapped, "You're way too late, where have you been?" Yeji froze in shock and blurted, "You're adorable." Then the Dai wrapped his arms around his sister and she fought to wriggle free of his embrace. He told him, "Look at my sister, tell me she isn't cute." Then Adia's eyes narrowed as she snapped, "Who are all these people?" Before adding, "I already told you not to bring strangers into the village." The guy told his sister they were nobody, then thrust Yeji into her arms and insisted he was the one who saved her, leaving the girl stunned for a split second before she erupted into a sudden scream. She dropped to her knees, thanking Yeji over and over for saving her, then blurted out an apology for being rude earlier, while the guy just waved it off and told her she didn't need to worry. The girl insisted Yejin was pure kindness. She only pointed at those rags, told her to wait, and then moments later the girl came back wearing a stunning dress. Adai was totally shocked, then he demanded to know if she'd been hiding those things, saying she'd wear them only when she had a boyfriend, but she shrugged off the tension, snapped back, and told him to ask her brother, claiming the weird talks were just about her everyday clothes. The girl whipped around to Yeji and admitted they had almost nothing to offer, then told them to settle in like they owned the place, before turning away and rushing off to cook dinner. Yeji reached out to Adai and told him she finally understood why he'd been spiraling, and that left Adai completely rattled, terrified, confused, and convinced it was all because of that relic. Soon the table exploded with delicious food and the guys stared in pure shock because the girl just grinned and said she'd poured every ounce of her cooking skills into it, then offered them the first bite. Yeji took one bite and the guy lit up like she just served him heaven. He practically raved about how insanely tasty it was, and Yeji blushed, thinking, "One day, I'm gonna be a wife so great he won't believe it." Morel was rocked with shock and embarrassment, and Adai told her it was way too early for that, so she snapped, "Shut up." The girl leaned in and asked if Ria and Listen liked the food, and they lit up. Everything was delicious. Ria even pushed for her recipe, and Yeji couldn't help but think these girls were really getting along. He must have thought Ria had crossed paths with Myria before they even stepped into this place, because the way she'd cursed the whole village, nobody else allowed to say a single word about her. Now he's stuck wondering what she did to make it happen. Yeji whirled toward Adai. He leaned in and demanded whether Ria had ever shown up before, and right then, Adai slipped from his grip and clattered to the floor. The guy shot out an apology and admitted he felt a bit sick. Adai's excitement and fear tangled in her chest. She said she'd head to her room to lie down and told everyone to enjoy dinner, while Meryl stared at her brother, confused. Ria looked totally lost and demanded answers, and when she pushed again and again, Yeji finally shrugged, said he had no clue, but couldn't stop wondering what she'd done. Ria swore she'd stroll around the village to see what her curse really does, and Yeji snapped that it was pitch dark out there, so watch yourself, until Ria turned to Lizzie and asked if she'd come along. Yeji charged up the stairs thinking, since Adai asked, I've gotta check on my Ria, and then he hauled himself to the door and knocked. He asked to step inside and Maria swung the door open to let Yeji in, then Yeji's room hit with cozy, comfy vibes. Myria blurted out an apology for the clothes on her chair, then patted the bed and told him to sit. He thanked her and slid onto the mattress, then his nose caught it. Something smelled ridiculously delicious. For the first time, he realized he was sitting in a teenage girl's room. Yeji was staring at Myria, bouncing with excitement, and the guy had to get to the bottom of it, so he rushed over and asked what happened and whether she was okay. Maria spun to Yeji and blurted, I love you. Yeji stared back, totally confused, while Maria held her breath, waiting for his answer, like the words couldn't possibly be real. Maria blurted out that she loved Yeji, and the poor guy awkwardly snapped his head toward her. Myria blurted that the second she thinks about him, her heart starts hammering like she's not even in her own body. She can feel her brother's worry, but she can't do a thing about it, and then Yeji's mind raced, scrambling for an excuse that could match her words. And in the end, he finally nailed the truth, love. The guy said Myria was acting so weird because she'd fallen for someone, and that hit him hard. It sucked that he hadn't caught it sooner because nobody had ever fallen for him before. Yeji just had to try and make sense of what she was feeling. Myria leaned in and confessed her biggest dream, to become a fashion designer in the capital. Then she dragged her fingers smoothly over her clothes like they already belonged on the runway. Yeji's jaw dropped. This whole thing was pulled off by a little girl. She just nodded, grinning, and said they're wildly popular because in the capital's bazaars they get snatched up in seconds, and Yeji couldn't believe it. Myria wasn't exactly confident when it came to clothes, until she finally leaned in and asked him again, trying to nail down whether he really knew the truth that almost all of their clothes were designed by humans. She's always been the kind of girl who bows to anyone who helps others, and she even treats those helpers like gods, so when she heard a man cured her illness, her heart snapped into place. It had to be fate. Now that she'd finally met him, she knew she truly loved him, and when she said it out loud, he instantly blushed like he'd been caught in the middle of his own feelings. Yeji opened his mouth to talk, but the girl cut him off fast. She said it didn't mean she was trying to make him repeat the same thing. She knew he already had Ria, and she knew it. She was never his type. The guy even insisted, it's not like that. He stared at the truth. Technically, he and Ria weren't a couple. Then Marius leaned in and said, if it works for you. She's all set to be his mistress, ready to serve him the moment he calls, while she lifts her skirt. He shut his eyes and tried to stop the girl, but she kept stripping anyway, until she finally stood right in front of him in nothing but her underwear. He couldn't wrap his head around what was happening, but even if he wasn't an expert, he swore her underwear looked just like the stuff back in Japan, and honestly, who comes up with the idea of tying ribbons to underwear like that? Yeji snapped back to reality, then realized Myria was already sprawled on his lap, tugging at his clothes like she'd been there the whole time, and she swung her gaze to the guy. If he doesn't want it, he'd better not be scared to say no. Myria leaned in, grabbed for his lips, and then sealed her mouth against Yeji's, while the tail behind her snapped upright in an instant. And she kept going at it with the guy. Then she finally yanked away from his lips, let out a loud breath, and felt those charges explode across her body. She stared in shock, realizing just how insanely strong he was and what she really was. Yeji realized the relic's aphrodisiac had finally kicked in, and she saw the girl yank up the top of her underwear and look straight at her. This was about to start, and she wanted Yeji to feel it. Arya crashed her lips against his again. Her eyes bulged wide. She screamed at the top of her lungs in sheer pleasure, and drool spilled from her mouth. Yeji was left reeling by what she was seeing, totally frozen, not a clue what to do next. Eventually, the girl finally passed out, and the guy scrambled to cover her as shame washed over her for what had just happened, while Marius crumpled into tears, furious at herself for even failing to serve him in bed. Yeji told Myria not to spiral. Normal girls peak at about a minute, but Ria can push through for around 10, and Myria still wore that crushing sadness. He figured she only wanted to thank him for saving her, until it hit him out of nowhere, and he demanded she start making clothes for the both of them. Myria practically leapt out of bed and shot back an immediate yes. If her skills could help him, she'd be the happiest girl alive, and nothing could beat that feeling. You kept pushing to find out what she had to give back for those clothes, because even if she wanted to repay him, he couldn't just take the favor. He had to hand her a trade for every stitch she made for them. Myria flashed a sly grin and dared him to watch. Then, right as the guy spun around in pure confusion, she slammed back into his lips, and Yeji's face erupted into a full-on blush. Myria chased the reward like a dare. She wanted a few kisses from him, then immediately pressed her finger to her own lips, teasing him. Next day rolled in, and Lizen showed up rocking a fresh outfit. Yeji immediately said it fit her perfectly. Then Ria finally clocked what Myria had done for them. The girl figured they had to repay her for this, and the guy shot back right away, telling her not to stress. He'd already got a plan. While that happened, Myria was stitching together a fresh outfit, and her brother noticed it again. He was acting weird. Then boom, an explosion of light hit, and Yeji snapped his hands up to shield his eyes, staring in shock as the world flipped dark with no warning, leaving him clueless about what just happened or why the brightness vanished. Suddenly, it hit him. There he was, staring straight at Ria as she stood in front of him and lifted her skirt. Realizing it, he yanked himself back, blurted out an apology to the girl, and swore he didn't mean to do it. Ria waved it off, saying it was just an accident, and Yeji was left completely stunned, trying to piece together how this all somehow happened to him. He remembered the lizard's command. Then they tore into the ground around the shelter, and right as they struck, a blinding light burst into the sky. He spun around, asked the girls how they'd gotten there, and Ria shot back that he probably had the teleporter ion device stashed under the ground. The girl thought they were safe undercover underground, and Yeji snapped with shock, asking, why would anyone build something like this underground in the first place? He pressed his hand to the wall and said it was built in a way the current world can't even reach, and then he shot back, so, did humans make it? Ria nodded along, and then her eyes widened because this place looked just like the ruins he'd stumbled on when he was summoned. Somebody had definitely lived here once. The girl snapped that he should stop digging so deep because there could be more terrifying stuff lurking underground, and Yeji turned to Ria, asking whether her grandfather had ever warned her about this place, but the girl shook her head, saying she'd never heard a word like that from him. The guy claimed there was a reason he'd kept it hidden, then listened, suddenly snapped his head toward something, panic hitting him. Yeji warned, "This place feels dangerous," and right then a massive golem loomed behind the guys. When they spun around and saw it, fear hit them instantly. The golem let out eerie growls, claimed it had spotted intruders, and then snapped, "Combat mode engaged." Now, Yeji finally got why Ria's grandfather never spilled the truth about this place, but he still couldn't figure out what that thing even was, even after those terrifying noises. Battle prep was done, and the intruders got cut off before they could make a move. The massive stone guard wound up for a brutal swing, but the guys snapped out of the way just in time. Ria snapped into the truth. It was a golem, and Yeji pressed her question again, realizing this was one of those human-made weapons, the kind of legend says could wipe out an entire country and that nobody had ever managed to beat. A girl and a guy scrambled to escape his attacks, and somehow they made it this far only because he had human abilities, so if the golem was built by humans. When another human force steps in, he's suddenly helpless, and Yeji swore he had no chance. Then Ria shot the master a look and demanded he stay back. With a snap, a ball formed in the girl's hand and she fired her explosive bullet again. Those bullets were already screaming toward the golem, but it snapped up its protective barrier and shut them down. Ria couldn't wrap her head around it. It wasn't just a shield, it was an anti-magic barrier. The guy demanded proof again, and the girl finally spilled the truth. It was one of the people's techniques, a device that shuts down magic completely. She never in a million years expected the golems to come packed with a claw clock. Yeji didn't get every detail, but one thing was crystal clear. This golem was even more dangerous than before because no matter how she tried, even magic couldn't touch him. Yeji had no clue what to do with those ancient human tools, but the golem was already charging in fast. Everyone saw it coming, and Ria snapped up an ice shield. With one brutal swing from Golem, the shield shattered into cracks at once. Then, at his command post, they reported that something had been spotted, blocking their path. Before anyone could react, his hand snapped into a drill and bored straight into the shield. Right away, while Yeji realized she was running out of time, then he spotted something. It was an emergency shutdown button. He wasn't even sure he'd read it right, but then reality hit. This was their shot. The golem clocked it instantly, seeing his opponent had finally run out of hiding. The stone guardian snapped over to Yeji, so Ria immediately roared at the master. Dust blasted into the air, and from it emerged a guy clutching a piece of the golem, screaming at him to get it. Yeji slammed the button, and it totally shocked Ria and Lee Sin. The golem powered down mid-sentence, declaring the human life signal was confirmed, and that it was time to start shutting off combat mode. The guy snapped out a breath and blurted that they were saved, then dropped from the golem's back, and Ria and Lee Sin bolted straight to him, already wrapping him up in a hug, right as the system flashed that he'd been summoned by her brand new master. Everyone spun around, baffled, and boom, this girl just materialized out of thin air, like a doll coming to life as her transformation kicked in. A short-haired girl with jet black hair bowed to him and blurted out a heartfelt thank you for yanking her out of her sleep. He stared at her moves, stunned out of his mind, then stammered, "Golem," and his partner immediately shot daggers because this mysterious woman wouldn't stop watching him. He stared at the short black-haired girl in shock because the golem had just transformed into her, and he still couldn't wrap his head around it. The black-haired girl strode up and introduced herself, Kazumi. She was one of the golems, and her job was simple: stand guard over the first floor of the hot springs. The guy and his crew, the slug and the elf girl included, were totally shocked because this was the first time they'd ever heard of hot springs, and then, after a beat, they erupted in loud cries of pure amazement. Kazumi led them to a steaming hot spring spot. The hot springs hid beneath the ruins, and the floor was built so Mr. Casey could swim in comfort. Then this guy, once he heard about Casey, tried to corner the golem for answers about some unknown person, so I went straight to Kazumi. Kazumi told Casey that she was the one who built her, and yeah, she'd been crowned a genius inventor, but the truth was brutal. She hated people. To wipe out the boredom, she built a secret underground facility, and out of that chaos, protectors were born to guard it. The guy then clocked the inventor, a total introvert. Once he found out about KC, the guy turned to the girl and demanded to know where the other golems were. Then she revealed they were right nearby. Thanks to Kazumi's own know-how, she realized 4 more golems here weren't just enemies, they were her sisters, each one posted to guard the floor of an underground facility. To push forward, they had to smash their enemies first, and the guy couldn't shake the weird feeling about that. Still, he had to admit it, this place had hot springs. You could soak in them, and that was it, nothing else. The guy's companion was freaking out, asking how to keep the water temperature from drifting, and she shot that question straight at the golem. Kazumi swung around and picked up the slime monster. Most of the machines here ran on magic ripped straight from a human body, and as long as the owner stayed close to the floor's hot springs, everything powered up like it was meant to. He's already used to life in this world, and now he knows exactly what to do. He made the choice that's best for him. Stop overthinking, avoid anything complicated, and keep things simple because it's the most convenient path. After checking the floor, he decided this spot was going to be his base, somewhere he could live, breathe, and finally relax, not just hide. Besides, that upstairs shelter was temporary, so he grabbed this place as his own and claimed it. To keep living in peace, they'd need enough power to stop entire countries from stepping on them, so the girl finally understood they'd have to run from that safe shelter sooner or later. And yeah, he looked around and thought, man, this place is way too well guarded. The golems men forged were terrifyingly strong, one of them on your side beats 100 allies every time. But this guy refused to do what his companion demanded, at least for now, keeping everything exactly as it was. The elf girl clocked his fear about the golems in a heartbeat, then she sidestepped the whole worry and pushed to move their things to that place. Kazumi realized she wanted out, told her the route to the top, and while she did, slime sat pretty on the golem like it had everything under control. He practically burst with relief when Ria agreed to stay here. No way were they finding another spot with hot springs this ridiculously magnificent. He loved the life he had, calm, easy, and steady, and nothing in this world was about to drag him out of it. Soon, they shoved every last belonging into the room, and after a bit the guy slammed all the furniture and little odds and ends into perfect spots. It was time for him to hit the hot springs, and that guy was living his best life, lounging in a massive thermal pool like it was heaven. After he finished soaking, Kazumi stepped in and gave him a massage. He sprawled in bliss, letting the girl's hands work over his body, and he couldn't get enough of Golem massaging him. Her touch unknotted his tight, clogged muscles until they finally relaxed, and he honestly called her a real pro at Thai massage. That massage hit him so hard he wanted it to last forever. Kazumi's technique was flawless, the best in the whole world for him. She didn't bat an eye because 80% of her body was basically built from massage functions. Meanwhile, the golems Casey made are up and running their own private checkup. Even while he was still basking in the massage, he suddenly got hit with shock because the girl was ridiculously strong. She was only using 20% of her functions for battle, yet she flat out shut him down. Out of the remaining 20%, most handled comms and combat modules were just 2%, so he figured it was smarter to stay put and not push up to the other floors. Right there in the middle of his water treatment, he suddenly craved milk coffee, and Kazumi didn't say no. She told him to wait a second, and he just stood there, baffled, before turning his head and finding she'd already brought him a drink, plus a jar. To Kazumi, humans were total oddballs, and her mistress, Casey, even demanded milk coffee right after her bath, so the guy nearly dropped his jaw at the fact that this drink existed in their world. He ripped open the sealed drink can with instant curiosity, then a nasty, foul stench burst out, turning the whole moment sour. Reeling from that brutal stench, he slapped his hand over his nose and bolted, because the milk's timer was up and now it reeked like a disaster. Kazumi shot her hand to her nose at that awful smell, then apologized to the guy, since the note coffee had been locked away for 10,000 years. The guy was stunned the jar was still unbroken after all that time, like a real miracle. After that, the guy craved another soak in the hot springs to recharge, and since there were tons of pools here, he decided to hit every single one, starting with an electric pool, then a milk pool, and finally a jacuzzi. The guy snapped around and froze. There was a man right behind him, Ria. The girl, wrapped in a single towel, blushed hard and stared at her master, mortified. He caught sight of her in just a towel that barely covered the parts that mattered, and his face went dead blank with pure confusion. Eyes locked wide, he told Ria they'd agreed to trade swimming turns because that bathhouse was all one big setup. She stammered that she was only doing her duty, serving him by rubbing the master's back. Then she glanced at the floor, all flustered and sinking like a wilted flower. He couldn't stand the thought of her hurting, so he nodded and swallowed his pride. He agreed to her proposal, and that meant he'd accept her help too. He had zero choices, life just slammed into him that way. This was the girl's job, plain and simple, no hidden message at all. And still, the guy couldn't help it. Her presence left him mortified. But he couldn't shake it. Nothing could silence his thoughts, because seeing that girl help him was way too tempting to ignore. Yeji couldn't stop staring at the girl while she wrestled the shower water onto him. He kept his eyes locked on the mirror where Ria's reflection stared back, and the girl caught it too. She snapped her back to him and clutched herself with her hands right away, and Ria couldn't understand what he was even staring at. Then the girl had a thought. He must have clocked her because she looked ugly. But Yeji shot down her own self-deprecating talk, and he fired back that no, her curves were downright attractive. Still, the moment her smile faded, his compliments curled into something ugly inside him, and he felt sick with shame. Rio lit up at what the guy said. She shot him a quick thank you for the compliment, because she honestly never expected anyone to praise her for such ugly body proportions. Turns out, in this world, people worship tiny bodies, while anyone with a bigger frame gets labeled stupid, obscene, and downright sloppy. He finally got it out. In another world, beauty meant something totally different than back home, and it didn't even bother him. He was one of those guys who lived for big, glorious proportions. Ria's jaw dropped, so the guy was actually part of some totally unknown group of people who obsess over huge physiques. And Master Yeji, she'd always seen him as the nicest gentleman around, so learning he belonged to that kind of crowd hit her like a punch. She grilled the guy, asking if his words were just a joke or slick improvising to calm her down, because the truth was, the man had serious, outstanding literary talent. When she found out he really was part of that kind of club, her face lit up with joy. Getting to meet him felt like a huge honor. Yeji couldn't believe it. In a world like this, a group that big was somehow still totally unpopular. He had zero idea how to tell the girl he truly loved how she looked until she shot back, "Don't look at me until I say so." Yeji swallowed hard, agreed, and turned away from her. Ria blushed and yanked out a bottle of gel, and the guy suddenly caught a sweet, pleasant scent right next to him. Ria told Rosa to fetch a special body gel for her. Only the royal capital could get it, so the girl hurried and sealed the deal, swearing the purchase was the start of her duty. And just then, a towel clattered to the floor. The girl, exposed and trembling, pressed into her boyfriend's body and smeared the foam gel she'd made all over herself, until he jerked back, shocked by her sudden touch, and then she shoved the foam onto Yeji's back with her own body. The same guy was stunned by what she did, but terror and embarrassment hit him at once. He stared at her with wide, panicked eyes like he didn't know what to say. The moment he shifted like that, she instantly sagged, her smile collapsing into sadness. She figured he must have felt awkward about her actions. Tears in her eyes, she told him she was sure Tom would love it. After all, he'd already said he liked her big, bold body proportions. Ria still hadn't stepped back from the guy, so he could feel her body against him, and Yeji was thrilled. His smile gave him away the moment the girl noticed. Soon, she clocked how he reacted when his hands brushed her body, and the poor guy looked totally lost, like he didn't know what he was feeling. Ria totally ignored his embarrassment. She was ecstatic that her master loved her big, bold body, and she squeezed Yeji in a happy, tight hug. The girl practically glowed with joy, and that shift left the guy feeling way less embarrassed, so he finally went along with everything she did. After Ria slathered the gel across his back, she shot a look at Yeji and asked if she could rub his front, only for the guy to light up with excitement and confusion at the same time. When Yeji didn't catch the consent, Ria got hurt, convinced he still didn't want her body. Because she's hurting, he needs her consent first, because if she starts washing his front and the sight gets too pretty, his body might not be able to hold back its reaction. Then his mind started racing, imagining himself getting wild with an elf girl, convinced that once he crossed that line, there'd be no turning back. Yeji couldn't stop worrying about that girl. Was she really going to be okay after everything? And as for him, he was scared Ria didn't truly like him, even though he was sure she respected him, because on this whole planet, he was the only one she had. As far as he could tell, she only adored him because he was human. He had no clue if she liked who he really was. Yeji had already tangled in her thoughts, but she didn't have time to answer before Slimy burst into the bathhouse screaming. A little girl suddenly popped into the room, and when she showed herself to them, Slimy instantly recoiled. Something about her was swollen and nasty in all the wrong ways. The guy rushed up to Slimy, staring like he was thrilled, but Yeji's gut flipped the moment she saw her strange look. She couldn't shake the feeling something was seriously off. The girl was hit with a brutal sickness. Nausea roared louder and louder until she started vomiting, and the guy had to leap back as the mess turned slimy. She finally spit out the water and pushed through. Turns out she guzzled way too much water from the bathroom where he'd been bathing, and Yoji didn't forget it. When he'd been drinking from the river before Slimy showed up, she'd felt his human strength and came straight at him. Ria scooped Slimy up and rushed her to her room, and I swear I should have jumped in to help that girl. The guy then turned and thanked her like she just saved the world. The girl, clutching Slimy, still hadn't bounced back from what just happened. She felt mortified, cheeks burning, and hurried to her room in pure embarrassment. While after Ria stormed off with Slimy, the guy slipped back to the pool and sprawled there alone, resting in silence. Yeji watched Ria's face flush red, and then it hit. He finally understood he couldn't pull this off with a girl, and that realization slammed him with equal parts disappointment and relief. He joked to himself that his shaky choices would doom him to loneliness forever. While the others were soaking in the hot springs, something wild was unfolding deep in the forest. The monster slammed into the girl with attack after attack, and when the dust cleared, her enemy demanded where her magic came from, only to realize it was born from her own body, and it matched the exact power of that man. But the long-haired girl in black couldn't get a word out. She panted hard, trying to steady herself after his brutal attacks. The monster heard nothing, took that silence as a challenge, and its rage surged higher and higher. Rosa was in grave danger. Ria, Slimy, and Yeji spilled outside into the fresh air, where the weather felt perfect, so the three of them strolled along, soaking up every second of the walk. Out of nowhere, a soft sigh slipped from behind him, and he spun around in one quick jolt, only to find bushes packed with lush green leaves, nothing more, and so, with Ria at his side, they yanked the distracting foliage aside with their own hands. Turns out it was Rosetta, long black hair, hit hard by that monster and fighting for breath while he panicked, racing to see if she'd make it. Then Rosa stirred the moment she saw him and managed to call his name in a faint, shaky voice. Right after she blurted out, "Master Yeji," the girl got injured again. She just tugged at the wound with her own moves. The guy was helpless, so Ria rushed over, scooped Rosetta onto her lap, and started fixing her up. The girl unleashed healing magic and sealed Rose's wounds, starting with the worst one until only a scar remained. Rosetta clung to Ria tight and poured out her gratitude for saving her. And the girl started nuzzling her face all over the elf's body. She only patted Rosa on the cheek, cutting off her obscene antics, and Rosetta barked, "Get out." Dex, that's the monster's name, is about to show up here, and the whole place instantly went grim. When people heard Dex was coming, everyone frowned hard, and Yeji just couldn't believe it. I mean, this monster already knew who that guy was. Right then, Yeji finally understood he was stepping into something ugly. Rosetta told them she'd bumped into Dex in Markov village just 10 meters from here. Then the monster drifted off, hunting for the magical power humans carry, and before long, he'll find them. Rosetta's words hit the guy like a punch, and Dex started hunting for the power of people. Yet he couldn't wrap his head around why that man wanted his power at all, until Ria snapped him back and called out to Yeji, who was still stuck in deep thought. The bear village was on the edge of disaster, because they power their magic with Yeji's hair, and Dex was probably about to strike right at her. Yeji and Ria tore off at full speed toward the village, praying it would hold steady, and that every one of his familiar villagers would walk away unhurt. As they neared the village, a wild flicker of flame burst in and swallowed every last house. The guy, panting hard after running for ages, gaped at the roaring fire in pure horror. Then someone shouted his name. It was Adai, a villager Yeji knew. His face was a wreck, and all he could do was choke out sobs from pure grief. Yeji stepped up, desperate to know what was wrong, and Adai, through trembling tears, insisted he was fine. Myria was ripped away in an abduction, and Adai's tears kept pouring. He was crushed by the devastating loss of his village. A monstrous cat-shaped beast tore into them, and Yeji snapped to it. It was Dex. Myria had soaked up the biggest chunk of human power, so Dex snatched her. For him, that moment was unforgivable. Rage boiled as Dex's attack left too many innocent people hurt. Rage snapped through him as he clutched his fists so tight his knuckles went white. Ria clocked how bad he was, and Yeji pushed him to spill where he might be. Then Adai blurted to Tom that Dex was inside the village church, and it didn't stop there. It threw in a threat too. So he burst into tears, apologized to Yeji, and begged him, pleading with everything he had, to save Myria because he refused to let her get hurt. Yeji shot Tom a reassuring look and promised he'd save Myria. Then he snapped orders to Adai to evacuate every last resident from the village, and Adai immediately accepted the command. Yeji backed away from the guy, stared at his trembling hand, and yeah, he was absolutely terrified, but he was the only person left in this world. He has to break out of this place fast, because the guy's body won't stop trembling even as he tries to steady himself. Rhea slips up silently and hands him the ring. It wasn't just some ring, it was a demon ring, and it sapped magic itself. One touch and the guy's strength dropped 1,000-fold. He stared at her, utterly stunned, because he couldn't wrap his head around why she'd hand him an artifact meant to wreck her own powers. Rhea told him that if the master lets loose with everything he's got, the whole continent will go under. So yeah, the guy was hit with the shocking news and couldn't believe it. The girl kept talking. When that guy wore a ring, he could only wipe out the village, and Yeji couldn't believe it. Even with the ring on, he had the power to destroy an entire village. Of course, it'd be way safer for Rhea if he could take down Dex without magic, because that ring is his lifeline, the backup plan if everything goes south. Yeji kicked the church doors open with pure confidence and strode inside. Dex immediately clocked him and greeted him at once, because that beast man was fully expecting someone. Dex couldn't wait for Yeji to show up. His chin drooled and the man's magic hit his senses hard. Then, out of nowhere, someone yelled for Yeji. It was Myria, locked down on a cross, tied tight and helpless. Relief flooded her face as she stared at the guy, bright with hope, and from a distance, Yeji scanned her for any sign of harm. Luckily, the girl walked away unscathed, and the guy rushed in to calm her down, promising they'd save her. Myria finally steadied her breath, then stared in awe at the hero who'd come to rescue her. While Yagi got crushed under a mountain of magic, Ryo swung into action as a feared combat expert of the Royal Knights, ready to take on any Dex without paying a deadly price. That's why he didn't unleash the attack himself. He barked the order to the girl. Rhea caught it instantly, and she started gearing up to strike. Since she's an elf, magic was her weapon, and suddenly fireballs burst into the sky above them. Rhea snapped her spell Flaming Bullet * and hurled the attack at Dex, who blinked in shock for a beat, then steadied himself, smirked, and went for it. The fireballs still had a bit of distance left to blast him, but they vanished before they could land another hit. The guy and the girl stared at Rhea's blasted-out attack in stunned silence, because the Dex had already wrapped himself in a barrier right near his body, blocking those fireballs from ever hurting him. Rhea and Yeji stared in disbelief. Dex snapped off an anti-magic shield spell, and Kazumi mirrored it with the same protection, because that guy finally understood how serious this was, especially since Dex could somehow pull off human magic techniques. Rhea caught it too and told the guy Dex was squeezing way more power out those relics than the elf ever could. Then Yeji started slipping his hand into his pants pocket. He yanked the ring Rhea had given him into the light, because if her attacks didn't land, he'd have to do this, and there was no other way. Then he froze mid-thought, staring at the ring sitting on his palm, fighting the fact that he didn't want to use it. Yeji calmly called to the girl beside him, told her to grab Myria and get out of the building, then slipped the ring onto his finger, because now he was fully set to charge straight into battle. As soon as he finished his words, the guy snapped his focus onto his opponent, and he just waited, calm as ice, for the next strike to come. The girl nodded, snapped into action the moment her master spoke, vanished from her seat, and begged him to do everything he could to crush their enemy. Rhea flared her powers and rocketed upward, aiming straight for Myria, and that beastly cat instantly clocked what she was doing as the girl dropped onto the wooden cross where Myria was tied. Rhea tore Dex's hostage free with fire magic. Then boom, a beastman lunged at her from the side, swinging razor-sharp shark claws, but while she clutched Myria in her arms, she ducked and dodged with ease. Rhea cradled Myria in her arms and bolted out of Dex, racing straight for the exit. Dex's man spotted the girl slipping from the church and followed the order instantly, while Dex himself noticed them leaving and shrugged it off. When it hit them, this beastman didn't care about them at all. He just needed one guy. Yeji was fuming, first at the cat-like guy's behavior, then at his outright rude look, so he couldn't take it and tried to flip the script by introducing him as a beautiful girl. The guy in his head hit the filter on a beautiful girl, and just like that, the animal boy's look snapped into place as a gorgeous cat-eared girl. Even while he tried to paint her as some seductive animal girl, her words and moves kept slipping through his excuses. Without warning, the gorgeous girl's face twisted into a beastly monster, just one goal burning in its eyes: kill Yeji, and Yeji instantly felt sick. As soon as that beautiful girl filter vanished, Dex's terrifying face slammed back into view, then he lunged at the guy, and Yeji slipped out of the way with a clean dodge. The guy managed to react just in time. If he'd hesitated even a second, Dex was sure he wouldn't have dodged. Yeji shot to his feet, staring down his enemy with worry burning in his eyes. He was determined to use the move Ria taught him to take down Dex. Yeji, just like Ria, went all in on the flaming bullet fire magic style. Then, right in front of him, a monstrous fireball erupted out of nowhere, dwarfing hers. The guy couldn't even process it. He just gawked wide-eyed at the fireball he'd made, and Dex looked just as stunned because the flaming bullet snapped to life and blasted straight at him. The thunderous roar, a walloping explosion, ripped through the church. Yeji crumpled to the floor after his magic got blasted, and he clutched a ring as the hit tore the church apart until it was barely standing. He figured it had to be a cooking spell because he still remembered how Ria had used him just for that. Yeji stared in shock that he'd held back to only 1/1000th of his strength. And out of nowhere, a nasty little giggle snapped up right beside him. It was Dex. Somehow the attacker's strike didn't even scratch him. That savage cat immediately praised him, and Yeji stared in pure amazement because this guy just stood there and took a fireball the size of a monster without flinching. Dex never imagined he'd ever be hit with Inferno, that legendary fire magic, yet that's exactly what he got from a human, and the moment he used it, the guy was mortified by his own attack's name. Dex, worn ragged and shaking, pawed into his trousers like he was searching for the last thread of hope. Yeji had no clue what he was doing, but the monster had pushed him into it with no mercy, and then, finally, Dex pulled out a bottle of pills. With hands shaking like crazy, Dex downed the whole vial in one go, and boom, the enemy's body started ballooning bigger and bigger while Yeji just gawked, eyes stretched wide at every single second of the chaos. Crouching on his paws, the massive animal-like cat stalked toward the angry guy, still reeling from everything that just happened, convinced Dex was about to kick off an all-out monster war. He went for magic again, and without even changing the spell, he blasted his opponent with a flaming bullet. A blazing fireball tore toward his enemy, and boom, explosions ripped through the area again, but the guy's blast didn't even scratch Dex. Yeji hurled another flaming bullet spell, but the ring couldn't take his power. Crack, snap, it shattered. Then the beast man lunged straight at Yeji, convinced he'd crush him. Dex pinned the guy with his paw and clawed at his fragile body, trying to tear him open while Yeji clocked how screwed he was, because all the while he was remembering Ria and Slimy, the two waiting for him. He was pissed because he'd finally found the perfect place to live, only to realize he couldn't squeeze his paw in there to snag his prey. Dex blinked in shock, then started grinding and forcing his paw anyway while the beastman fumed, desperate to get this guy out of the way already. Right then, Yeji dug in with all his strength and smashed his opponent back, blasting him flying a long distance, because the guy refused to lose the perfect spot he'd finally found and the company he brought with him. Yeji's punch blasted him airborne. He shot up like a cannonball. Yeji steadied himself, landed with a soft thump, and the bruiser instantly snapped awake, spinning left and right like crazy, hunting for a deck until the huge opponent crashed down in his face. The guy gawked at the crater that swallowed the battlefield. Right in its center stood the opponent who just got beaten, and Yeji couldn't help it. It hit him like a lightning strike. He'd won. The girls sprinted to the winning guy, and he got swallowed up in their arms. Ria even blurted out an apology for not letting him go, because after the explosion she was terrified for his condition, while Yeji soaked up every hug, grinning like he'd finally get to feel what this meant. He shot into power the moment he showed up in this world, like magic had supercharged his body. And for a second, everything was finally all right because he looked down at the girls he'd been holding, smiled, and eased their fear with his grin. With that kind of strength, he'll sweep danger away and keep everyone safe. Yeji, buzzing from the wind, bolted into Maria and Ria's arms, and he let out a breath of pure relief because they were finally okay. The girls lit up because he didn't just hug them back, he actually worried about them too, and then, bam, a car bomb veered toward the company. He was thrilled his sister was safe and sound. She got rescued just in time, while that guy tried to edge closer to Maria, practically itching to hug her too. But she shoved him back. No hug, no warmth, and Maria's fury flared because he dared to reach for her like he was taking advantage of the chaos. Adai couldn't hide his joy. He told the girl to stop being shy with him, but Maria didn't back down from her anger. Yeji flushed with embarrassment, and Adai still had to handle Dex in the middle of it all. And now, after all the chaos, peace finally returned. Yeji and Ria awkwardly stared as brother and sister bumbled through their light, silly back and forth. Yeji jumped in and helped the villagers clear the burned wreckage, and while everyone worked, kids swarmed around him, laughing and playing like the flames couldn't touch their joy. After a while, the exhausted guy hit the grass and finally took a breather. Most of the hard work was already done. Dex slammed into Bear Village and lit it up, but Slimy snapped into action. She swallowed the water herself and crushed the flame's source before the whole place could burn, and then Yeji was summoned. It was Rhea, eyes locked on him. She gripped a handkerchief tight and started wiping the sweat off the guy's forehead like it was urgent. Rhea and the guy rebuilt the village from the ground up, but Dex smashed the place because of him, so he stood up and took full responsibility for the chaos, then pushed even harder to keep helping the villagers with newfound strength. Rhea stared at her handkerchief, grinning because she'd wiped that guy's sweat. Now it was his ghost in fabric. She pulled the cloth to her face and breathed in the last trace of his scent like it might vanish any second. Yeji whipped her head around, confused, and right away the girl yanked the handkerchief away. He also remembered blasting the village church with his magic, so he rushed to apologize, but the residents waved it off, telling him they'd already rebuilt it. They even raised a bronze statue of Master Yeji, and from that moment on, Master Yeji was the only deity they bowed to, leaving that guy mortified. Rosetta led the royal guard straight to Dex and snapped him into custody. When Dex overused the relic, it fried his mind. He couldn't even get words out. Now nobody has to fear information leaks, but I still couldn't help feeling a sting of pity for him. He was freaking out about how Dex even got that relic, while Yeji calmly dropped a theory that there are other people out there in this world. But those crushing thoughts vanished fast. Slimy in his original form caught his attention instead. Yeji exhaled, shut off the overthinking, and finally let the stress fade for a moment. Yeah, he still had tons of problems, but he'd already handled Dex, so for now, those peaceful, quiet days were back. The very next morning, the guy jolted awake to find himself chained to the bed, ripped down to his shorts while cold shackles pinned his arms and legs in place. He gaped at the ceiling, totally stunned, until it hit him. Kazumi was right there, sitting quietly beside him. Kazumi swore she'd chained that guy up, but it was Lady Ryo who commanded her to shackle the master's body. Yoji couldn't wrap his head around why Rhea had just ordered Kazumi to do this. Then the very girl they'd been talking about came barreling up to them. He tried to pry answers from Rhea why she did this to him, but she never walked into the room by herself. Other girls were there too, Maria, Rosetta, and Slimy, and they all marched up to the guy sprawled on the bed, greeting him like it was showtime. Yeji froze at their sudden presence, still clueless about what was going on, just staring in pure amazement. Meanwhile, Rhea grinned and told the guy that they'd be having a training session that day, the same thing she'd already mentioned to him earlier. He remembered she'd told him something, but the details vanished, and the worst part was, at that exact moment, all he wanted was to sleep. He turned to her uneasy and asked what his role was in the training. Rhea shot back with a flushed, reddened face, and still, there was nothing for you to do, just sprawled on the bed was all it took. He stared at her words, stunned. Why did he get to do nothing and still feel completely lost? Then Rhea launched into training. She planted a kiss on him, and the truth hit hard. This wasn't for his workout at all. It was for Rhea and the rest of the girls, who stared the entire process like it was a show. And while it played out, Rosetta seethed, jealous that Rhea was the one getting absorbed by the guy. Right in the middle of the magic recovery, Rhea snapped the whole thing to a halt and spun to the girls like, "Enough, get to work." Rhea watched them push this training to boost their strength and make the guy's defense grow right alongside it, and it felt way more effective than if they'd trained separately. He started daydreaming about every girl, imagining himself training with them, then snapped back, furious at the thought of letting it spiral. Slimy suddenly lunged in and snatched his hand. Once her magic hit his skin, her power surged, and the girl started glowing like crazy. Yeji squirmed and burst into laughter as Slimy's touch tickled her, while Slimy kept wriggling and Yeji struggled to shut the effects down. At the same time, Myria stared at him with pure excitement. If she kissed him again, she'd black out like last time, so she ditched the plan and went for a new angle. Only when she got close, she started fumbling across his skin, cheeks burning, while her heart hammered in her chest like it was trying to escape. Then, out of nowhere, the girl snapped her eyes wide, feeling the guy's magic surge through her, blasting fresh strength into her, and Myria floated in pure bliss as wave after wave of that incredible magic flooded her with overwhelming pleasure. To the guy's mortification, Myria started groping him with wild enthusiasm, craving that bliss again and again. Yoji tried to steady the frantic, slime-covered Myria, and Rosetta watched the whole chaos unfold. still keeping her distance from the guy but craving the feeling of where her Ria was pressed even as she refused to kiss him. After all, her heart only beat for her beloved Ria, so she refuses to kiss Master Yeji because right then, Ria is busy enjoying the guy. Even so, Rosetta had already brushed Yeji and she still remembered that rush of bliss when his magic hit. Right then, the guy erupted into helpless laughter, wrecked by the tickly slime from Slimy and Myria, tears streaming as he begged Rosetta to save him. Ria's order pinned her in place and the girl refused to help him solve a thing. Then she bent down and, like the others, started grabbing at the guy, unable to disobey her beloved. He got himself stuck in a nightmare. Every time they touched him, a wave of ticklish sparks hit his nerves and Yeji just kept laughing nonstop from the sheer ticklish overload. He finally swung his gaze to the last girl. Yeji started begging Ria to rescue him from those ticklish tortures, because he needed her to free him from the grip. Ria just didn't get it. She thought he meant something else. Kiss her again. Her cheeks burned and she leaned in, pressing another kiss onto him. Then they pressed their power into his body one after another until the sheer overload knocked them out cold, and Kazumi still managed to praise his rock-solid self-control. One blazing day, while the guy sprawled on the bed, Ria leaned in with flushed cheeks and smashed a kiss on his lips. She gawked at him, couldn't stop smiling even after the kiss, and joy practically lit up her whole face. Then out of nowhere, a girl from the village of bears slipped up to Yeji and Ria as they lay there, and Myria snapped her voice at the guy. The girl with the bear ears stepped up and asked the guy if she could tag along, and even though he looked drained, Yeji still said yes. Ria was stunned, so Myria lit up and dashed straight toward him. When Yeji closed the distance, she kissed him too, right in front of Ryo, and his jealousy nearly exploded. Ever since he arrived in this world, every day has been playing out just like this. Once she reached out to him, Myria's magic surged alive in her chest, like the moment she pictured it. Yeji's relic gleamed with pure magnificence, and her energy snapped upward so hard her body felt it. His biomaterial pulsed with heavy magical energy like it could supercharge other creatures, and sure enough, he used it to power up his comrades, so there was absolutely nothing to feel ashamed about. Meanwhile, Ria and Myria pounced on the guy, craving one more round of kisses, and the guy's calm shattered as their push got relentless. Still, he had to surrender and take every last kiss. Loud racket yanked Slimy and Kazumi away from their hobbies. After a while, the beaming girls finally ditched the guy and headed for breakfast, while he lay on the bed looking totally wrecked, face flushed red, lips smeared from everything that just went down. Ria barked at Myria to put the sample back after breakfast, and even the exhausted guy perked up. Her words pulled his attention like a magnet. He couldn't stop wondering what that sample even was and why they needed it so badly. Myria winked at the guy and leaned in to whisper that it was a secret. Then the girls burst into laughter and the poor guy just stood there, totally baffled. After breakfast, he flopped onto the bed, eyes drifting shut, because the sweetest moment of all was slipping back into sleep. Maria's food hit like pure heaven, one bite and this guy could crash and sleep anywhere. As an ordinary office worker, he never once pictured anything like this would drop into his life. Then, right out of nowhere, someone yelled his name. Myria was the one who showed up, and she didn't stop there. She tried to slip into his room, and the moment he realized it was her, he let her in. The girl yanked the door open, then didn't step inside. She spun back to her companion, and Ria grimly shot her down, reluctantly refusing to enter the room. Ria crept into the guy's room, cheeks burning, and there she was dressed in a cheeky, short-made outfit that left nothing to hide. The guy stared back with pure admiration, like she'd just stepped into his wildest dream. Myria told him she'd hawk this brand new costume at the capital market next week, and the guy couldn't stop staring, especially the killer gap between the skirt and the stockings. Even if the whole world labels him a renegade, he's still joining that faction of short-skirt lovers, because that girl's look lit the spark, and Slimy's voice yanked him out of his thoughts as she grabbed Yeji's sleeve, pulling hard to grab his attention. Turns out the girl was rocking a maid outfit too, and the guy leaned over, pet Slimy's head and showered her with praise. Slimy practically lit up from how happy she was, but seriously, if maid costumes are that cute, who in the world would actually go out and buy something like that? Suddenly, he spotted a girl crumpled in the corner, turned her back to everyone, and vanished into hiding, and that's when Maria's agitation instantly flared. Ria's cheeks flared red as she stared at herself, stunned she'd ended up in a dress everyone wanted, and the guy clocked it instantly. She'd never dressed like this before, and those proportions just weren't popular here. So the guy raved about the girl, saying that dress was made for her, and when she saw it on herself, she actually felt adorable for a second, which even made Rhea pause her worries because all she could think about was how cute she looked in that outfit. So Rhea spun to Myria and went, "I need that maid costume," then practically bounced as she tried to buy it. She was ready to dump every last coin of gold she'd stacked up. She just needed one thing, to sell her address to Yeji because Yeji was totally hooked on her looks. Myria was stunned by what she'd done. She couldn't wrap her head around that huge amount of money, while the guy assumed she must have just loved the dress that badly. After a while, Rhea and Yeji were soaking in the pool while a girl massaged the back of a guy sprawled on a soft mattress, and he just melted into the comfort, soaking up every touch like he'd hit the jackpot. She couldn't stop smiling because he was so relaxed. He devoured delicious food, kicked back for long naps, and even got his bath taken care of, because he knew this was pure luxury for him. But lately something had gone wrong and it was eating at his happiness. Rhea caught the shift in his face and pressed him, asking what had happened. He finally blurted out that something had been gnawing at him lately, and it left her wondering what it all meant. She felt Yeji wasn't buying the whole love plan, like she wasn't fully happy with how they were trying to push their relationship forward. So the girl yanked her towel into position, flipped it open, and grinned as she showed Yeji everything. Then the guy cracked his problem and finally got his answer. Honestly, life hadn't handed him nearly enough adventures, so when the girl heard his words, her eyes widened as she realized she'd been dead wrong. Clutching herself close, she demanded answers from the guy, and Yeji shot back that he wasn't whining about his life at all. He just meant that once he slipped into another world, he was itching to explore a ton of brand new places. But that was a terrible move, because the moment someone realizes he's human, everything goes sideways fast and his problems go nuclear. Rhea clocked the guy's mood and told him next week hit the capital market. Yeji was dying to see Maria's shop, so the plan was simple: cover up the guy's hair, disguise Rhea, and they'd pull it off. He shot out an apology for his selfish thoughts, and the girl didn't even bat an eye about it. She was happy to grant his request because it was her job, and Rhea was already itching to start right away and make his wish happen. The day to hit the capital finally arrived. On the street, the guy tore himself away from Kazumi and Slimy, who stayed back at home, and then he and Rhea sprinted to the slope. They finally reached the spot, just stood there and waited, because Rhea had everything ready for the adventure, and the guy was about to get hit with a surprise he couldn't forget. Meanwhile, Yeji stood on the slope, watching for their ride to finally roll into the capital. A colossal airship loomed over the girl and the guy in the wide, blazing blue sky, and the moment it showed up out of nowhere, the guy's jaw just dropped in pure, stunned awe. The guy stared up at the airship, mouth hanging open, eyes blown wide in pure shock. Then a black dot flickered into view, and before he could blink, it became a creature as someone had just leapt off the airship. It was Rosetta, long black hair, crashing to the ground, yet the moment she spotted Rhea beside that guy, she broke into a bright, winning smile. Yechi froze when Rosetta suddenly dropped into view, his mouth hanging open as he gawked at the girl falling from the sky, while Rhea shot her a glare, pure annoyance in her eyes. Rosetta kept tumbling through the air, already closing in on Yeji and Rhea, and with a joyful cry, she yelled for her beloved sister. Then she gracefully touched down near the cliff, right by them. After dropping out of the sky, the girl immediately latched onto her sworn sister for a hug, but Rhea snapped out of it, annoyed that she was clinging too hard and wouldn't hug back. The guy blinked in shock. Rosetta had only just landed, and then Rhea shoved the girl out of the way. A black-haired girl grinned like crazy and shouted at Rhea and Yeji to climb onto the airship. He couldn't wrap his head around how they were supposed to reach the airship up in the sky, so Rosetta leaned in, told him to drop the worry, and promised she'd handle it. The girl flicked 2 fingers and magic did the rest. The whipping wind curled around the guy's feet, and Yeji shot up, rising and soaring into the air, while he could only gasp in shock at the sudden lift. Yeji was totally lost, but Rosetta fired back and answered the guy's question. Yeah, it was air magic. She lifted herself up with it and even dropped down again, and once the explanation landed, the guy finally got it. Air magic was crazy convenient for moving through space. Rhea even warned that if he'd tried this magic, Yeji would have hauled the whole continent up toward the stars, but he had no clue how to cast that spell. Soon, they burst into the airship and got inside, and the guy realized it was all thanks to Rosetta. She let them use it because her family was basically untouchable in the capital. Yeji figured Rosetta was some noble-born young lady, then he couldn't stop wondering why she'd become a royal knight until Rosetta suddenly snapped, "Hey," at the guy. The girl handed Tom the clothes she'd already prepared, exactly what he asked for, because they had to swap outfits fast since the capital was right around the corner. He couldn't stop wondering what Rosetta is going through, but he shoved it to the back of his mind for now. Then they finally rolled into the capital, and the fun was about to start. The airship finally groaned to a stop at the Arvany mansions, and the guy flashed Rosetta a grateful thanks for the smooth ride, while the girl simply took his thanks and nodded. She told them, "Management sent me an order, so I can't go with you." Still, Rosa held out hope. She wanted them to love the capital. The guy and the girl were out in the open, but they didn't want anyone recognizing them, so they swapped into disguise. Yeji shoved his hair under a hat, and Ria covered her look with sunglasses and another hat. He strode down the street and stared, hooked, as the amazing view he'd been waiting for stretched out in the distance ahead. Yeji laid eyes on the royal capital for the first time, and the moment she saw it, the stunning architecture stole the show. Then the bustling market's lively energy pulled her in even harder. In the royal capital, representatives from every race crowded in. Then the moment that guy stared at them, it hit him. This was a world where people like him straight up didn't exist, so he had to stay on guard. Ria dug through her bag like she had one mission, determined to hand the guy something. Then she pulled out a cloth pouch packed to the brim with cash. The moment he saw that huge pile of money, his eyes flew wide in pure shock, and Ria just stood there, completely clueless about why he looked so stunned. For Yeji, it was nothing like that. This guy just stared, stunned by the huge pile of money. He couldn't figure out how the girl even got it. Ria cut in and told him the truth. Most of that bag was tribute, collected straight from the people of the village of bears. Their village was under Yeji's thumb, and since the only real money came from his relics, taking a cut was almost business as usual, until that guy realized he'd somehow end up collecting tribute one day. So he figured out the gift was a tribute from the bear village, and he decided to put that money to good use right away. Then he looked up and spotted a man in the market hawking guns, crouched on the ground with his weapons laid out on a blanket. He stormed up to him and dropped into a seat to stare closer at the product on sale, and right there he finally felt that incredible pull he'd been chasing. Then the old man leaned in and asked, "So, are you an adventurer?" The man stared at the guy like he was hunting for answers, and that intense, searching look froze him for a second. Then the guy caught the truth. The old man looked way more like a dwarf. Yeji shook her head and answered no. Then it hit him, who was he really? Because if he was honest, he hadn't done a damn thing in this world. And just like that, he snapped back to reality, the seller. The old man snapped that his fragile body would never cut it as an adventurer, then warned him he wouldn't sell him a single leaven either. So the man shoved and tried to drive him off like dirt, and Yeji was left mortified. He only came to get a look at the old man's wares, and he totally figured he'd end up messing with the seller's hustle. Ria, zero hesitation, strode right up to him. She swung her foot and snapped a punch right beside the seller's head. Then Ria's rage flared at the old man's rude act. She leaned in and told him, straight up, that if he even knew who Yeji was, because Yeji came from the oldest and strongest race. The girl couldn't even finish her sentence. He slammed a hand over her mouth. Yeji clutched the furious girl close and snapped at the salesman to just brush them off. After the dust settled, Ria finally apologized to him, but Yeji brushed it off, saying the girl just wanted to defend his honor, only for Ria to still be rattled by what happened. Yeji let the guy down just in time. She even almost spilled his origin. Then, seeing the girl crushed with sadness, I jumped in, trying to lift her spirits by offering her something to eat. They were selling kebabs stuffed with larvae from the Mammadala butterfly, ugly as sin to look at, but crazy creamy on the tongue, and the guy couldn't stop squirming once he learned the truth. He jabbed at another stall where meat rotated on a spit, and the girl casually said it was barbecue carved from an orc child. Then his appetite flat out vanished. Ria figured everything was fine and tried to grab him some food from these shops, but Yeji shut it down. He wasn't hungry anymore. Then he turned to the guy and asked where she wanted to go. It had been ages since she'd been able to set foot in the capital. Now this guy wanted to thank her for everything, and when the girl heard his sweet words, she stared at Yeji with pure, jaw-dropping admiration. She couldn't wait to head to that store she'd been dying to check out. Yeah, it was a clothing shop all right, just for girls' underwear, and the guy immediately realized, wait, these stores exist in another world too. Ria suddenly grabbed the guy's attention and told him to pick up her clothes from the store, right on the spot, while embarrassment burned in her cheeks because it was her very first time in a place like that, and Yeji didn't know the area much better either. But he couldn't say no to her. She pointed out those mature outfits, yet nothing fit Rhea because she had the kind of figure that demanded something different. Rhea could tell Yeji must have liked the design, but he stayed quiet, face burning with embarrassment. Yeji's silence crushed her, and she assumed he didn't like it at all until he finally admitted he hated the style. With that, Rhea stepped in fast, offering her master other designs instead. The girl revealed the first undergarment style, and the guy said it fit Rhea perfectly, so she snatched it up on the spot. Then the second style showed up, even more covered than the first, and the guy loved it too, so Rhea bought that one as well. After snagging the clothes, Rhea shot Yeji a grateful smile, and she ended up grabbing every single thing the guy had been eyeing. Her heart was racing as she watched him haul all those packages around. But he wanted to thank her, so he waved it off and told her, "Don't worry about it." Then they headed straight to the hotel Rhea picked. Soon, the guy and the girl closed in on the building, and the girl told him they'd be staying here for the night. Then he stared at the entrance. It looked weird, lit up by heart-shaped lanterns everywhere. Yeah, this place was a love hotel. Yeji froze, staring in shock at the hotel the girl picked, while Rhea blushed and glanced at the guy. Then she marched off and bought the clothes for the night. After a bit, they slipped into the love hotel room, blazing in pure pink, with just one double bed waiting in the center. Rhea told the guy that every luxury hotel was basically under the control of high-status people, so the smartest move was to lay low right here. Yeji's stomach dropped when Rhea hauled him into this hotel, yet if she'd told him the real reason, he might have agreed to stay, because sharing the same bed didn't mean he should start getting all those inappropriate feelings. That's what he figured until bedtime hit and Rhea suddenly yanked up the hem of her dress, then whipped it off completely, standing there in only the clothes she'd just bought at that store, leaving him absolutely stunned. I acted like nothing was wrong, but she stepped in and told the guy she just wanted to show him the clothes she'd bought today. The girl started to spin around, flashing her whole silhouette, and when Yeji finally got a full look at her, nerves hit hard and he swallowed his saliva with a shaky gulp. Overwhelmed by the moment, he bolted up to her in an instant, and Rhea could only freeze, tearing up with pure shock at how fast he came at her. Yeji couldn't stop grinning the moment he saw Rhea, then he lunged forward and hugged her tight, and somehow her outfit fit her perfectly. Leaning in close to the girl's ear, he broke into a sweat, turned bright red, and blurting out that he could no longer hold himself back. Rhea finally got what she came for. She was over the moon that Yeji finally cared about her, and she flashed the guy with flushed cheeks a sweet, killer smile. The guy finally clocked the whole plan. Every detail, from that lingerie shop to the love hotel, was all Rhea. Yeji stepped in to help, working hard to peel off her outer layers, and when Rhea wanted this to happen, he knew he had to man up. Rhea guided him down to the floor right between the guy's legs, and his whole face erupted red at what she was doing, because Rhea was ready to kick off the service. She smiled sweet as sugar at Yeji and slipped the guy straight into her honey trap. Then he could only tremble as those incredible sensations washed over him. It was his very first time. While the girl worked her magic to pleasure him, Yeji looked him in the eye and walked away, leaving behind his first time. He stopped caring about the consequences and just chased his own craving for pure pleasure, while Yeji basked in bliss. The next morning, the moment the sun's rays slid into the room, birds started blaring their songs before anyone could even blink, and the guy just stared, completely dumbfounded. He slumped in pure defeat, and in the end, the guy just couldn't swallow losing his first time. Maybe it was because all those human relics supercharged his biomaterial with the strongest magic, so when Rhea pressed her hand to it and absorbed his magical power, she instantly blacked out. That girl who could kiss a guy for a full 10 minutes, bam, instantly face-planted and left him standing there alone. He was still reeling from how it went wrong when she snapped back to her senses and Rhea shouted, "Yeji." That girl's chest tightened with guilt over what happened yesterday, and Rhea hurried over to Yeji to apologize, only for Yeji to still feel utterly hopeless. Yeji only smiled and gently soothed the girl's aching heart, telling her they'd learn to live with it. Step by step, your words hit her like a warm blanket, and with tears shimmering in her eyes, she stared at him like he was something sacred, admiring him to the core. That long-awaited final exam for the first-time loss program got pushed back, and after he finally woke up, he couldn't stop enjoying his day with Rhea. A pair and Yeri and a girl slipped outside for a walk, and the moment they stepped into the capital, they were slammed with how packed it was with people. Today, I found out the royal capital hosts a fair every 2 years, and Rhea just dropped that bomb on him. Yeji was strolling with her when, out of nowhere, a girl shouted his name and snatched his focus. Maria right nearby sprinted her hand up and waved at Yeji, and Yeji instantly clocked it. That was his friend. He wanted to go talk to a girl he knew, but then he spotted a line so long it looked like it was stretching forever by her shop. Yeji stared at him in stunned disbelief. The guy had heard Mary's clothes were suddenly blowing up, but he never expected crowds like this. Maria told Tom that plenty of other brands were even bigger. All across the kingdom, seasoned couturiers packed this place today, and Maria stepped forward with a burning drive to help at the fair. This was her first bold leap toward becoming a designer in the capital. Yeji clocked that Maria was really pushing herself, and the guy and the girl both froze when they spotted the maid costumes Slimy and Rhea were wearing. Maria even thanked Rhea, because thanks to this outfit, it's been flying off the shelves and now lots of girls are grabbing it too. But the baby sizes didn't sell anywhere near as well as she'd hoped, so Yeji expected him to be freaking out about this world. Then, out of nowhere, some unknown guy barged in and rudely snapped at the seller. After that rude call, the mystery man shoved the guy hard with his shoulder, making Yeji stumble aside. Then he stared at us like we were nothing, arrogance dripping from his face, and demanded that I sell every baby-sized outfit set the store had. Maria and the girl selling Maria's clothes felt sick to their stomachs. Then that man crashed into their room without even waiting his turn, and the girl tried to fix it, but he didn't listen at all, just yelled cruel names at her and called her rude. Yeji's gut twisted with worry over that rude customer. The knight straight up announced the man was the big shot from the kingdom's capital, the Marquis of Cyber Red Star, and once he got introduced, Cybern strutted in with arrogant confidence and tried to shove right back into his purchase. Rhea clocked the Kyvern Marquis instantly, and when the guy shot her a questioning look, he wanted answers. Who was this rude man? Because Kyvern was a legendary noble from the capital. People whispered that he snatched commoners on a whim, then mocked them with a cruel laugh. Cyber was pure evil, abusing his power like it was nothing, and Yeji, she was sick with horror hearing it. Rage burned in his chest, but he swallowed it, because if he moved, he'd risk his comrades and ruin the Marquis deal. Maria, shaky with nerves, carefully slid the Marquis purchases into a bag, and Cyber couldn't take his eyes off her. So he yanked the frightened girl by the hand and pulled her right into his arms, and Yeji and Rhea froze, stunned, as the guy and the girl both snapped into tense, wary silence. With the girl yanked into his arms, the Marquis stared her down with zero shame, drinking in every inch, until up close he finally savored Maria's stunning beauty. Cybern was into her, and once he had that feeling, he decided she was his to claim. With a cold grin, he told the terrified girl that from that moment on, she belonged to him. After he told the girl she'd be his property, Cyber Red Star yanked Maria right into his space and started groping her with zero shame. Fear snapped through the girl and tears burst out fast. She couldn't stand the man's touch. Yeji saw her shaking and rage flared, ready to yank her away from the Marquis, but Rhea's hand slammed down and stopped him. Rhea shot the guy a confident promise she'd handle this, so Yeji better stay hidden and keep his identity locked down. Rhea's cheeks weren't blushing anymore, tension clung to her like armor, and when she stared at Cybern, her eyes burned with anger and gloom. Cybern had never seen a girl like that before, so he froze on the spot, but once he snapped back to his senses, he fell quiet and slipped into the background as Rhea took over and told him. Rhea snapped at Tom to let Maria go and keep his hands off her, yet Tom didn't even pause, still shocked by how brazen Maria was, standing right in front of him. And when he saw Marquis Red Star wouldn't release Maria, Rhea hit him with the same command again. That only cranked Cyber's rage higher. Some mystery girl was bossing him around. He tore his sword free in one savage motion and swung it at her to make her learn her place, but she snapped aside and dodged clean. The girl snapped aside and started ripping off her glasses and hat. Everything that masked her identity flew off in a blur. As soon as she tossed off her glasses and hat, the Marquis stared at the girl before him like he'd just seen a ghost, because he knew her. His face crumpled with horror as he choked out her name, the demon warrior Rhea. Rhea shot back a furious glare that could have burned through steel. Yeji watched it all unfold right when the Marquis snapped into panic after spotting Rhea. He feared the man might clock her, but before that worry could sink in, a soft whisper lured his attention, and the girl beside him leaned in and said clear as day, "Rhea." Right there in the crowd, people started whispering about Rhea with pure admiration, because she wasn't just any commander, she was the youngest woman in history to lead the Royal Knights, and somehow she was even more popular than Yeji had ever imagined. When the Marquis spotted the crowd going wild at the girl's entrance, fury hit him, because even if she wore a knight's armor, she was still the daughter of a commoner, and that meant she had no right to stand up to him. Rage seethed through the cyber and he snapped an order. His knights were going to teach the girl a lesson. His men didn't hesitate, they immediately surged toward Rhea. One of them lunged in with his sword, but the girl vanished on the spot. No warning, no trace, and the moment he realized it, panic kicked in as he scrambled to find her. Rhea won't even need to tap the power Yeji handed her. She shoots into the sky on a burst of magic and lands above the knight like a lightning strike, leaving him staring at her in shock. The girl stared at her opponent, her face heavy with gloom, then snapped at his subordinates to stop panicking, because they were simply stuck under the wrong master. The moment she finished speaking, she sprang forward, borrowing the sword support and launching straight into the fight. She dropped the knight with a brutal kick, then spun right toward the Marquis's other men, because Rhea was done playing around. In a flash of sharp strikes, she crushed every last one of his subordinates. Heburn's Marquis stood alone, looming right in front of Rhea. He still clung to the power his status gave him, and when panic hit, he blurted orders at the girl, demanding she obey. Rhea just stared at the Marquis in bitter silence, her gloomy eyes saying everything, and even with his fear roaring in his chest, he still tried to overpower her. Rage swallowed the Marquis's fear. He snapped at the girl, yelling that the whole world would turn against Rhea, and still, that didn't shake her. Right from the start, Rhea made up her mind. She'd stick with her master, Yeji, no matter what. She was so sure of her choice that the moment was already hers. The Marquis of Cyber realized his threats bounced right off the girl, so once he saw the truth, fear crawled into his bones, and he tried to steady himself with his ally, Kazul, the Royal Knight's commander, only for the girl to strike first and shut him down. Cypher just wanted out, so he snapped at the girl again, promising that if she dared to attack him, his friend would back him up and they'd flip her whole stance like she's nothing more than a knight. Rhea wasn't scared one bit. She grabbed his threats by the throat and slammed the arrogant, brutal Marquis with everything she had, pouring all her rage into that single hit. Her attack ripped through the air. He got blasted away from his spot, slamming down 3 times like a stone skipping on water, and Rhea told him her home would always be right beside the master. Yeji stared at the girl in pure awe. She looked stunning in that moment, while the guy felt his heart get pulled by her words until a sudden sound jerked his attention away. The crowd leaned in, buzzing with pure joy at the win over Cyber, and everyone couldn't stop cheering for the girl. Myria shot up to the girl, all worried and shaking. Then she thanked Rhea for saving her and for handling that creepy Marquis like a pro. The girl clung to Rhea, still gushing her thanks, while Myria sobbed hard from being completely overwhelmed, because that whole incident scared her to her core. Then out of nowhere, someone shouted Rhea's name. An elf representative snapped a warning at the girl, telling her the knights had already heard the commotion and were closing in on her. Yeji snapped to the truth. Everything had gone bad fast. If the knights spot the Marquis passed out, they'll swear Rhea betrayed them. A swarm of representatives from every race started pressuring the girl to flee, begging her to slip out before the knights caught her, so they yanked her away from the chaos fast. The whole group beamed with joy, thanking the girl for teaching Kyberna's lesson. Yeji especially couldn't stop smiling because the residents adored her so much, and even the guy could feel his whole situation shifting. Turns out the girl swept him up like he was a prince. Rhea shot everyone a grateful smile, and Yeji's cheeks burned with embarrassment at how bad the whole situation looked. A bunch of residents spotted Rhea clutching a guy in her arms, and they leaned in like, "Come on, let us see his face." They cheered her on, wishing her happiness, while Rhea, still holding the flustered guy, tried to slip away from the crowd, and up on the roof, someone was watching them. An unknown stranger clocked Rhea's magic as unmistakably human, so whoever she was cradling in her arms couldn't be anything but human too. They finally tracked him down, Imezaki Yuji, and the moment they met his eyes, the guy in the black cape stared right back. A mask covered the top half of his face, patterns slashed across his cheek, and beside him stood a girl like she'd been waiting for all of this too. A girl with 2 long tails strutted in, then bam, the wings on her head hit everyone's eyes, and the guy's companion couldn't even tell which person in that crowd was the same Yeji. Yeji finished studying the capital, and up in the clouds an airship carried Yeji, Rhea, and Rosetta as it drifted through the sky, while the girls chatted and Yeji stared out the window at the breathtaking view. So much craziness was hitting the capital lately, and somehow, it was all still a blast. His bond with Rhea has blown up in the best way, and he sits there lost in thought, replaying everything that happened in the Love Hotel until it hits him out of nowhere. He suddenly has to know where Rhea went last night to handle whatever she needed to sort out. Turns out the girl slipped out last night to wipe out the cyber soldiers, and the guy just stared in stunned silence because Rhea told him the whole thing like it was nothing. Rosetta leaned in and told Rhea that the villa of the Marquis of Cybern was crawling with over 100 soldiers, so she'd have to handle them, period, and Rosa practically beamed, ready to help. Now the Marquis of Cyber Red Star isn't about to hit back and hurt them, and the girl quickly shuts down any trouble like that. Yeji leaned in and asked her companion if something was wrong, and Rhea stared at him like he'd lost his mind, because she had no clue what he was even talking about. Yeah, he wasn't scared for himself, he was terrified for her because that incident from yesterday just ended her dream of becoming a royal knight. And guess what? She didn't even freak out, losing that spot didn't bother her one bit. Because her spot was right beside the master. The girl said it to him and flashed a sweet, winning smile. She was over the moon with him. Yeji stared in pure awe, Rhea's words hitting his heart like a melody. With a gentle, tender voice, he spoke her name, then leaned in close and kissed Rhea. But the kiss never landed. Rosetta's suddenly there, cutting through the moment like a warning siren. She glares at the guy and the girl with her cell in hand, eyes locked, and snaps at Rhea and Yeji not to do anything shameful. She leaned in close, snapped at them not to lay a finger on it while she was watching, and the girl shot them a furious glare. Rhea and Yeji snapped their gazes away, bursting with excitement, and rushed to apologize to the furious Rosetta. That long-haired girl burned with envy over Yeji, her anger boiling over, because he still managed to steal a kiss from her beloved sworn sister. In the royal capital, a sharp, furious sigh cut the air. Marquis of Kevern, the one man who couldn't stand what that girl did, vowing he'd never, ever forgive her. That resentment won't vanish until he drags Rhea back to the table and makes her pay for what she did, because right now, rage is exploding through him and his whole body is shaking. He had no idea what to do. After Rhea took out most of his soldiers, he was stuck. Then out of nowhere, a raincoat-wearing stranger burst into the Marquis of Kyburn's office, and the Marquis snapped to attention at the shock of an uninvited guest. The roof man finally made his move. Knights snapped into a defensive formation, but he strode up and introduced himself to the Marquis as Grace. And Grace leaned in and told Cybern he was nothing but a lowly demon, and Red Star nearly choked at the shock of it. Demons like him don't show up often and nobody really knows much about them. This guy only knew one thing about demons, the same truth everyone else knows too. Hatred for other races burned in them as the Marquis stormed out of his chair, furious, and barked at the frozen soldiers to drive the demon that had just appeared out. The guy in the black raincoat and mask didn't budge. None of the soldiers' approach even rattled him because they weren't aiming to fight him. He spun toward his companion behind him, telling her loud and clear that she'd be the one facing the knights. A man shouted to the girl speeding toward him. Her name was Kennen, and she answered his call without hesitation. The knights never saw it coming. Their opponent was a little girl, but rage fizzled fast when command orders snapped them into line. They hurled their swords forward, then realized they couldn't land a scratch. 1 second she was there, the next, she vanished from their sight like a ghost. Kennen finally got his chance to strike. Then the girl blurred into view behind them at lightning speed and started raining blows from their backs. Kennen slammed into the knights, and with one brutal punch her opponents flew meters away, so hard it was shocking, and they smashed right through the Marquis' office, wrecking the room's wall. After the girl's strike, a massive hole tore through the office wall. The Marquis stared at it, cold sweat pouring down his face, shaking with raw terror. Her power shattered him, and he couldn't even move right. Marquis Cybern reached for his weapon. Right away, the guy in the raincoat stopped him cold and told him not to go for it, because he was done with this fight and he said it was going nowhere. The masked demon leaned in and told the Marquis exactly who the girl was. Kennen was a vampire, and that meant she was built like a beast. The Marquis snapped to attention, realizing exactly where he stood, because everyone knew vampires were the fiercest demons there were. Cyber Red Star couldn't wait and demanded answers from the demon who'd shown up, pushing him to explain what he wanted. The guy told his partner, "Don't sweat it, this will help Marquis Red Star get his revenge." Cybern shot the new bottle a look full of disgust and shock, and the man demanded to know what in the world was inside. The pills were called Diddy, and that guy told him, "Take them and the Marquis will steal humanity's power." He added, "If Cybern teams up with Grace, the demon will hand over one pill." Sure, the man was tempted by the promise, but he didn't trust that guy for a second. So the Marquis refused to trust a demon in his own ranks, until the man shoved a pill into his mouth and shut him up on the spot, leaving him no choice but to swallow. After that, the guy finally cut Cybern loose and let him go. Cyburn crumpled to the floor after the pill hit his mouth, then ripped cloth sounds burst through the air as his muscles ballooned and his veins bulged like they'd snap. Keenan watched it all in eerie silence, calm as ever. The Marquis scarfed up all that power from the pill, and at first he couldn't even think about refusing, because the demon would have crushed that idea instantly. The sky stayed bright, and after stepping outside, Slimy trudged back through the cave and into the house, while Rhea leaned in, desperate to know if Yeji liked the breakfast she'd cooked. Guy dug in and praised her food, and Slimy happily kept eating like she'd just won the day. He also clocked that the girl had swapped the food supply, and somehow she looked even more stunning than before, so Rhea turned to the guy and thanked him for the compliment. Rhea had always sworn medieval food never tasted all that great, so she leaned on Myria's meals for guidance. Then she pushed herself to work harder and harder until something finally snatched Yeji's attention. He clocked the girl fighting to pry open the dye jar she'd just gotten, but no matter what, Rhea couldn't make it budge. Even though Rhea was a knight, the moment that guy saw her, he clocked one thing first: she was a girl. Yeji snatched the jar from her and jumped in to open it for her. Yeji kept wrestling the jar open, twisting the lid again and again until the guy's hands started straining, then nothing budged and his face went blank with disbelief. He couldn't believe the jar wouldn't open at all, so he figured a dye must have cursed them with defective jam. The girls watched him wrestle with that jar, and Rhea's worry spiked because he still couldn't get it open. Then he planted his hand on the lid, swore he'd crack it this time, and with raw anger and brute strength, he strained to twist the cover free. He underestimated his own power and shattered the jar, and boom, jam shards exploded everywhere, flying in every direction. He stared at his empty hands in stunned disbelief. Then Rhea burst up to Yeji and wiped up the spilled jam with a towel, yet he was totally okay. He thanked her for worrying about him and tried to ask Rhea something. He blurted out, asking if he could really become insanely strong, still stunned that he'd shattered the jar with his bare hands. When the girl heard him, she froze, lost for words, and couldn't answer for a second. Then it hit her. She snapped back into her senses and realized he'd genuinely been downplaying himself as just some ordinary guy. To her, Yeji was the strongest in the world, and Rhea couldn't even get close to a quarter of his power. He still clung to the memory of when he was weak back in his original world, but somehow he never really felt stronger. Rhea caught that the guy didn't even know what he could do. Then Yeji thanked Slimy. While Dex and Yeji were trading blows, Yeji got pinned in a brutal spot. Then the moment hit and the guy's physical strength skyrocketed. Rhea leaned in and told him his body-strengthening magic probably snapped into action, and he had no idea magic like that even existed. That name does more than sound good. It's a body-strengthening magic that can be triggered two ways. It can fire on its own, or it can activate when the caster is in a truly tight spot. The last time this magic likely worked was when that guy tried to open the jar and couldn't, so Yuji's embarrassment hit, and the magic kicked in right on cue. Slimy got worn out, yawned wide, and slumped. Rhea told Yeji that once he mastered this magic, he'd learn to handle the spontaneous type too. And yeah, she had zero doubt her master could flatten mountains with barely a blink. Then Slimy snapped right back into his original form. After the girl finally explained everything, the guy snapped to a decision. He would start training right then and master this magic. Just as they locked in, a long, dragging screech echoed through the corridor, and both of them whipped their heads toward the sound. Rosetta kept making that horrified sound as she got pinned at the entrance. Little slimes swarmed and attacked, smearing slime across her, while vines snapped tight around her limbs and froze her in place. The red-cheeked guy stared at the helpless girl trapped in place, and before long, Rosetta spotted him with the others. With pure resentment, the girl snapped at the guy, demanding they hurry and let her go. Yeji then shoved Slimy to rescue Rose, pull her out of the trap, and hand over her clothes. Exhausted, Slimy finally forced her way back into her human form and returned the outfit. Rosetta awkwardly slid her armor back on, still fuming that every time she showed up here, she'd get left without a single stitch of clothes. Yeji promised that the moment those surprise visitors showed up, they'd get wiped out fast, and Rosetta couldn't help feeling bad for the next batch waiting to get caught. Rosetta suddenly remembered that with Rhea before, nothing like this ever happened to her. Then she noticed something was off the moment the girl's behavior turned strange. She was so lost in her fantasies that her cheeks flared. Just imagining teasing a guy with slippery slimes had her blushing hard. She jolted awake the second those obscene fantasies hit, and the reason was simple: she could feel everyone else's eyes on her. So Rhea slapped on a calm face, pretended nothing happened, and cut the tension fast. Then the girl fired straight at Rosetta, asking what her plans were for the day. Rosa dug into his bag, and Rosetta's father's fragrance, something he'd tracked down in the country on the eastern island, came out, and the girl hurried to share it with Rhea, pulling a jar of dark liquid into view, and when Rhea saw what he was holding, surprise hit him hard. Eyes covered, he peered into the jar, and there it was, soy sauce. Soy sauce actually existed in this world. In this world, the food barely got salted, and it drove him nuts for the punch of soy sauce, so when he saw Rosetta's beaming smile, Rhea grabbed her gift, accepted it, and thanked her with all his heart. Then the guy and Rosetta stepped outside, and Rosetta kicked off a magic training session, laser-focused. He threw all his seriousness into mastering his power, and he couldn't wait for lunch today. Lunch finally showed up, and right away there it was, a soy sauce dish sitting on the table. Rosetta and Yeji stared at it, practically vibrating with anticipation, while Rosa beamed, thrilled she was about to taste the food Rhea prepared. Rhea whipped up a veggie dish from the bear village, then tossed in the smaller orcs' fried goodies. Yeji and Rosetta dove in and chowed down happily. The guy took one bite, tasted the soy sauce, and froze, because it had been ages since he'd last tasted it. But the guy slammed on the brakes. One bite hit him like a punch, too salty, and that damp, musty stink crawling up his nose. Rosetta's rage flared the second she saw the guy's lousy expression. Because of him, Rhea was left fuming over the tasteless dish she'd just cooked. Honestly, it tasted awful, so the guy couldn't even enjoy lunch, yet she still grilled the girl about the fragrance she'd brought, and the girl just stared back, clueless, since she didn't know a thing about soy sauce. It was nampara, a classic flavor you'd find in the Eastern world, so forget soy sauce. This is fish sauce, where the fish gets marinated in salt until it's ready to hit hard. The guy grilled Rhea about that soy sauce, and she just stared back. She'd never heard of anything like it either. Even if Rhea had never heard of soy sauce, that had to mean it didn't come from this world, at least not yet. The guy stared at the thought, then bam, a wild idea hit him. If soy sauce didn't exist, he'd just whip it up himself, and if he can make it, Rio's gonna be over the moon. Then the slime guy shoved the door open and bolted outside. He's going to call this plan an unbeatable way to spread soy sauce across the world, and Yeji blurts out what he's thinking out loud. Right after that, Slimy just sits there, staring him down in total silence until a weird warmth floods her face and she blushes harder and harder. Yeji headed down to Bear Village and ran into a stranger who demanded a favor, trade him for a bag of soybeans, and Yeji didn't hesitate. He handed them over, came back with his soybeans, tossed them into a single container, sprinkled in a bit of salt, and poured in water to finish it all. He just stared at that soy sauce container in dead silence like it had answers, because no matter how you slice it, what he was cooking was nothing more than soaked soybeans cooked down into brine. He had zero clue how to make soy sauce, so he just prayed that some wild chemical reaction would spark inside the soybeans. Then bam, a knock hit the door and nearly sent him into a panic. The guy snapped the container shut, hiding it from Rhea, then swung the door open for the girl, while he stared at her like he couldn't wait, because it was almost bath time and Rhea marched straight up to him. Yeji slipped out of the room, totally missing how the minutes vanished, until it was suddenly time for a bath. The guy couldn't wait to rinse off after grinding all day when someone's voice called out to him. It was Rosetta, and she marched right up to the guy and declared, stone solid, that she was joining Rhea and Yeji in the bath, leaving him to just stand there staring at the furious girl with eyes popped wide open. Rosetta is going to head to the bath with Rhea and Yeji, and when Rhea hears that, her mood crumples fast as she reluctantly accepts Rosetta's spot in the hot springs. The girl didn't fully draw her weapon, but she cut loose and told them she'd clocked Rhea rinsing those guys every single day. She was jealous of the guy. Then the guy noticed her sworn sister showing up every day too, so she stepped in and helped him, and Rosetta yanked the guy by the collar. Rhea cut her off before she could do anything else. She marched over, scowled, shoved Rosa away from the guy, and soothed her down. Yeji clocked it instantly. He couldn't bring himself to tell Rosetta the truth about what happened at that love hotel with Rhea, his cheeks still blazing from the memory. Rosetta shot Rhea a weird, unreadable look, then announced she was heading to the bathroom again, because she couldn't risk Yeji trying anything obscene with Rhea while she was gone. The guy fretted over Rhea while Rhea shot back in irritation, yet she still greenlit Rosa to prove her innocence, even though she warned that it was all going to be pointless if she was just going to keep watching anyway. She was riding high on her win, because soon Rosetta would get to see Rhea without a stitch, and that girl could barely contain her excitement for the swim coming up. When Rosetta stepped into the hot spring zone, she froze in awe at the insane layout. Everywhere she looked, a huge mix of different pools sprawled out. Compared to that bathroom, the royal bath was basically just a puddle on the road, so the girl practically dove in, thrilled to explore it, but Real snapped a warning. This wasn't the time to stop and rest. Their job was simple: wash the master's back while the girl started stripping off her clothes. But Rosetta wasn't even listening. She just stared, totally locked in on every bare spot she was seeing. Ria's dangerously seductive look was all it took. Rosa's nose started bleeding. That was the exact body Rosetta had been craving, something Ria looked like in her wildest visions, pure and divine. And Rosa, she lit up the moment she saw it, thrilled out of her mind. Ria snapped a towel over herself the second the girl stared, because even though they were both girls, shame still burned when she thought of being seen naked. To keep Rosetta from feeling the same embarrassment, she started stripping too, shrugging off her armor and clothes right away. Still dressed only in her underwear, Rosetta closed in on the girl. She couldn't stop herself from wanting to see Ria's body again. Ria snapped out her magic and forged an icy shield, stopping the girl dead in her tracks, and when the dark-haired girl clocked Yeji's confused stare, her face fell into a gloomy silence for a beat. Rosetta spun away from the guy and snapped that he shouldn't stare at her like that. Yeji flinched on the spot, whirled his gaze elsewhere, and stammered an apology, but Rosetta's heart still sank, her mood clearly shaken by what he'd done. She was crushed, convinced that the guy saw her big curves and judged her as unattractive, but then she stared at the upset girl. He suddenly remembered that Ria had always been the same, just as self-conscious about her huge curves, yet she never let Rosetta drown in sadness. She marched right up to her, pressed her reassurance into her hands, and told Rosa there was nothing to worry about. After all, the master loved exactly those kinds of sizes, so the girl flashed a grin and winked at Rosetta, leaving Rosa completely reeling. She snapped her head back to the guy, and bam, he sent her an obscene stare right back. No doubt Rosetta felt Yeji's stare drilling into her, so heat rushed to her face and she covered herself with her hands, mortified. Again, the girl spun away from him and begged him not to stare at her body. Yeji expected Rosetta to react exactly like this, and before long, they stepped into the bathhouse. Rosetta spotted that wine tub and couldn't help but stare, like it was a real shocker in the middle of civilization's madness. Then she dove into different pool types and finally got to fully feel what they were all about. Soon, Rosetta slipped into Ria and Yeji's circle, 2 girls and 1 guy, and the trio was loving the sauna until Rosetta called out to the guy, demanding a serious talk. While Yeji stayed sunk in the heat, she answered him in total calm. Rosetta grabbed the last warm water she could find because it was packed with the guy's magical energy, and with that, she could whip up top-tier healing potions. He let her grab as much as she wanted, refusing to take a single thing from her just to strike some water deal. They were friends, so he didn't need any reward from Rosetta. She climbed out of the water furious, refusing to take anything unless they struck a deal. The guy moved in to calm her, insisting the deal wasn't needed since he'd already clocked the girl's stunning proportions, and Rosetta stared at him blankly until it finally hit her. The girl sucked in a breath and her cheeks exploded into a full-on blush. Yeji realized he'd just said the one thing he wasn't supposed to, and the second it hit, Rosetta dove straight into the water to slip past that guy. Then she snapped into indignation like, "Fine, I'll deal with it," and you could tell the water deal was the last thing on her mind now because that guy kept stealing glances at her body every second. Yeji felt heat rush to her cheeks after what she said, and the guy snapped his face into his reddened palms like he couldn't hide it fast enough. He was mortified for watching without permission, and Ria was furious with how Rose handled it. Night had dropped, stars blazed overhead, and in his room the guy was still messing around with the slime, because Ria told him to. She stayed quiet so she wouldn't get in the guy's way until that moment, and suddenly Ria couldn't ignore what Rosetta was doing to Yeji anymore. He couldn't change a thing and he didn't even sweat it because that girl had pledged herself to Ria, not to him. But once the formation guarding their master balloons out of control, the soldiers start dragging their feet and listening to orders less. That guy had no clue what to do, and Ria stared at the problem like it was staring back. Then she told Yeji, "For now, just listen and do exactly what I say." Not knowing what was coming, the guy swallowed his doubts and trusted Ria's every word. They sprinted up to the room door where Rosetta was already waiting, and Ria hissed a warning, "No loud talk, no matter what." Then the girl shoved the door open. Yeji and Ria burst into the room, dim lights, grim walls, and a heavy mood hanging in the air. Then the guy spotted steam rolling through the space and smelled something amazing, until his brain got completely hijacked by what he saw ahead. In the middle of the room, Rosetta sat totally still in her nightgown, eyes gagged under a thick cloth, while a diffuser nearby hissed out cozy steam. Rosetta heard someone slip inside, snapped for Ria, and yelled that she was mean, while Ria fidgeted in her chair, fighting not to burst. Though she kept pushing the girl forward, desperate to get in on the fun and soak up every second of the joy with Rosetta. Rosa sits on a chair, blindfolded with her eyes and hands, and blurts to her sister to hurry. She's done fighting it, she can't resist anymore. Behind Yoji Amezaki, Ria stands ready and tells her sister she's set. Ria flashes a grin and tells her, "Don't worry, now I'm going to shower you with love." Meanwhile, Yoji Amezaki stares at her and can't help thinking, "Whoa, what a scary face." Then Ria leans in and starts whispering to Yoji Amezaki. She tells him, "Kiss the rose," and he blurts out, stunned, "Wait, does it actually sound dangerous in a moment like this?" All while Rosa keeps nagging her sister to hurry up. Ria shoves Yoji Amezaki aside, leans in close, and hisses that she'll shoulder every consequence herself, because this is the only way she can finally give in to him. Meanwhile, Rosa sinks into her seat, shaking with pure anticipation. Yoji Amezaki shows up and immediately thinks, since it's Ria, she's already mapped this whole thing out, so he trusts her completely. He leans in close, and the moment her lips clamp down with brutal force, he gets pulled straight toward her until he finally presses right up against her. Rosa barrels in and thanks me again and again. She whispers that it feels amazing inside her sister, and her body just flares with heat, while Yoji Amezaki has already clocked the truth. It's all the fragrance, and he and the others start the whole process again. Yoji Amezaki calls it an immoral game, then Ria slides in, eyes blazing, and declares, "The time is here." She rips off her blindfold, and right away, Yoji Amezuki and Rosa bolt out with shocked screams when they spot each other right there in front of them. Rosa erupts into screaming at her sister, yelling that she's being mean, then demands why she treated her so cruelly. And there stands Yoji Amezaki, frozen with that crushing guilt, like it's stabbing his chest. Ria tells her, dead serious, that it's for her own good, yet Rosa just can't get it, lifting tear-streaked eyes that refuse to understand. Ria snaps that she can't take on serving the master by herself anymore, because the moment has arrived where she has to end this. Bitter silence hangs in the air as Rosa drops her gaze and Yoji Amezaki realizes it. This is Ria's whip of love, a cold, forced trick meant to break someone. Ria tells Rose, "Your master already has my heart, mine, not yours," and confesses she just wants a kiss from him. Rose instantly starts trembling, choking back tears. Rose whips her head side to side and screams that she won't do it, because all she ever truly loves is her sister. Then she cuts off mid-sentence, suddenly realizing something. With burning eyes, she snaps that this is a test, and her sister is quietly checking whether her love is real. So don't let her spiral, she's already got it mapped out. Ria swallowed hard, then whipped around to Yoji Amezaki and asked him straight, can he kiss her again, and if Ward's really messing with her, then what's the point? Yoji Amezaki steps in, rips off her blindfold, and declares it'll never work. Ria stares at him, confused. Yoji shoots Ria an apology, then says Rosa won't budge, no matter what happens here. He shrugs and says it's up to her who she falls for, then Rosa hears it and her cheeks instantly light up with a blush. Yoji Amezaki swears they could have handled Rose's devotion in a smarter way, then they go way too far and Rose snaps up, shakes everything off her lap. Yoji Amezaki stands by Rose's feelings for Ria, then tells her he's sorry, right as Ria sighs hard and drops her gaze. Right here, Rosa storms up to Yoji Amezaki and demands he turn toward her. The moment he turns his head, she plants a sweet kiss on his cheek and the whole room freezes in shock, especially Ria. Yoji Amezaki stands there with his face blazing red, while Rose tells him that starting now he can call her Rose. She flashes a grin and says she's already gotten close to him, so he can call her that, then she bolts out of the room, warning him not to get the wrong idea. She's convinced men are rude, cruel, and nothing but creatures ruled by instinct, until Yoji Amezaki comes along and suddenly she doesn't see him that way. She spins back and with a warm smile, tells him she somehow managed to change her mind about him. She flashes him a smile and Yoji Amezaki can't help but think, this is weird, but it's working. Rose spins around. She pulls them in for a hug and declares that the three of them are finally going to cherish each other, because when they kiss, they'll unlock double the happiness. She shoots her hand toward Ria, but Ria recoils in pure panic and Yoji Amezaki just grins, saying he's happy they can actually get along. So if the three of them click, he figures maybe it won't be so bad after all. He adds that he'll absorb the relics even faster than he reassures her. If the Lord says so, she doesn't have to worry. Rosa plants her finger on Yoji Amazaki's lips and pushes, then asks if they can pick up right where they stopped, while Ryo stares at what she's doing in sheer terror. She admits she'd been holding back earlier, like she just couldn't push the whole truth out. Ria snaps at Rose that it's completely unfair. She's already kissed the gentleman so many times, so why not make it happen all at once with all three of them? The girls creep closer to Yoji Amazaki, and in a full-on panic he blurts out, "So you're really saying yes now?" But his heart can't handle what's coming. He drops onto the bed in stunned silence, and the girls instantly tell him they'll all be his partners at once, promising they'll treat Mr. Yoji Amazaki right, while Ria clenches her resolve, sure she won't let Rose beat her. Yoji Amazaki can't help but wonder if it all comes down to their long relationship, because every move they made together was flawless, and now he has nothing left to regret. Morning hits and Yoji Amazaki jolts awake, yawning like he's stretching out a whole lifetime. He grins, tells his slime good morning, and relives the insane experience from yesterday, while Ria lies right beside him. Rose rapped on their door and beamed, wishing Mr. Yogi Amazaki a good morning, only for him to echo it back and ask if she'd already woken up, and when she said yes, she told him she was heading straight back to the royal capital today. Rose admits her heart feels a bit heavy after breaking up with her sister, but she's got missions to chase. Meanwhile, Yaji Yamazaki says he already asked earlier. But why is she freaking out over Ria? Then he stumbles out a clumsy save, basically, if you don't want to talk about it, just say so. Rose grins and tells him he's right, I don't mind talking about it with you. Then she curls up under the blanket right beside Ria. 5 years back inside the Arvani household, a girl slumps and mutters that everything is crushingly disappointing. The man sprawls on the ground, shaking with helpless fear. Then little Rose, just 12, blurts, "Is this what the adventurer's like?" The servant can't stop panicking. She tells her to stop because the competition is already over, yet Rose just snorts with arrogant confidence and says she understood. She snaps that she won't waste her time on some little fry, and the guy shoots up out of his seat, yelling that she needs to respect the poor. He hurls a fireball at Rose, and she snaps up a defensive edge to block it. The flames ricochet off everything and slam back into him. He shrieks, "That can't be right, someone her age can't have magic that strong." The blast hits with brutal force and his wig rockets off his head. The servant leans in and tells Rose, "After lunch, don't forget you're meeting the son of the Rui Buster family." Rose nods like, "Got it," but then she lets out a heavy sigh, annoyed that she just wasted all that time on some adventurer. She used to chase sword practice, not the perfect daughter-in-law dream. While girls her age were stuck on tea parties, she was busy honing magic like it was her destiny, and yeah, she was nothing like the others. Standing in front of the mirror, the servant brushes her hair and blurts out, "I need to ask you, are you really not interested in men?" Rose shot back with pride that it was true. She didn't care what her father said because those rude, cruel creatures could stay right where they were, and her mind was never changing. She shut the door on every single suitor, and 2 years later the world started calling her Mad Dog Rose. She slammed back against her parents and signed on with the Royal Capital's Knights, and now everyone's buzzing, whispering, and debating whether the Arvani family is ready to get rid of that rabid dog. As she walked, she shrugged off every word anyone threw at her. Nothing mattered, and she didn't care at all. Because she finally got her freedom back. She'd always despised what it meant to be a noble's daughter, because one day she'd be forced into marriage, pure politics dressed up as love, and if that meant obeying every demand men made, then she'd rather cut her own path, so she chose the sword. Inside the guild, a massive brute shoved his way in and swaggered up to her, asking to have fun with her. Then she grinned like she'd been waiting all along and asked, right to his face, if he really wanted to get beaten that badly. Being a knight is straight up awesome. Her age and family don't matter one bit, and she doesn't need noble blood to earn the title. What counts is one thing only, her sword skills. When men can't match her sword skills, she gets an incredible thrill out of it. And just as the rumors about Mad Dog tore through the nights, she finally ran into someone. Turns out it wasn't some stranger at all, it was his sister. Ria steps up to her and demands, "Are you Rose from a noble line?" And the girl snaps back with zero shame, "Nope, I'm Ria, captain of the 7th Regiment." Ria cuts in with the captain's order from last night. Starting today, she's officially joining their regiment, and Rose fires back, "I heard you loud and clear." But she refused to work for someone weaker than her, and Ria just smiled like she already knew. She hurls a sword at her and Rose just freezes. She has no clue what it is or why she's getting it, so Ria orders her to grip it and slice into her for a full 5 minutes. She flat out declares she won't touch guns or any weapon at all. She can't help steering her friend onto the right path. Rose flips with a grin and fires back that she's actually pretty calm. She snarls that Ria is trash, then demands to know if she really doesn't understand. Ria is her enemy. When Ria attacked, she didn't go wild. She only drove a brutal kick straight into her neck because Ria knew she was stronger. In the end, Rose crumples to the ground, utterly worn out, and Ria just says, "Looks like we're finished." Rose can't believe the sheer speed and crushing strength they brought to the fight. Strangely enough, Rose didn't even get mad after that loss. Everyone let her try again, and Ria marched the news to her superiors, saying Rose would join their regiment. She claimed Rose would be under her thumb, like she hadn't taught a rookie in ages. Right after that, under the sisters' guidance, their bond only got tighter until Ria wakes up and snaps at Rose, "Don't you dare blend lies into the truth." Rose beams and cheers that her sister is awake, wishing her a bright good morning. She's ready to scoop her up in a hug, but Ria slips away and shifts to another spot. Yoji Amezaki smiles and drops the bomb. Turns out Rose and that wild behavior, it's all Ria's doing. She tells him that Rose later rose to vice captain of the 3rd Regiment, and back then she followed every order with her whole heart, so she dragged Ria into training with her. Ria dodges the hype and slips away from the enthusiastic girl. Ria can't wrap her head around it. How did things end up like this when Rose loves her so fiercely? And Yoji Yamezaki, he's just as stunned, asking the same question about how it all happened. Yoji Yamezaki slips inside and tiptoes forward, cracking the door open without a sound. He pries open the barrels and bursts with joy, saying the soybeans were supposed to have shown up yesterday. And just like that, he realizes nothing's changed. The beans are still sitting at the bottom of the liquid. He'd been sure that the soy supplement would darken in the saltwater, like, instantly. Then Kazumi strides up, taps him and calls, "Mister." He twitches. He scoots closer, eyes sharp, and blurts, "So what is it?" Yeji starts to stammer that it's not like that at all, then shoots back that maybe he should just try guessing for himself, because he's probably messing with soy sauce. In shock, she blurts, "Wait, do you even know what soy sauce is?" And she laughs, "Sure, I mean, it's Yashasami's favorite condiment." Yoji Amezaki swears soy sauce is older than 10,000 years, so Kazumi jumps in with blunt advice. If he wants to brew it himself, he's got to get yeast first. Yoji Amezaki squints at her, and she quickly tells him that he stirs yeast into boiled soy, then blends it with fried, crushed wheat. Long ago, Yeji stumbled on a tale about a too naive hero who made everything look easy. Then reality hit hard, because making soy sauce is a brutal challenge for a total beginner with zero know-how, and Kazumi keeps pressing, asking again if he's ready to make soy sauce. Yoji Amezaki shoots back, "Yeah, but not in this era," then admits he's stuck and laughs off the truth. He only wanted to shock Ria. Kazumi blurts out that they've got to hunt down the ancient ruins faster, and Yoji Amezaki immediately asks what she means. Kazumi swore the 2nd floor of the gourmet territory is packed with kitchen tools, so if they crack it open, they can grab soy sauce, miso, ketchup, and even whip up mayonnaise with a single button press. The hot spring territory on the ground floor is straight up amazing. If they'd gone gourmet, the food here would have been even better, but then his mind snaps to the golem and cold sweat breaks out. Amid the ruins, Ria grills him, did it really happen? And just before that, he'd been dead set against them exploring, stumbling out that he can't stop thinking about everything. He's terrified of facing the golem, but if it comes to that, he'll slip back to the 1st floor, so today's move is simple: scout and investigate. He tells Ria she's glowing with pure joy, and she beams back, happily confirming it's true. She believed the shelter had to level up its defenses, so if they could recruit more golem allies like Kazumi, their fighting power would finally feel dependable. Kazumi is already glowing as those words hit, and Yoji Yamezaki can tell she looks truly happy. Then they keep strolling down the hall. Kazumi rockets a finger down the stairs and declares that the 2nd floor starts right here. They burst into a huge field, surrounded by looming trees. They burst down the stairs. Yoji Amezaki's jaw drops when he realizes the 2nd floor has totally flipped into this wild scene. Butterflies swirl through the air, and a fountain roars right there. Ria's jaw drops. This place is way roomier than the 1st floor, and this one is downright huge. Kazumi explains it like a secret map. The deeper he plunges into the ancient ruins, the bigger and more open his territory becomes. And the deeper they descend, the tougher those golem guards get, so Yoji Amezaki is thinking everything will be fine because he's got 2 combat experts riding with him. Kazumi also tells them, "I'm heading back to the 1st floor now, so if you need anything, just call me." Yoji Amezaki panics and blurts out, "Are you really coming back?" as she sinks into a deep, sincere apology. Then Yoji snaps, "No, the golems won't work with the golems from the other floors," and insists it can't be. She bows to him, wishing him luck for every battle ahead, while Yoji Amezaki tears himself away, saying goodbye through sheer pain. Then Ria, trembling with nerves, tells him they'll try, and Yoji can only choke out a tearful yes. They stride along the path and Ria practically whispers, "It's so quiet here." He grins and says a picnic would be perfect. Then they spot the fruits hanging from the trees and immediately start wondering, what are those? She asks if it's monkey bread and it claims the fruit is bittersweet and downright delicious. Then one drops to the floor and Yoji Amezaki starts to wonder what's going on. Ria cuts in, tells him to trust her, and asks for the fruit. She yanks a strip of paper from her collar, whips out a knife, and slices the fruit. Then Jai's jaw drops when he realizes it's actually a real blade. She hands him half the fruit and he snatches it with a grin, practically bursting to try it right now. He takes a bite, lights up like it's the best thing he's ever tasted, and asks Ria if she wants some. She snatches it happily and thanks him with a grin. Yoji Amezaki grins. Back when they met, she made a huge fuss over that indirect kiss, but now he's already hit that wave of nostalgia. They've already lived through so much together, and that little kiss trick doesn't faze her anymore. She chows down, then blushes bright red and blurts, it's so embarrassing." Yoji Amezaki suddenly realizes she's got the same mindset as him, and Ria grins, saying it's an honor when her lips get to meet the very same spot as the master. Yoji Amezaki can't figure out why everything tastes so bittersweet, like he's chasing some kind of satisfaction the world keeps talking about, but he's not sure he's ever actually found it. Seriously, how can anyone be content with life when there's so much to fight for? Then every girl suddenly twitches and Yoji Yamezaki's cheeks flare red like a busted firework. Ria panics and asks what's wrong. He stammers it's nothing, but right then, crabs start scuttling toward them from behind. When the disgruntled crabs started clacking like crazy, Yeji and Ria spun around. Crabs charge in at breakneck speed and they jump to their feet, terrified and clueless about what's happening. Yoji Yamezaki scans the area and boom, that monkey fruit is right there, turned into their next meal. He snatches it up with his claws while Ria snaps at her master to stay right behind her. She fires a fire bullet right into those crabs and Yoji Amezaki's jaw drops, because she's somehow stronger than she was before, like she leveled up for real. Then they spot the crabs flashing big grins and clapping their claws like they're totally fine. Right on cue, one of them leaps onto Ria and slashes the hem of her dress with a claw. Ria shrieks and bolts still as the crabs swarm her from every side. Yoji Amezaki can't wrap his head around why they went after Ria and not him, because in this situation, Ria is straight up in danger. He's like, if magic won't touch them, then I'll try something else. Spots a fruit on the ground, grabs it, swings hard and smacks it into the crab's shell. The crab yelps and squeals in pure pain, totally blindsided by the move, and Yoji Amezaki instantly decides it's time to wear that crab down. Because while those crabs are racing after Ria right now, she can't shake the feeling that everything's gone wrong, and then the same crabs turn and smash into Yoji Amezaki too. After a while, the crabs collapse in exhausted silence, their shells split wide, and he finally exhales, saying, "That's it." Ria tears into the moment, runs straight up to him, and sobbing wraps him in a tight hug. He grabs his hand and thanks him for saving her life. Yeji stares at him and thinks the whole expedition was worth it because he looks genuinely satisfied. Then he snaps, "Are you hurt?" And she trembles, insisting, "I'm fine, my master saved me." He exhales like a weight's finally lifted. Yoji Amezaki whips away, cheeks blazing red, and demands why they don't head back so she can change. Then her own face starts burning with a blush too. She pulls the fabric tight around herself and whispers, "It's fine." She refuses to derail their expedition, then grabs what's left of her clothing and uses it to shield herself. Then Yoji Amezaki spots something and fear slams him so hard he freezes mid-step, while Ria, clueless, blurts out, "What's wrong with you?" and calls his name. They whip around and there's Agulum blocking their path, blasting the news that the intruders are caught. Combat protocols kick off and Ria and Yoji Amezaki shout in panic as they spot Agulum right in front of them. The golem starts ripping its own body parts loose until all that's left is one eyeball. Yeji trembles as she wonders, is it really gonna go into combat mode like this? Then snap, tentacles burst out of the eyeball, whipping off in every direction, all racing to the fountain to scoop up the liquid. Then a massive squid bursts out and declares, "The battle's ready, every intruder is about to get exterminated." Yoji Imezaki is stunned by how massive he's become, while Ria keeps staring forward like she owns the moment, until the squid explodes into an all-out attack. The tentacles snap around Ria's legs and yank her straight toward them, clamping down so hard on her limbs that she can't move an inch. Yoji Imezaki chases her and yells at the top of his lungs, but she only screams back at everything, and then, when the monster's still too close, Yoji clenches his fist and screams for it to back off from Ria. He swings for a tentacle, but his fist punches straight through the monster, smashing a giant crack into the wall, and the tentacles snap back and regrow in seconds. Yoji Imezaki realizes the ugly truth: this won't work. The monster's tentacles slammed around Ria's neck, and she gasped out a trembling plea to her master as her breath vanished. Then Yoji Imezaki spun in circles, shouting for him to calm down, and it hit him. This golem has the same button too. He bursts in from behind and clocks an emergency stop button stamped on the monster's body, then snatches a massive fruit off the ground and swings. And it hits that button right on cue, like this fruit is perfectly reflected from it. He shoots upward, rips open the sky, and blasts straight to the next floor, only to tear everything to pieces because the heavens are shattered. Up above, Kazumi and the others tremble on the floor, clueless about what just hit them. Yoji Imezaki silently apologizes in his head. The monster declares the emergency stop button got slammed, so it snaps into a human body and the attacks finally stop. Then Yoji Imezaki practically bursts with joy because he made it happen. The monster finally drops Ria, its tentacles shrivel and melt into goo, then Yoji Imezaki snatches her up and they both transform into the monster together. Then there she is, a girl with two buns, and she stares up, snaps her eyes open, and calls him master, thanking him for pulling her out of her sleep. The golem barges in and introduces herself. She's Futaba, the golem guard of the second floor of the gourmet territory. Then the next golem shows up wearing striking Chinese clothes. Yoji Imezaki spots Ria in her Chinese dress and immediately leans in, whispering about it. Then Futaba snaps, "So you really know what she's wearing?" She tells her all about Mrs. Kitty, the old owner, who absolutely adored clothes like these and who loved long trips so much that she dragged back garments plus golems from every corner of the world. Yoji Imezaki finally gets why Kazuma's wearing Japanese clothes, so now he's wondering if somewhere out there in this world, Japan exists too. He starts thinking about what he's trying to get, then it hits him: soy sauce. He whips around to Futaba and says he heard you can make soy sauce right on this floor, and she practically lights up as she asks if it was Kazuma's sister who told him. Futaba says, "Then I'll show you how to use this right over there," and as she points, Yoji Imezaki just groans like, "I can't believe it took me this long to pull it off." At last, he'll finally taste the world's salty truth. Then the three of them stride toward that building, and surprise hits them like a wave. Ria can't believe it. She's stunned that a massive building like this was tucked away in these hidden ruins. They spot crabs skittering across the board, and Futaba blurts out that this is proof of crab clone production. Everyone's shocked. She claims those crab clones are the magical guards of this floor, unstoppable, packed with power, able to cast magic and vanish, and their production never, ever slows down. She says there are always hundreds of them packed on this floor, and when the count dips, she just summons new machines. And yeah, there's soy sauce here too. Ria knows she's a sucker for it. Deji reckons they started restocking right after he wiped out the crabs. In these ancient ruins, you don't just find food, you stumble on a full-on production machine that dishes out everything you could ever want. And right as they step inside, Futaba reveals the gear is making soy sauce. Yoji Imezaki spots a monitor and a mouse, blurts, "So this is a real computer, right?" And she just shrugs. She can't tell him any more details about how it actually works. Futaba remembers Mrs. Ketty always whipping up soy sauce with this machine. Then he slams the button, fully expecting the electricity to cut out. A menu pops up on the screen and the big question hits: what are they gonna do? Ria's panic flares as she blurts that the moment he taps the button, pictures start snapping into that box. Yoji Imezaki keeps moving the mouse, grinding through his thoughts, wondering if he's finally going to try the soy sauce option now. They spell out every ingredient they'll use and ask for his okay, and Yoji Imezaki's left staring like, "Wait, that's it," at how shockingly simple the whole thing is. He nods and the car beside him kicks into motion, and boom, right away, the girls snap into high alert. Then a bottle of dark liquid splashes right in front of them. Everyone leans in like, "Wait, what?" Yoji Imezaki grabs the taste, grins instantly, and swears it's soy sauce without a doubt. He feared the ingredients he'd used 10,000 years ago had spoiled, but when he tasted them, everything hit perfectly, just right. He blurted that it was amazing, and Ria smiled sweetly and said it was exactly what you'd expect from such a gentleman, watching him use the equipment with effortless ease. He pushes back and insists it's all so simple, then they hit him with, "You're just too modest." Ria says the gentleman figured out how that equipment works all by himself, because even when he explained it to her clearly, it still never clicked for her, and Futaba nods along. Yoji Imezaki tells himself, yeah, sure, it was easy, but the praise feels wildly overblown, so he pushes them to switch gears and try something else, and they light up with joy. They haul out barrels packed with groceries, racing to refill their food stores. Then Futaba catches up with Kazumi and drops the bombshell. It's been 10,000 years while Ria's off changing clothes. They dumped it all on the table and declared, everything's ready. Then came soy sauce, ponzu, miso, ketchup, and a big squeeze of mayonnaise. Yoji Imezaki would have wanted Worcestershire sauce too, sweet and sour, right? Because it sounds like it's got all kinds of tricky ingredients, so they shelved it for later. Ria whips around to face him and thanks him, then vows she'll give it everything she's got and cook tonight's dinner. Yoji Imezaki practically beams because Ria is smiling. Then Ria turns up covered in slime and asks if she can help, and Yoji's like, sure, with a straight-up yes. It's right here, the kitchen. Yoji Imezaki strides to the computer, lost in thought about what else he can try, then smashes the button and holds his breath, wondering if this wild idea will actually work. 3 balls suddenly pop into view right in front of him, and relief hits hard. He did it. He grabs one and grins, claiming it's candy from a monkey fruit. He takes a bite, lights up, and swears it's delicious, so he starts whipping up a bunch of different flavors, then hands them all over to Ria and the others as a sweet gift. They slide into their seats with big smiles, raise their glasses, and toast like crazy for the capture of the second floor. They scan the place and swear there's even a proper dining room here, so next time we're dragging Rose and Myria to a party. Then he snaps the crab's phalanges off, drool hits the floor, and his pupils blow wide as that mouthwatering taste takes over. He claims it's divine, then warmth and unstoppable strength flood his body. Ria shoots back that it's probably magic powers from the crab clones. They tell him this when a monster's magical power is stronger, the concentration of magic inside him surges too, so yeah, it's a whole wave of power he can feel. He starts realizing his body is begging for more, but he can't do a thing about it. Then it clicks. That's why Ria and the others wanted his saliva so badly. Ria tastes it and lights up, grinning, so this is soy sauce. She swears the crab's meat tastes like fish sauce, but somehow it's silky and tender, pure bliss. Then she keeps sucking on the crab's little phalanges like it's the best thing ever, and Yoji Imezaki just smiles, saying he's thrilled Ria is happy. Yoji Imezaki grins and admits ponzu is better for crab, but today he's going all in on soy sauce flavor, so he barely uses any ponzu. Then Futaba blurts, "Are you all eating?" She keeps piling on more and more food, telling them to go wild since there's still plenty left. Then Yoji Imezaki stumbles through an awkward question. How can she claim that when Ria cooked every last bit? Futaba laughs it off and says her special skill is cleaning the table. She's insanely good at it. Then Yoji Imezaki questions why she's stuck with such a lame talent, and she lets out a heavy sigh. And she blurts that it's because Mrs. Ketty loved cooking. She just can't wait to learn how to cook. Kazumi pats her on the back to calm her down, and then she keeps chewing crab meat. Ria eyes Slimy, who's digging into the food like it's pure gold, and gushes that it's unbelievably delicious, turning that second floor into a huge win with a mountain of benefits. They can munch on crabs till their hearts feel full, but right now a girl stands frozen in the forest, while a vampire slips up behind her, totally unnoticed. That vampire girl strides into the forest, scanning everything like she's totally lost. Then she looks up at the sky and blurts, "This is weird, it's way too quiet." When a monster so strong shows up, the low-ranked ones immediately vanish into their burrows and refuse to surface, and that's when the vampire grins, bared fangs flashing, because she's craving a fight with this man right now. She whips her head around and spots people posted by the lake. Then there's Yoji Imezaki standing right beside Slimy, who's practically vibrating with pure energy, and the vampire's left reeling at the insane kind of magic power it unleashes. Yoji Imezaki warns her that if she drinks too much, her stomach is going to wreck itself, and while the vampire clocks him as just some regular guy, it also realizes the girl is on a whole different plane. She realizes this is what human strength really feels like, and now she can't stop wondering. The tougher the opponent gets, the hotter she gets too. She creeps up on them, drops the words, "I'm going to kill you," and Yoji Imezaki shoots back in panic. He's worried she's filthy and says she's drinking herself to death. The vampire whips out his claws, and Yoji Imezaki suddenly jolts upright. She slams onto her back, and Yoji Imezaki whips his head around in panic because he spots the girl. The vampire yanks back stunned and can't figure out why this guy is acting so weird. Yoji Imezaki rushes in, asking if she's hurt and if she's okay, but she's utterly lost. She can't read what's happening because his magical power and body are completely ordinary, so there's no reason for him to react like this. She wears a stern, watchful expression, telling herself it won't matter who he is. If he steps in her way, she'll handle it. Then she's going to kill him, so he snaps in with a knife, swings hard at him, and she blocks it cold. He stares at the knife and realizes it's snapped clean in two. She gasps in horror, swearing it can't be real because this blade was a secret gift from the Magic Clan, and he blurts out, all awkward, that it genuinely terrified him. Yoji Imezaki leans in and asks if it's really a toy, then her anger flares and her hands start to tremble. Yoji Imezaki snaps back that it's junk because it shattered the very first time she swung it. The vampire snatches back her breath, forces herself to cool down, and reminds herself she can't win while she's spiraling. Then she demands Yoji Imezaki's name. He grins and asks for her name, then she goes stone still, like she suddenly realizes she's heard it before. She'd heard humans were freakishly strong, but until this moment she'd never truly believed it, because the power he carries is straight up unreal. Right in front of Yoji Imezaki, she vanishes in a flash, then lands on a tree branch above him, and Yoji blurts out, "Wait." She looks him dead in the eyes and barks that her name is canon, so he remembers it. She's gone, and Yoji Imezaki is convinced they'll cross paths with her again, right away, any day now. He can't stop wondering what happened, and who that kid even was, while Slimy has flipped into a puddle of slime and sprawled across his arms. They're heading home, and at the dead of night, the cannon is already planted right at the cave entrance. She's in freefall, mind racing as she leaps off the cliff, then someone asks her name. When she was a kid, she crossed paths with a man who stared at her like she was pure power, and swore he was captivated by her strength. He tells her he needs her help in their plans, then admits they're going to turn her power into a weapon. She thrusts her hand toward him and takes his offer like a challenge. She's determined to prove to herself that she and he are leagues above everyone else. She grips her other hand, shaking like a lightning strike, convinced she's alone. Then she snaps her head up and throws those thoughts away. She figures that if she strikes her while she's asleep, she might finally get a shot, so the moment has arrived. She's ready to dive into the cave, then Slimy slithers in front of her and she explodes with angry growls. In the next heartbeat, Slimy vanishes from her sight and Cannon snaps her head around, searching. She realizes the fist is coming from behind, but she pivots and blocks it at the last second. Conan groans, stunned by the raw force of that hit. Slimy scrambles back and steps in front of her, and the cannon finally locks up and freezes. Then he whips his head up, spots those slime balls, and his stomach drops. He knows what's about to hit. One breath later, a long scream tears through the air. Ria and Yoji Imezaki are sprawled asleep on the bed when a slimy, non-human thing slithers in and tries to blurt out something. Then he shrieks sharp and loud, and both of them jolting awake scramble up mid-scream. Yoji Imezaki blurts, "What's going on?" The little slime balls spill everything. They step outside and Yoji Imezaki grabs Slimy's attention and demands what happened. Then he spots Cannon sitting there in front of Slimy, totally naked, as she snarls that Slimy has to be killed. Yoji Imezaki can't believe he just heard those words, and as he creeps closer, Ria steps in front of him and tells her master to stay back. Ria asks if the girl is a vampire, and the girl quickly dodges her eyes. Ria says that among all the demon clans, this one hits the hardest, so the killer they sent to steal the Lord's life must be one of them. Yoji Imezaki stares at her and can't believe this tiny girl is a murderer, so he presses her, questions her about her name, and demands the truth. "Is it really you?" Ria snaps that it's pointless, and even if he begs them to hand over her name to the killers, it'll be more humiliating than death. So Conan drops his gaze and repeats through his teeth that he wants them to kill her fast. She slumps and admits she's lost the fight, then calls it pointless, like there's no reason left to keep living. Yoji Imezaki can't stop freaking out. She's way more stunned that she got caught by something slimy, and then a memory slams into place. He dashes off, tells them to wait, and swears he'll be right back. Then the girls stare at him like, huh? Before long, he's back and thanks them for holding on. He shoves a piece of candy into her hand, and her eyes go wide in pure shock. Yoji Imezaki calls it candy, sweet, irresistible, and hands it to her so she can stop being forced to do anything wrong. Ria snaps, saying she can't stand how that gentleman goes easy on little girls, and Slimy lingers right beside her, nodding along like he's got the exact same disgust. Not long after, Kanan storms off, feeling the whole moment was awful. Then she stops dead, stares at the candy like it's the key to something, and opens it to see what's inside. She lifts the candy up to the sky, stares at it like it holds a secret, then pops it into her mouth and bites down with pure curiosity, her cheeks already turning bright pink. She thinks it's delicious, then she bounces down the path, singing like she owns the world, until she hears a voice call out that she's in the best mood. This is Grace's boyfriend, the guy who used her power like it was a weapon. She demands, "Why are you here?" And Grace snaps that it's horrible to say that because he showed up only because he was worried sick about her. He leans in and asks her where that man lives. She smiles and says, "Of course I've figured it out, piece of cake." Grace nods like she can finally breathe and tells him she's happy he hears it. Then he snaps in a stern voice, asking why she's doing something she wasn't ordered to do, while she's visibly twitching. She fires back, asking what he means, so he snaps that she better not try lying to him because she already knows his subordinates were tailing her. He asks again, pushing the question whether humanity is strong, and she starts scrambling for the perfect answer. After mulling it over, she admits he's strong, and maybe she won't stand a chance. Grace chimes in and he hits back, frustrated because this all blows up into problems for him. So yeah, she's the core of the plan, but if she can't take down this guy, then he's done with her. Watch how she trembles the second those words hit. She remembers every time they kicked her out, warning that her power would one day turn into a threat to the village, so they told her to vanish, like she should disappear for good. Kanan's grip starts to slip, sweat beads up, and her whole body trembles, so Grace rushes in, begging her to breathe and calm down, and says, "If you can't wipe out the human race like this, then steal their power too," then thrusts a bottle of pills into his hand. Kanan nods like he knows, then he blurts, "I already told you earlier, these pills are forged from the relics of the human race. Pop one and you'll unleash the same power as them." Kanan grins and blurts out that those pills aren't finished yet, then he swears with total confidence they're constantly getting better, and taking just one will come with zero side effects. Then he leans in and asks if she's really sure she wants to be alone, like before, while Kanan keeps trembling, shakes her head, and pops one tablet. She pops a pill. Grace smirks, and suddenly she starts screaming. Tears flood her eyes as a vein swells up. Grace flashes a grin and thinks, "This is it, this is for me." Kanan has that look, he's begging her to take her final role. Yoji Amezaki and Ria are still tucked in when she mutters in her sleep that the gentleman is unbearably cocky. Then both of them shoot upright, screaming like crazy. Yoji Amezaki quirks out and asks what's happening this time. She just shrugs and admits she has no clue, then tells us to go check it out. They sprint for the exit. Yoji Amezaki is freaking out because he's convinced the weather cannon is a real killer, and now he's here to attack her. While they walk, the man suddenly erupts, yelling that he's finally found her. And it smacks Ria right before Yoji Amezaki yanks her hair back, saving her from the blow. The man bursts into laughter and roars, "It's incredible," as raw strength floods every inch of his body. They stare, then their faces light up as they recognize the old man. Kazumi charges over and calls out to the gentleman. He spots her in next to nothing, freezes in horror, and demands if she's okay, then they bolt to safety. On the run, Kazumi tells him she's fine, but the slimy stuff and other barriers are already busted, and the enemies are smashing the first floor. Edgy S on edge, convinced the slimy and the others are still safe. She blurts out that they're right in the middle of a fight. Somehow they only busted through because the numbers are on their side, yet their skills still hit harder than the enemy S. Then she insists Slimy and the others will crash in and join them the moment she finally wakes up. Ria tells Yoji Amezaki, "Me and Kazumi will deal with the enemies up here, just handle Futaba on the second floor," and Yoji shoots back, "Are you sure you two can take it on together?" Ria jabs a finger at the old man and grins. If he's her opponent, that's fine. Then she blasts in with an instant fire strike. Yoji Amezaki drifts away at a slow pace, and then he nods like, "Yeah, that was a damn good shot." Then he collides with Kanan, and she blurts that she's finally tracked him down. He grins and drives her knife straight into his stomach. He drops to one knee with a sharp groan, and Ria rushes over, panicked, demanding to know if he's okay. Yoji Amezaki waves it off, says the wound isn't deep at all, and tells Ria to look after Kybra and the others. She's about to argue, but Kybra smashes into her from behind. She slips the hit, and Yeji can't help thinking, yeah, this is okay, because if he tells Ria, she'll spiral with worry. The pain bites like he just swallowed a whole pile of ice. He jerks, shivering, and then a voice snaps in. That's not what we expected. Grace bursts in and announces it. This magical blade's name is **** blood rain ****, and it can slice through any * kind of matter like it's nothing. As he thinks, Grace leans in and says, the power of the human race is fascinating. Yoji Amezaki jolts upright and snaps, who are you? Grace smirks and answers, Grace. And he drops the truth, he comes from a humble demon tribe. Yoji Amezaki snaps to the truth, this isn't just a tribe, it's demonic. Then he demands, did I hand the relics to Rex and Cyber? The answer hits hard, yeah, but the ones we made aren't like yours. Packed with flaws across a bunch of fields. So he turned them into his willing guinea pigs. Yoji Amezaki starts to snap, roaring that human life is his and his alone. Then Kanon slips up from behind, calling herself his opponent, and she slashes in with her knife, cutting just past his neck. Yoji Amezaki shakes all over and gasps that if it had dipped just a couple more centimeters, it would have been deadly. Grace shoots Kanon a look and he just smirks back like, I know you can't kill him. With a dead-eyed stare, she tells him she'll make sure she doesn't miss next time. Yoji Amezaki realizes that if it fails, he's done for, so he swallows his fear and obeys his boss's orders. He keeps pummeling, he scrambles to dodge every hit he can. He realizes she's way faster than last time and he yells at her like it's out of control. Never mind that she didn't even tell him the demonic tribe gave him something in return. She just shrugs and asks, so what if that's true? Yoji Amezaki roars, didn't you hear me? These relics aren't done yet. And then it hits him, what if he's next, the one they use as their guinea pig? She shrugs it off and says, it doesn't matter. Then she grins and admits that this medicine made her stronger, so yeah, that's why. She'll do anything to get that medicine back, no matter what it takes. Yoji Amezaki panics and blurts her name with desperation, but Ria, shouting from behind him, snaps that talking to her won't change a thing. Ria shrieks that the relic's darkness has already swallowed this girl, and Yoji Amezaki decides he's not buying it, at least not today. He's determined no matter what, he'll never let himself run into Kan and end up sick again. He still remembers the way her eyes lit up as she held that candy. He suddenly remembers and ransacks his pockets, then yanks out a sweet, shouting that he'll give her candy if she finally snaps out of it. Kanon strikes again and again, steamrolling right past his words, grilling if Yoji Amezaki has lost his mind. Then Yoji gets knocked and realizes reality tastes way less sweet than their candy. Grace tells him it's pointless, no matter what he tries to do, she has him totally in her grip. Yoji Amezaki shakes uncontrollably as blood pours out of him, shocked by how much there is, his mind slipping out of focus. Then he stares at the red on his palm and somehow convinces himself he gets it. Grace tells Kanon this is it, her shot, and Kanon nods as she steels herself to strike. Yoji Amezaki just stands there, already convinced there's only one way to pull it off. He snatches her knife with bare hands, then cranks his body-strengthening magic to the absolute max now that he's got the blade in his grip. Kanon, vampire through and through, sinks his teeth into her neck, and in the blink of an eye, her eyes snap open. And he crumples to the floor. Grace shrieks, what are you doing? You have to kill him. Kanon bursts into childlike tears, flings the knife aside, and blurts that he doesn't want to hurt this man. Yoji Amezaki swears she's finally snapped back to reality, his veins pounding as the power of the real relic takes hold, because in his head there's nothing left now but mercy, and he's charging in fast. Then he slams into Grace, sends her crashing to the ground, and rips her mask away as she hits. Ria strides up to him and declares that they've already wiped out every single invader who dared to come for them. Then she jerks to a stop, panic choking her words as she blurts out, this can't be happening. Yoji Amezaki snaps, what happened? And the moment he's close, you can feel it. This guy is absolutely oozing magical power. She jabs a finger at Grace and declares that only humans can wield the same power as the master. Yoji Amezaki can't stop wondering if anyone else exists besides him. Then Grace lets out a few shaky breaths and admits, this was a terrible mistake. He snatches his mask back on and declares with a grin that he didn't just spot his real face, he also felt his magic, just like the human race always does. Yoji Amezaki swears the people in this world have been dead for thousands of years, like he somehow got dragged here from another world too. Grace thrusts her hand forward and the knife Kanon was gripping rockets straight into his grasp. He leans in and tells Yoji Amezaki, don't you ever forget, I'll repay you the same way someday. He snaps his fingers, boom, he's gone in the blink of an eye. Yoji Amezaki and Ria are left standing there, staring with terrified, worried faces. Later, Rose rises and declares she'll handle Kaibara and his subordinates herself, and Yoji Amezaki admits he's putting his faith in her. He shoves the bottle into her hands and she blurts, "What is this?" He grins and says it's just leftover bathroom water, something that'll scrub away the poison's side effects. Rose says, "Whoa, this thing's expensive. Is it really okay to give it to them?" Yeji nods, "Yeah, but only because it was used by demons." Right then, Ria steps in and declares, "I finished sealing the curse." Yeji exhales, "Great job finally." Yoji Amezaki can't contain his excitement. Now that Grace knows where he's hiding, he's sure he won't be able to disappear in this world much longer. Couple days after the attack, Kanon slid into the room and sat down at the table with him. She tells Yoji Amezaki that the sauce he swears is just ketchup tastes incredible, and now the Kanon sits safely under their guard inside the shelter. She downs the ketchup like it's nothing, then turns to Yoji Amezaki and begs for more because this can is already empty. Ria wipes her mouth and Yoji Amezaki just smirks, saying he knew she'd love it. He pulls out even more and goes, "See, I made more." They crowd around like, "What is this?" And he snaps back, "I don't even get how it works. I just tried making another bottle in the gourmet area and yeah, I still have no idea." Yoji Amezaki blurts that she's totally into him, points to the whole bottle, then chokes on her own saliva and stares at it like it's pure love. She digs into ketchup with spoons and tells Yoji Amezaki it's a good job celebration. Then Ria snaps in outrage at how rude that is. Yoji Amezaki just grins and says he's got a whole portion set aside for slimes too. Kanon snaps that Ria drives her insane and no matter what Ria tries, this win was already hers. Yoji Amezaki handed it to her. Then Ria starts trembling, rage shaking her from the inside. With tears streaming down her face, she whips around to Yoji Amezaki and begs him to say something to her. He warns that piling on ketchup is bad, but then someone asks, "What if the Kanon is ketchup?" And he just stares like, "You're not getting it. This is a person who loves ketchup so hard they drown everything in it." Kanon swears the nickname fits her like a glove, so right then, she's a full-on ketchup girl, and she even asks if it isn't supposed to be an honorary title. Futaba zips through the cleanup with a bright grin, telling everyone to hand the mess over to her. Then right then, Ria steals in and kisses Yeji. She scoops Yoji Amezaki into a tight hug on the bed while Kanon stays on watch, blurting his name. Then Yoji and the others jump in fright and she grins, "Don't worry, it's Kanon's turn," so Ria steps aside. Yoji Amezaki shoots Ria a mental apology, swearing it's all for her strength, and Ria just waits, obedient as ever. Meanwhile, the daily kissing time Kanon gets its newest add-on. Kanon snaps his mouth shut on his shoulder and starts biting down. Everyone gasps in horror, and as he keeps sucking blood, Yoji Amezaki's look starts to warp, while Ria grabs him and demands to know if she really doesn't have to go. The Kanon bursts from her and barks at Ria to shut her mouth, because she's convinced Yoji Amezaki really likes her flat chest, so she marches right up to him and asks him straight. She reaches for him, trying to pull him close, but he just freezes there without a word. Flat chests are the beauty standard here, so the Kanon position can't be questioned, and Ria blurts out how sorry she is. Ria barges in mid-scene and snaps at Kanon that the master couldn't care less about her ironing board, then she shoves the focus onto Yoji Amezaki instead. She snaps back, "Didn't you already think I lost?" And then she fires a bold grin. Nope, Yoji Amezaki is on the other side. Kanon explodes, shouting that this whole idea is nonsense. Men usually go for small breasts. Then Ria turns to the master and demands he say it straight, that he likes big ones. Kanon snaps back, saying she's wrong because Yoji Amezaki clearly prefers small breasts. Slimy smacks both of their heads to shove them off him, at least that's what he tells himself, and then the thought hits hard. Did he really just force two people who were never meant to cross paths? Right now, goblins trudge through the forest, hunting for food, until one grabs a dried fruit, squints at it, and grumbles that there's nothing worth taking here. He's like, "Look, just the three of you out here in the middle of the forest, you'll starve and you'll never find a place to sleep," and he's baffled that he doesn't even recognize who you are. Your magic is so brutal it keeps everyone at arm's length, and he can't get closer at all. Then they spot a pack of wolves and instantly cram into hiding, freaked out, like, why are they even here? They decide they can't keep quiet and run to tell the Master Eagle, sprinting to their hideout and charging straight up to the headmaster. The eagle's an old man planted before this huge ball, and they all shout with the wolf pack leader, "We're starving." Then they just lock onto the same thought again and again. Ria is locked in negotiations with Yoji Amezaki, telling him they have to beef up their defenses, while Slimy's out there grinning and chugging happily from his bottle. Yoji Amezaki keeps repeating herself, pushing, "You mean searching under the second floor?" But she snaps back, "No, that's not it." She's talking about a surge in the number of people stationed to guard their shelter, and Futaba carries on like always, clearing the table. Ria bursts out that the moment they got attacked, she knew there weren't enough of them, and if someone stronger came swinging, they'd get crushed. Yoji Amezaki nods and says, "Yeah, it's exactly that, they've only got a couple strong fighters." Then he tells them to hunt for allies, and they're all in, pushing the idea of gathering everyone who wants to team up. The army of man. Yoji Amezaki snaps, "What kind of human army is that? Why does that confuse me so much?" Ria's voice cracks as she admits it's all because he's in an army with a master at the top. Then she turns to Yoji Amezaki and asks, "Don't you like it?" He shoots back, "That's not true. Don't worry, the name's fine," but the moment it hits his ears, his mind snarls like it belongs to a demonic army. Then he leans in and asks, "So what do you need from me?" Ria snaps back that Yoji Amezaki doesn't have to lift a finger. Then Kanan jumps in, grinning, saying it's totally fine if he does nothing. She swears that she and Ria will handle everything, and Yoji Amezaki can't buy it for a second. All he's been able to offer the human army is a warm bath and a full stomach, and now he's starting to question whether he's truly in charge at all, or if this whole command thing is just paper thin. His schedule is locked in. He wakes up, grabs breakfast, talks with the girls, crushes lunch, crashes into a nap, takes a stroll, then caps the day with dinner. Bitter thoughts swarm his head. Am I really useless? And Kanan drops the question, "What's wrong?" He fumbles out, "I'm fine." Then they finally move off and leave it all on him. They're walking away and handing him the choice to leave this place. He shoots them a wave, a grin spreading fast as he thinks, now he's got even more time to train. He trains with Slimy, sprints, meditates, and fires, then right at her. Then he pleads, voice trembling, for forgiveness, right as Ria storms up to him and tells him they've finally found fresh recruits and the army's waiting outside. He steps out and spots the wolf pack's leader, then the eagles show up right behind them, and it's Kanan. He tells Yoji Amezaki thanks for hanging on. One of them represents that he's an eagle from the goblin tribe, while Yan is tied to the wolf tribe. Kanan tells them both he wants them to swear allegiance to Yoji Amezaki, but Yoji just stares inward like, "Why can't I feel any loyalty in them?" Yan says he really thought he'd finally get to meet a member of the legendary human race, and the letdown is hitting hard. Oral just shrugs and says their expectations were way too high. Yoji Amezaki awkwardly mutters to Ria, asking if she's sure they want to join. She thinks for a beat, then blurts out, "Yeah, that's kind of weird." Ria tells them she spent 2 whole hours gushing about how amazing Yoji Amezaki is, and then whispers that maybe she just wasn't enough. She dips her head and blurts out, "I'm so sorry, I never saw it coming. I had no idea they'd turn into rebels." Ria blurts out that she should kill them both. Panic explodes in the room, and Yoji Amezaki blurts, shaking, that there's no reason to kill them at all. Since Ria used to be a knight, she sometimes treats life and death like nothing, so he'll step in to explain, and then L turns to Ria. He says he wanted to swear allegiance because he's in awe of her strength, but the second it's about pledging to him, that's a whole different kind of story. He laughs, then snaps that he'll accept nothing but Kanan. These people are a wolf tribe, and they'd rather die than follow some dumb finger, and the anger in him boils over at every word. Yoji Amezaki asks Ria if she remembers handing it to him, and the second she gets it, the truth hits. She starts talking about the magic seal ring, now restored to full power. She shoves the rings into his hands, he snaps them on, and a fiery thought races through him. With this, he can seal nearly 100% of the magic. He tells him, "If you impress me, I'll show you the full power of the human race," then leans in and asks, "Do you recognize me?" He smugly claims he only ever sees the magic of a B-rank adventurer, and no matter how hard he tries, he swears he won't be shocked, unless the fun part is right there with him. He says she'll never measure up to Ria, and then Yoji Amezaki snaps his hand up and hurls a fireball. That fireball swells bigger and bigger until it's the size of a bomb, then detonates above them, sparking pure terror as they blurt, "Wait, is this really the legendary fire magic?" Oral snaps, calls him a liar, and insists he only got that ring from Ria, then turns around and says it might actually supercharge his magic. Yoji Amezaki admits he completely misread it all. This ring is draining his power, and when Oral turns away, he declares he never wants to hear a word from him again. Oral grins and shoots the question, maybe he'll pull off magic without that ring. Yoji Amezaki stared at him, then the doubt hit, because if he goes through with it, the entire forest is going up in flames. He won't answer at all. Oral swears you can't do that, so I know he wasn't lying. The magic didn't come from him, it came from the ring. Then In says he was this close to getting played exactly like that. Yoji Amezaki can't shake it. Ever since he started using the ring, it's become second nature, and now he's staring at the real problem. How does he make everyone believe he's human? Orel blurts that he never saw a ring this powerful coming from Ria, then demands to know if she truly used a high-level magic jewel. And when Yeji's lost, Orel shoots back indignant, so you really don't know anything. Yoji Amezaki gets told magically that jewels are born from crystals packed with magic, and they unleash immense, wildly different powers, but he shrugs and calls it nothing more than a stronger magic stone. Orel tells Ria they're finally ready to hand the legendary magic stone to the goblin tribe. Then he blushes all over and blurts that he wants her to accept him too, because yeah, it's a giant ball. They stare, they wonder, and just like that, she shows up, shining like a magical jewel. Then the ball vanishes from his hands in a blink. The In snatches the ball out of his hands, and as panic spikes through him, he blurts, "What are you doing?" Only for the In to smirk and calmly say, "It's mine." He claims that the magic jewel first belonged to the wolf tribe and they only ripped it from them, but Oral doesn't get it. His father stole from them first, and that realization hits him hard as anger starts to boil. Yoji Amezaki blurts and shouts like, "You're not doing it again." Then his grandfather stomps in as the one who started it, and Yoji yells, "What nonsense, it was my grandfather." Because somehow this jewel has been tripping everyone up for a long time. Conan snaps at In to stop acting so rude by Yoji Amezaki's side, and when Yoji pleads, "Forgive me," he blurts that he only wanted to give her this jewel. Oral erupts, screaming that it's disrespectful, this stone belongs to Ria. He's furious for a reason. Why is this guy trying to hand it over to a punk? Oral rages that he won't let him trash talk the canon like that and then hits back hard. Jewelry has no place on cow udders. Ria grins and says she'll just kill them, but Yoji Amezaki clamps down on her. Then he whips around to Canon and demands, "Can you hand me this stone?" She shoves it into his hands and yells, "So what are you gonna do with that while we're still fighting?" He shoots back, "If I can crack a real solution to this mess, maybe they'll finally trust me." Yoji Amezaki lets out a sudden sneeze, and boom, the stone snaps in half from it. Then everyone freezes in stunned silence. In disbelief, he insists it's impossible that a sneeze shattered this stone. Does he really think that makes him human? He fumbles out an apology for smashing something crucial, but everyone shrugs it off like, a fight already means you've lost. Yoji Amezaki claims that if the answer is trapped inside this stone, then the fight is basically over. Soin drops to his knees at his feet, yells that the wolf tribe wants to team up with the human army, and begs to be accepted. Right away, an eagle drops beside him and tells him the goblin tribe wants to join their group too, while the wolf flops onto its back, bares its belly, and shows full trust because meeting a real person like him is a massive honor. Yoji Amezaki stared at the shattered stone, biting his doubts as he wondered if it was safe. Ria watched him like he was shining again, and then, boom, a pack of goblins and wolves rushed into the human army. They all crouch in the bushes, panicking, and yell at Yoji Amezaki that everything's totally normal. Then they spill every detail, and Yoji Amezaki can't help but think, that's kinda strange. They're trying to forge an alliance, and the stakes feel huge. If the human army keeps swelling, a showdown with the Imperial City is basically inevitable. Yeji swears she's finally figured it out. Maku Village sits right between the shelter and the Empire City, and Yeji knows uniting with them is the key. Yoji Amezaki says if that's true, maybe we should head there. Ria fires back, it's a tiny village, only 500 people right in monster territory, so adventurers from the capital are always showing up. In Maku Village, everyone's bundled up in raincoats and headscarves, and Ria's like, wait, that's not right. She swears she saw a much livelier place the last time she came. And bam, someone yanks her attention, calls her name, and orders her to come here fast. Ria whirls around, spots the teacher, and fires off, "We haven't seen each other in ages." Then she asks if he got her letter. He smirks and replies that something huge is about to hit them any day now. He tells her to stop pulling away, saying if she'd said something sooner, they could have tackled it together. Then she apologizes, explaining she was stuck dealing with issues and couldn't reach him, and Yoji Amezaki doesn't let anyone in. He leans in and asks Ria who she's been talking to, and she flashes a smile, urging her to introduce him. She jabs a finger at the black cat and declares, "That's the head of Maku Village, Rachel." She claims she learned her magic back in the Imperial City. When she says it, Yoji Amezaki just freezes, staring in total disbelief like his brain can't process a single word. Inside, the cat blurts out that the place feels kind of rundown and empty, then lets him settle in like he belongs. Ria bustles with tea, and all around the cat, heaps of mouse and fish toys are scattered everywhere. Rachel is rolling a ball around, and while she's at it, she cracks that the man's making a weird face. Because he's a cat, he won't need normal furniture. Yoji Amezaki just can't stop wondering what that's all about. Yoji Amezaki challenges, "Do I really know I'm human?" Rachel shoots back, "Of course, he understands." Then it hits you fast, something about him feels totally off. So Yoji demands, "Then how do you think I see myself?" Yoji Amezaki shoots back that he's a cat, and he claims even the great sage Rachel pales beside a human face. Then Ria adds that, at first, the teacher was none other than the captain of the knights in the Imperial City. She commanded the strongest knight squad, and the great sage Rachel's name echoed everywhere. Rachel winks at you and claims she's the most beautiful girl in the Imperial City, then sighs because she can't flaunt that gorgeous figure. Yoji Amezaki muses that the prettiest girl in the Imperial City still somehow outshines Ria. Then he blurts out the big question. How in the world did she end up wearing a cat's form while Ria pours tea for everyone? Rachel blurts that something happened. Then the room goes deadly quiet while that cat dives in and starts devouring the food, and Yoji Amezaki can't believe it because instead of focusing on the most important thing, she just said something happened. He starts to wonder if he should dig for more, and then Rachel says, like clockwork, that Ria's milk tastes unbelievably delicious. Ria smiles and thanks her. Then Rachel digs into the letter talking about the alliance with the human army, while Yoji Amezaki is left totally baffled, wondering how they ever ended up here. Rachel rises fast, eyes sharp, and says she can't treat this decision like it's small, because as the village's leader, she's not something they can claim, and choosing this means going straight against the Imperial City. Rachel licked her lips and shot back that this wasn't just her call. Yoji Amezaki swore it was true. If they teamed up, they'd ignite war with enemies everywhere, and that logic behind her choice, dead on. Rachel blurts that she can't say no because her sweetest student wants it. Ria beams and asks if that's really true, and Rachel admits she'll agree, but only with some strict conditions, especially for humans. She asks if this is his first time in the village, so what does he think of everyone here? After mulling it over, he blurts out that he's heard this village is packed with adventurers, so why does it look totally abandoned now? He demands to know if something really went down here. Rachel nods like she's letting a secret slip, then talks about the evil dragon, how the adventurer who saw it up close and lived to tell the tale named it. This village was forged right out of a hunting ground, so it's perfect for rookies, like how a horned rabbit is simple enough for beginners to snag, even if it costs a small fortune. But when evil dragon traces started surfacing in the eastern forests of the hunting grounds, people stopped showing up and the crowd thinned fast. Ria blurts it out, saying if that's true, why not ask the Imperial City for help? Rachel snaps back, that's impossible. She insists she already asked them, but Ria snaps back, there's no way, so where are the knights? Aren't they supposed to protect the citizens? Rachel shakes her head and snaps, it won't help, those undead just woke up and they're swamped. The moment Ria and Yoji Amezaki hear that, nerves hit them like a storm. Rachel says it looks like a place as tiny as Maku is doomed to go without help, and with those two slumped over like that, I can't shake the feeling we're right. A few days earlier, they spotted a tiny wild boar, and Ria swore she wanted to grab a grown one, then she accidentally hurt this poor little thing. She admits her recovery magic is still too weak. Meanwhile, the little boar is shaking like crazy, and Yoji Amezaki snaps that his magic has to fix it, then he casts a cure. The boar shot up and bolted, and Ria snapped, no way, but the second it happened, he felt relief flood his body until corpses started crawling out of the ground. They don't get it, Yeji's magic is so brutal it even woke up buried bodies, and she didn't expect that. Now Yeji blames him with full force because at this point, the undead should have already started marching for the imperial capital. Rachel blurts, what is it? And he panics, insisting it's nothing, until Rachel presses again, do you understand what I'm trying to tell you? Here's the first condition. If that dragon isn't killed, it'll soon wipe out the village. She says that if they team up with the village's saviors, the villagers won't just accept it, they'll take it way better. She says they should, then stops mid-sentence as both of them yell, demanding she spell it out for them, and Rachel snaps at them to not react that wildly. She tells him to kick things off by heading to a tavern on the city's outskirts to dig up intel about the dragon, even if the crowd of adventurers is way thinner than usual. They step into the guild and Yoji Amezaki whips his head around like, no way, this is unreal. Yeah, so this is what the adventurers' tavern looks like. Ria urges them to split up and hunt for clues, and Yoji Amezaki instantly nods along. Blonde whips her head back toward them, squinting like she's got a million questions. Yoji Amezaki strides into the tavern and can't stop thinking how awesome it would be to get his hands on even a shred of intel about the evil dragon. He steps up to the old man, blurts out an apology for distracting him, then leans in like it matters, asking if the man is truly a beginner and what that means. Yoji Amezaki blurts that he's obsessed with every last thing tied to the evil dragon, then the old man instantly gags, choking on his drink and spills it all. Yoji Amezaki awkwardly blurts, "Are you okay?" and begs for forgiveness, then snaps, "But can I ask someone else?" before cutting in with, "I'm not helping stupid people like me," and every single one of them immediately starts refusing. Ria and Yoji Amezaki slump on the steps, exhausted and worn out, while Yoji insists that no matter who they question, the answer never changes. Then Ria blurts that talking about the evil dragon is a taboo topic adventurers keep locked behind closed mouths. Yoji Amezaki figures there's nothing they can do, so he pushes for a trip to the eastern forest, right when a blonde woman suddenly shows up. She asks if they're the newbies who want to take on the evil dragon, and boom, 4 people step up right in front of them. Ria spots the girl right away and fires off, "Who are you?" Then she blurts out, "I'm sorry for being rude," before the moment even cools. She introduces herself as Nero, and standing right behind her, the massive Molozov looms like a threat. Right beside the baby stands Daytona, and next to him, long-haired and dangerous, Zoilus. These two are B-rank adventurers out of Mako village. Yoji Amezaki leans in and asks Ria if the rank B adventurers are actually strong, and she nods back, yeah, they're pretty solid, because rank B is the 3rd tier of strength, and Nero cuts in with a blunt, no-nonsense answer. If they're going to join their expedition, Yoji Amezaki can't help but cheerfully wonder if this is just another bump in the road. Then he leans in and asks her to spell out why they're so determined to kill the dragon. Nero leans in and asks, "Didn't you already tell me that?" And every single member of her team was born right in the village of Maku. Even though she's forced to roam the world, she still clings to love for these places, and she's convinced she can repay the village's debt by striking down the evil dragon. She beams and reaches out her hand, Yoji Amezaki thinks, so this is their little homeland, and now he's ready to help, driven by his own reasons. He grips her hand and tells her he'd be thrilled to work with them. Suddenly, Zoila snaps at Nero, he's against it. Nero fires back, demanding how they're supposed to team up with strangers they know nothing about, then Ria erupts, screaming that it's beyond rude. Little Daytona leans in and asks if they're really ready to take down the evil dragon, and Yoji Amezaki shoots back, "Yeah, we are." But as the words leave his mouth, bitter guilt gnaws at him, because deep down he believes it's his fault that the Imperial City never sent help. Mazalov leans in and says it's way too easy to talk, then fires a question. Do they even understand what the evil dragon can do? They answer that they've heard about the dragon's power through Rachel. They gasp, wait, is the great sage really asking them for help? Who are these people? Nero just grins and says, "Yep, it's exactly what I figured." Nero clenches his fist, rattles Yoji Amezaki's hand, and hurls the words that her eyes are lying. Because if she knows the great sage Rachel, her strength has to be wild, and Yoji can't help thinking, is Rachel's trust getting way too high? She says if the problems are finally gone, then let's split up the roles, and then she leans in like, "So, what are you actually good at?" Yoji Amezaki's nerves start to spike, because ever since his last interview he hasn't said a word about himself, and now he's trapped thinking, what am I even supposed to tell them? He can't even wrap his head around calling himself a person. Ria blurts out that she needs Lilia's forgiveness for butting in, then rips off her hood and reveals her real name is Lilia. Out of every kind of magic, she's insanely talented at restoring magic, and Yoji Amezaki can't help but wonder if Lilia is just a cover. She adds that she can also guard the rear or swing a sword in the front lines, and then she grins and says she's a healer. She clasps her hand and tells her straight up, not many people here can use recovery magic, so they're counting on her to deliver big. Zoilus grabs Nero's attention and begs him to stop trusting people so easily. Zoil snaps that anyone who claims they can do everything is usually dead weight, and Nero demands he shut up, only for Zoil to erupt, insisting he's not wrong. He roars that nobody can be certain they've got the great sage right, he has to confirm it himself. Then he spits that he can't stand that weakling and jabs his finger at Yoji Amezaki. He tells them, "'Cause I'm a swordsman, I can size up your potential just by staring at your hands," and then he sneers, "Judging by this, it looks like you've never lifted anything heavier than a pen." Suddenly, Yeji's blood turns to ice when she spots a girl who, after a tense beat, steps forward and unleashes a deathly, gloomy cry. Then Ria steps up, whips out magic, slams him face first into the dirt, and snaps, "Shut up." Nero blurts a worried shout at Zoila and she trembles as she snaps, "What did I do?" while Ria tells Nero to stop panicking and be grateful. She claims gravity magic will make apologizing to the master way easier for him, and Yoji Amezaki can't wrap his head around it. Daytona leans in, stunned, and blurts that she can't believe gravity magic exists right here, because in this country, only two people can use it, the great sage Rachel and the Empress Sarah. Ria orders Yoji Amezaki to apologize or else face the afterlife, and that flips his mind into pure terror because he's convinced she's trying to kill him, while Zoilus rushes in, apologizes too, and says he finally gets it, proving they weren't lying about talking with the great sage. Nero declares then Lilia will become a healer and turns to Yoji Amezaki, firing off, "So what can you do?" Yoji Amezaki is cranked up to max nerves, clueless on what to do next. Then Ria steps out and promises, "I'll explain." There's no single skill that makes a master great all by itself, and Yoji Amezaki lets out a shaky breath because, yeah, he's realizing he's got brutally mediocre abilities. Ria says it's simple, everything he touches turns to gold, so he's unstoppable and versatile, and Yoji Amezaki is left reeling in shock. Nero fires back asking what she means, and she leans in to say it. Whether it's magic or technical martial arts, Yoji Amezaki has no equal. She declares he's the perfect example for everyone here, and just seeing his face makes people drop to their knees. Yeji snaps her mouth shut, cheeks burning, and blurts out that it's not true. Because he's not a legend, he's totally ordinary, the most normal, steady, everyday kind of average. Nero tells her that if she's saying it, then it has to be the truth. Ria claims her master is 10,000 times stronger than her, while Nero fires back that they won't hold back, and this station wagon has way too much hype riding on it. She urges them to ready their weapons and push straight for the eastern forest, but Yoji Amezaki shuts it down. Too many obstacles are waiting in their path. As they push deeper into the forest, Nero snaps that they're right on the edge of the evil dragon's territory, so everyone tightens up, fully braced for what's coming. Yoji Amezaki slips through the forest in tense silence, then a massive wolf rockets at him with its jaws wide open. Nero plants an arrow, yells at Yoji Amezaki that this thing is a magical monster. Yoji Amezaki has zero time to react. Nero snaps her arrow straight into the monster's eye, and Yoji can only stare in disbelief, thinking she just landed it on the first try. Zoila surges forward in raw rage, whips his sword through the air, and cleaves the wolf monster's head clean off. Then another wolf rockets in from behind. He whips around in pure panic, and Mazalov, grabbing at it with his bare hands, lunges to stop the attack. Mulazev storms off and warns Zoil in a hard voice that he never should have dropped his guard. Then he breaks into a grin and thanks him for the help. Right then, Daytona steps out brandishing a magic wand and tells them to back off. She's got the rest. Ria fires off magic and crushes the leftover monsters into nothing, while Yoji Amezaki freezes with his mouth hanging open. So these are the rank B adventurers, huh? And then Ria snaps her gaze back to him. He whirls around and spots a thrilled Ria, grinning that she already handled them. Then Yoji Amezaki's eyes go wide as he finds a whole mountain of wolf corpses. Daytona blurts out in shock, asking if Lillian never told them she was a healer, and Zoiles just clucks and talks like he always does because yeah, she can drop him right to the floor. Even Malazov huffs that her moves are downright amazing, while Yeji's gut screams that it was just too much. Ria tells the master she's nothing, truly nothing compared to him, and that if he goes all out, the monsters get wiped out before he even blinks. Nero doesn't buy it, but the moment he hears that, Ria looks downright thrilled. Yoji Amezaki clocks it instantly, something's seriously wrong. Nero stares at him with that suspicious, "Did you blow our money again?" look. Then Zoiles slides up beside her and snaps, "Nothing's happening, don't stress." Zoil boasts that once they've got someone with Lilia's strength, they won't need a generalist at all, and Daytona jumps in saying it's a huge safety win to have someone like Lilia around. Meanwhile, every word stings and grinds down Yeji's pride. He jolts to his feet and shakes, telling himself he's still a universal no matter what. Then Ria whips around and says she can see his real power even if everyone else doubts it. Yoji Amezaki turns to her, tears blazing in his eyes. Ria says she can bury her power with her acting skills, and honestly she thinks it's a genius move, while Yoji Amezaki stares at her and realizes there's no end to her kindness. Then the trees start rustling and one of them yells that something magical is creeping out. Nero snaps into a full-on panic and screams it's an evil dragon. A colossal black monster charges into view and looms over them like it's about to crush them. He glares, opens his mouth, and growls so hard it blasts Yeji back a few meters. Then he hurries to cover himself because the smell hits awful while the whole place erupts in screaming panic. Daytona and Myro crack under the pressure, their clothes fly off, and they crash straight onto Yeji. Then Yeji snaps her gaze upward and catches Ria staring back at her with pure, sour displeasure. Yeji can't make sense of what just happened to everyone because the dragons suddenly unleashed a monstrous blast of magic and now they can't even stay on their feet for a while. Yoji Amezaki finally figures it out. He knows exactly what's going on. Yoji Amezaki realizes these people are way tougher than any normal adventurer, and still, the evil dragon wiped them out. Then it rises off the ground and rockets straight at them. Ria doesn't even blink. She snaps a burning plate into place way too small for the moment, and the dragon immediately starts to open its mouth, spitting out a blazing fireball. Ria freezes for a heartbeat as the truth hits, then a fireball rockets straight for them, and boom, a massive explosion rips through the area, blazing so hard people far away can see it. Yeji snatched Ria mid-surge and yanked her out of the blast's path, then snapped up an ice shield to block it clean. With a hard shove, he dropped her to the ground, and she immediately started apologizing for humiliating him, but he just shook it off, saying she always pulls him through, so yeah, it's okay. Ria blurts out that the dragon's magic is coming from a demon-made relic, and that claim slams straight into Yoji Amezaki's thoughts. As the dragon's fiery attacks chase them down, Yoji Amezaki grabs Ria in full panic and blurts, "Tell me what I have to do to beat him." Ria shouts back while they run. The evil dragon is already doomed, because it's been feeding on energy stolen from a cursed demonic relic. She says the dragon's power is tied to this, and if that's true, the master can crack the problem by blasting his good energy right in. Then Yoji Amezaki goes, "It's clear to me now," and tells them to try dropping his hair straight into his mouth. A raging dragon streaks straight at them and blasts fireballs the instant it launches, and Yoji Amezaki whips around and starts sprinting even harder because his brain keeps screaming that this can't be real. Ria snaps her head toward Yoji Amezaki and urges them to back off and swap strategies, but Yoji Amezaki shuts that idea down fast. He's stuck on the guys and insists they can't pull this off. Then his mind slams into the undead and he doesn't know where to go next until one wild idea hits, and even if it might fail, it's still gotta beat sprinting back. Yoji Amezaki slams the brakes mid-fight and screams to disappear. Boom, the dragon gets stamped right into the ground and Ria instantly realizes this is gravity magic. The relic's power comes from humans, so his body mirrors it. Then he slaps the treatment onto the dragon and it jerks, twitches, and starts growling like it's alive. With the dragon's dark power and brutal weight vanishing into thin air, Yoji Amezaki can barely stay upright. Then he shakily admits he did it, that he beat him. All that's left is a lifeless skeleton, and Ria rushes over, staring in awe as she rewards him. Later back at the house, Rachel tells them they crushed it, but Yoji Amezaki shuts that down fast. He says none of it was his doing, it all comes down to her, and he thanks her for sending Nero to back them up. Rachel claims Mahaku Village and the human army are in perfect sync right now, and if the royal capital even smells trouble, they'll fire off a message ASAP. Ria flashes a grateful smile at Rachel, praising the teacher's support as super encouraging, while Yeji gets swallowed up in her own thoughts. He can't stop thinking, who is Rachel, really? A legendary sage, a former captain of the Knights, one of the deadliest magic teachers, and somehow she's still just hiding behind a cat's disguise. He freezes, staring at her like she's the answer to a mystery, and Rachel grins as he asks, "So what's up? Why are you staring at her like that?" He fumbles his hands, flashes a quick "it's nothing," and panics inside, thinking God asking that was so stupid. Rachel grins and tells him, "If you want, I can show you," and he stares back at her, totally confused. Rachel snaps into a topless girl out of nowhere and tells him to look carefully right now before he loses the chance. Yoji Amezaki's face floods with a deep blush. He jolts out a silent scream, then snaps his forearm over his eyes as Ria stares at him, totally baffled. Rachel slinks into her cat form again right in front of everyone when Yoji Amezaki jerks his hand away, staring at the cat like he can't believe what he's seeing, and Rachel just smirks, saying, as expected, Ria's always great at picking men. She admits she's a bit hurt, then shrugs and says, if she were just a little younger, they could make this work, no problems at all, even if, yeah, she's stuck looking like a cat. Yoji Amezaki slumps there, completely baffled, while Ria snaps in fury, glaring and biting out, teacher, like the word itself is a threat. She grabs the cat's cheeks and yells, I don't care if I'm the teacher, you're not getting any eyes on Yoji Amezaki. She nods, says she gets it, then tells them to back off, because the human army and Maku village just sealed an alliance. The conquest is finally over, and it's like only a human could pull it off. Around the dragon skeleton, a crowd swarms in awe, marveling at it like it's pure legend, and deep down, they still can't accept that it was really him.